This entire village is left in absolute ruins, while our mysterious gunslinger calmly lights a match, stepping heavily through the ashes of the dead, only to find a badly burned survivor coughing up blood who desperately tries to swing a blade in revenge. Sutton merely commends the dying man's final burst of courage, telling him to deliver a message to the underworld before instantly putting him out of his misery, with a cold reminder of who ended his life. Now he rides off to find his next target. Sutton looks over his official land deed, revealing a quest to retire in Fairford, but his new homestead looks completely abandoned. Suddenly, an unseen sniper locks onto him, firing a deadly bolt with a sharp twang, easily dodging the projectile without flinching. As a local guard warns him to back off, prompting our hero to size up his challenger while secretly charging up a lethal spell, just as he plays dumb to buy time. Sutton introduces himself and claims his imperial deed, which immediately makes the guard highly skeptical, but our boy just plays it cool. So the guard points him toward Fairford, prompting Sutton to politely ask for his name before they seal the tense greeting with a handshake, leaving the sheriff wishing they never meet again. Riding into the dusty town, passing a massive stone monument of the leader who clearly has a massive ego, this local thugs glare at him with pure hostility as he casually rides down the main street, drawing worried stares even from the local kids, before he finally pulls up to the town hall. Inside, the local official inspects his bullet-ridden deed, shocked to see the legendary imperial seal on it, while Sutton casually blames the whole on a rowdy crowd, which the man laughs off as standard frontier behavior. Introducing himself as Jonas, the clerk offers a handshake, though Sutton notes he looks nothing like that massive statue. Jonas points to a portrait of his late father, explaining he was a veteran of the Mage Wars before offering Sutton a much safer place to live. But our boy insists he can handle himself. Reluctantly, the clerk agrees to show him around, prompting Sutton to ask how his father became leader, which apparently happened after surviving a legendary battle. Though Sutton knows that clash left absolutely no survivors, Jonas explains his dad faked his death during a massive flood, before ominously mentioning he still died of mysterious causes. Sutton notes the old man was lucky to survive, hoping his new homestead is actually decent as they finally approach the property. But Jonas suddenly gets incredibly nervous, hearing a woman shouting at some local thugs. Jonas immediately leaps off his horse, running to defend a woman named Ellie who is currently being cornered by a smug enforcer, though she refuses to show any fear, prompting Jonas to desperately demand they back off. This thug mocks Jonas for riding his dad's coattails, but Sutton suddenly steps in to claim his land, which only makes the lead thug laugh in amusement, prompting our boy to drop a terrifyingly cold threat before casually asking the woman if she needs help. Since she nervously denies being in any danger, our hero simply walks away to inspect his new home, leaving the entire group completely baffled by his attitude, until he suddenly screams out about his missing livestock, instantly freezing the thugs in sheer confusion. This little boy blurts out that these thugs stole their cows, forcing his panicked sister to quickly shut him up, but our protagonist's sharp eyes catch the slip-up, turning back to demand a repeat of the accusation, which has the terrified woman begging for mercy while the sweating thug tries to laugh it off, only for Sutton to step dangerously close, demanding to know the location of his stolen livestock before instantly crushing the man's fingers with a sickening crunch, leaving the arrogant enforcer screaming in absolute agony. This thug drops to his knees in agonizing pain as Sutton leans in to demand his livestock back, giving the terrified criminal exactly 3 days to comply. Later that evening, our hero settles into his rundown new cabin where Ellie and her little brother quietly approach him. Because the boy is terrified they will be kicked out, prompting his sister to gently hold him close while trying her best to soothe his rising panic. Though the kid remains absolutely terrified of their new landlord, Sutton calls out to Ellie, who nervously turns to face him, asking why she is squatting on Burrow's land, prompting her to explain they needed shelter, especially after the Leperian army destroyed their home. This revelation completely stuns our hero as he silently lights a candle, triggering a dark, fiery memory of the day he burned their village to ashes, leaving a young Ellie to witness the horror. This haunting memory of the young girl screaming amidst the burning ruins flashes through his mind, bringing Sutton back to reality as he stares at the siblings standing by his doorway, where he silently snuffs out the candle flame with his bare fingers, before leaning over the table to process the heavy weight of his dark past. Walking over to the kitchen, he tries to maintain his usual calm composure, politely offering to leave the cabin and find lodging at a local inn instead, while promising to sort things out with Jonas tomorrow to secure a new place. But Ellie desperately protests, insisting they must be the ones to leave the property. She immediately grabs her protesting little brother to make a hasty exit into the night, prompting our hero to stop them and suggest they at least stay until morning. Ellie stares at him in complete disbelief after his sudden offer of hospitality, as a savory pot of stew bubbles quietly on the stove in the background, prompting Sutton to cover the pot and let the meal finish cooking, before he turns around to face his nervous guests with a calm expression, inviting the hungry siblings inside to share a warm meal with him, which reveals a rich, steaming stew that smells absolutely incredible to the starving kids. So he serves them generous portions while the little boy eagerly thanks him, with our hero quietly flipping through an old journal during the meal, leaving the starving child to absolutely inhale his food with pure, unfiltered joy, finally asking with a bright smile where their landlord learned to cook so well. Sutton pulls out a basic guidebook on agriculture to help him start his new life, which immediately sends the little boy into a state of absolute, wide-eyed shock, as the kid cannot believe their dangerous new landlord has absolutely no farming experience. forcing our hero to sweat slightly while muttering that it cannot be harder than soldiering, only for the energetic boy to playfully run around while asking what kind of soldier he was, leaving Sutton to darkly reply that he was simply the kind who lived long enough to quit, before he asks where the boy learned to read in a place like Lepiera, which Ellie softly explains was a gift passed down from their very special grandmother, reminding our protagonist that everyone in this harsh frontier carries their own hidden secrets, as he quietly cleans up the table while reflecting on the fleeting comfort of a peaceful life. Sutton notes that resources are in short supply these days, while Ellie quietly inspects his old journal, carefully polishing a plate until it shines as they wrap up their tense dinner. Before he announces he is heading to bed after a long and exhausting journey. As darkness completely settles over the isolated cabin, both sides find themselves unable to sleep, with our hero staring blankly at the ceiling while wrestling with his own paranoia, as Ellie lies awake holding her snoring brother, completely paralyzed by fear since Sutton hates the idea of turning his back on two complete strangers. Just as she convinces herself that their mysterious landlord must have some sinister ulterior motive, fearing they might actually be spies sent to steal his secrets or slit his throat, while she remembers that legendary imperial seal, realizing he is no ordinary soldier. Both Sutton and Ellie lie awake in the dark, completely paralyzed by mutual paranoia, prompting the terrified sister to quietly slip out of bed to investigate the situation. Until a sudden, loud thud from outside the room startles her half to death, which also alerts our hero, as he lights a candle to investigate the disturbance. Slowly creeping down the dark, creaking hallway to find the source of the noise while Ellie panics, convinced her mysterious landlord is finally making his deadly move, leading them to suddenly cross paths in the pitch-black corridor with candles raised as the flickering flames dance wildly between them in the tense silence, forcing a startled Ellie to defensively demand why he is still wandering around before Sutton calmly explains he heard a strange noise and asks if she is all right. This two lock eyes in the tense silence of the dark hallway, realizing they both just got spooked by nothing before awkwardly wishing each other a good night, though Ellie still lies wide awake in bed while her little brother sleeps peacefully beside her. While Sutton tosses and turns in a cold sweat as a terrible nightmare begins to take hold, dragging his mind back into the dark, suffocating depths of his haunted subconscious where he stands as a terrifying harbinger of death amidst a sea of burning skeletons, forcing our hero to suddenly gasp awake as he escapes the horrific vision, only to be greeted by a glowing system screen warning him that the apocalypse is drawing closer. This next morning, Ellie is already up and working hard in the kitchen, quietly slicing some fresh bread to prepare a simple breakfast for everyone in the cabin. Ellie quietly sprinkles a mysterious powder over the simple breakfast she is preparing, while her glowing eyes and nervous sweat betray the dark deed she is committing as a toxic green aura slowly seeps into the fresh vegetables and cheese, leaving the guilt-ridden girl trembling with anxiety as she cooks over the hot stove. Though a sudden fit of coughing threatens to completely shatter her fragile composure until our hero walks into the kitchen while yawning and casually greeting his host, prompting a startled Ellie to quickly hide her panic and return the morning greeting, just as her energetic little brother bursts into the room to see what is cooking, forcing her to quickly explain she is preparing a proper meal using garden leftovers. Before Sutton notices her pale face and kindly offers to help her with the chores, Ellie quickly blames her pale face on a recurring illness before politely asking Sutton to sit down, while our hero mentions he left some extra ingredients in the pantry for them to use, but she nervously declines, serving a simple plate of eggs and bread salvaged from the garden, prompting Sutton to stare down at the meal with a quiet, thoughtful hum, as his sharp eyes narrow to inspect the food for any signs of foul play, leaving the terrified girl to swallow hard as she waits for his reaction in absolute silence. Sutton calmly takes a bite of cheese without showing even a hint of hesitation, with the little boy happily devouring his own breakfast alongside their quiet landlord before Ellie offers a tour of the property while her brother begs to feed his horse, which coaxes a rare, genuine smile from our hero as he gladly accepts their kind hospitality. Sutton finishes every last bite of his meal, leaving nothing but crumbs on his plate, before he wipes his hands and prepares to follow the siblings outside for a tour as the trio makes their way across the dusty yard toward a massive, weathered barn, where beams of bright morning light pierce through the gaps in the dilapidated wooden ceiling. Ellie admits they always planned to patch the roof but got completely overwhelmed by other chores, prompting our hero to inspect the empty wooden stalls where their livestock used to sleep, which she explains were once filled with cows that they milked every morning and night, before detailing how Whale's ruthless thugs ransacked their nearby garden during their violent raids. Sutton asks where they kept the stolen bull, prompting her to point toward the far pasture, leading his gaze toward a broken wooden fence that once secured their most valuable animal. Ellie points toward a barren, fenced-off patch of dirt, explaining that it used to be their garden, since they struggled to grow anything on their own in these harsh, unforgiving fields, revealing that lingering magical fallout from the distant Mage Wars has completely poisoned the soil, which prompts Sutton to ask how long these ruined pastures have been left completely abandoned, leaving Ellie to sigh deeply as she explains they simply could not find anyone to plow the earth before she looks up at our hero and softly begs him to take good care of the land, promising they will pack up their few belongings and leave the property by noon, as she quietly leads her little brother away to prepare for their sudden departure, forcing Sutton to watch them go with a heavy, conflicted expression on his face. until he pinches the bridge of his nose in frustration, utterly exhausted by his mounting guilt. Sutton suddenly calls out to stop the siblings as they begin walking away, prompting Ellie and her little brother to turn around in complete surprise as our hero explains that he is definitely going to need a new plow, which Ellie points out can easily be acquired from the merchants in town. Adjusting his hat, the landlord offers them a deal to stay in exchange for their help, leaving the stunned sister completely speechless as she tries to process his sudden proposal, but her energetic little brother immediately celebrates, shouting that he wants to feed the horse, forcing Ellie to look down at the boy's pure excitement with a softened expression. She turns back to Sutton, demanding protection from the Wolf King's bandits if they stay, which our hero readily accepts with a firm handshake to seal their new partnership. Sutton cheerfully suggests heading straight into town to purchase one of those plows, but his sudden proposal immediately makes the siblings freeze up in sheer hesitation, prompting our confused hero to ask why they are suddenly acting so reluctant, which forces Ellie to nervously admit that some terrifying incidents have been happening in town. Her little brother eagerly chimes in, describing gruesome murders with bodies left in horrific states, leaving Sutton to sweat slightly as he tries to process this bizarrely graphic warning, before the kid dramatically screams that a wicked witch or mage must be behind it. Ellie adds that the townsfolk hate them, while her brother almost reveals a secret about her class, only for the panicked sister to quickly muffle his mouth before he can say another word, forcing our silent protagonist to stare at them with a deeply suspicious and calculating gaze. Sutton decides to put off buying the plow, announcing he will head out to gather food first, which sends the little boy into a joyful celebration while Ellie watches with a relieved smile as a flock of startled birds suddenly scatters from the canopy of the nearby woods, where our hero quietly wanders deeper into the dense thicket to search for wild game only to pause as he senses a massive spike of raw mana lingering in the air, prompting him to summon a swirling vortex of fiery magical orbs that dance around his body, while the crackling heat of his forbidden power illuminates the dark, shadowed forest, unleashing a massive wave of energy that tests the absolute limits of his physical vessel, until his arm begins to sizzle and burn under the intense strain of the spell, forcing his eyes to throb with a terrifying crimson glow as the dark power consumes him. Sutton realizes the pure mana in this forest will make restoring his power incredibly easy, noting how different this lush greenery is from the war-torn wastes of his past before he suddenly senses movement nearby and prepares to strike from the thick brush, where a wild deer peacefully grazes in a sunlit clearing, completely unaware of any danger. Our hero suddenly lunges forward with blinding speed, kicking up a massive cloud of dirt, as he swings a fiery fist in a wide arc to catch the startled animal, laughing with a sinister, glowing blue eye as he easily corners his helpless prey, unleashing a devastating, flame-infused blow that instantly takes the creature down with absolute ease. This massive beast collapses to the forest floor with a heavy final thud, leaving our level 99 mage to confidently boast about his power as his system screen appears. Back at the barn, the quiet morning air is suddenly filled with the sound of butchering as Sutton uses his sharp hunting knife to quickly clean the freshly killed deer, which immediately draws the attention of the little boy who runs inside in absolute awe, prompting our hero to casually explain that he has had plenty of practice over the years before the curious kid asks if he is dangerous like the legendary soldiers of the Eternal Flame, leading Sutton to suddenly flick his wrist and send his bloody blade spinning through the air, until the weapon embeds itself perfectly into a distant wooden target with a loud thud, proving his point as the excited boy eagerly asks if he is a powerful class holder. Sutton sheathes his knife while explaining that the kid could become a rogue with enough practice, which immediately prompts the energetic youngster to beg for a turn to try it himself. Sutton hands the knife back to the kid, warning him that his sister is right about soldiering being dangerous, and the excited youngster immediately takes the blade with a massive, confident grin on his face, only to accidentally throw it straight through a nearby window with a loud, shattering crash, leaving the terrified boy to gasp in absolute shock while our hero silently processes the sudden damage. This landlord just sighs under his hat, dryly noting that they will have to add a window to their repair list, before he walks out to the yard where Ellie is busy gathering hay under the warm morning sun, showing off a farming manual he found to prove he is serious about restoring their ruined land, which completely stuns the young woman since he only just left to go hunting a short while ago. Our hero casually explains the deer is already prepped in the smokehouse, earning another heartfelt thank you, as he promises to protect their home from any corrupt soldiers who dare to challenge his authority. Our young hostess looks at our hero with a mixture of amusement and lingering nervousness, teasingly asking if he honestly expects a simple book to teach him how to farm, which prompts Sutton to sheepishly explain it was handed to him with his military discharge papers. But the young woman immediately snatches the manual right out of his hands, shoving a heavy shovel and a bag of seeds directly into his grasp, instead forcing our flustered hero to quickly protest that he has not even finished the chapter yet, before he laughs off his embarrassment, admitting he might have bitten off more than he can chew. Amused by his honesty, she asks how he ever expected to run this massive estate without her, prompting Sutton to mention he brought along a whole bag of extra books for her, instantly making her eyes light up with pure excitement at the thought of new reading material. Ellie remarks that Sutton is unlike any soldier she has ever encountered before, prompting our hero to quietly admit that leaving his bloody past behind might be for the best, as she playfully asks if he really expected his peaceful retirement to be this exhausting, leaving Sutton to sweat under his hat as he admits farming is far more repetitive than war. Ellie decides to make a detailed list of supplies they will need to rebuild the estate, suggesting they start by gathering materials to repair the dilapidated barn first, which prompts her to pull out a notebook and begin writing down their immediate needs, only for our sheepish hero to suddenly chime in and suggest adding a new window. This unexpected request completely catches Ellie off guard, leaving her staring at him in utter confusion, until the rhythmic thud of throwing knives echoing from the barn reveals her brother's chaotic practice. Ellie quickly notes down their building supplies on her pad while Sutton watches closely, but his eyes suddenly lock onto a patch of severe burn scars covering her wrist, prompting him to ask about the injury, which immediately makes her tense up in painful silence. Before she swiftly hands him the completed list and turns away to avoid his gaze, leaving our hero to quietly study the paper while planning his next moves for the morning. This next morning, Sutton heads deep into the dense forest to gather the necessary timber, holding a heavy iron axe as he wonders if normal people really do this manually as he swings the tool with a loud thwack, barely chipping the massive trunk, which makes him realize just how tedious manual labor can be for a retired soldier, sparking a dangerous glow in his eye as he decides to use some forbidden magic instead. Sutton unleashes a fiery punch directly into the tree trunk, shattering the wood without using any tools, sending the massive timber crashing to the forest floor with a loud, echoing thud, before our hero effortlessly hoists the entire giant log onto his shoulder with a single grunt. As he casually strolls back to the farm and greets the stunned siblings with a simple howdy, dropping the massive piece of timber right in front of them with a heavy, ground-shaking crash, which prompts our hero to smugly advise the kid to drink plenty of milk to get strong, leaving the excited youngster to eagerly salute and promise he will drink as much as he can, while Sutton watches them walk away, realizing this whole deed situation might actually be worth his time. Our hero gets straight to work repairing the barn roof, hoping to make a difference before he moves on as Ellie and her little brother happily work together in the fields, gathering hay under the warm sun. Sutton hammers heavy wooden planks onto the dilapidated barn, securing the outer walls with steady, rhythmic blows while Ellie and her little brother celebrate their hard work in the fields with a joyful high five. Exhausted from the intense manual labor, our hero collapses onto a soft pile of fresh hay, only for the siblings to walk in and find their landlord completely wiped out on the floor, prompting Sutton to lazily tilt his hat back and greet them with a tired, quiet sigh as Ellie looks around the newly repaired interior, completely amazed by how beautiful the space looks. But Sutton sits up and checks her list, reminding her that his work is not finished yet, which prompts the confused young woman to ask what else he could possibly add to these perfect stalls, leaving our hero to stare back at her with a deadpan, highly disbelieving expression, before he dramatically declares that they are going to need some actual cows to fill them. A new system quest pops up, tasking our retired hero with retrieving his missing cattle, which prompts Sutton to quietly vow to get his cows back before things get ugly. But his intense, fiery aura suddenly flares up, making the little boy complain about the heat, forcing our hero to quickly play it off by reminding him that planting season is already here. Sutton mounts his horse and tells the kid to grab Ellie so they can finally head out, leading the trio to ride their wooden cart straight into the dusty, quiet frontier town where our hero pauses to ask the siblings for directions to the local blacksmith, prompting Ellie to point down the main road and guide him past the nearby inn. Sutton approaches the rustic workshop, his imposing shadow stretching across the wooden entrance, before he steps inside to ask a muscular blacksmith named Jarrett for a heavy-duty plow. This muscular blacksmith welcomes Sutton to Fairford, though he politely asks her to call him John, as she warns him about the recent wave of unsavory events plaguing their quiet frontier town, which immediately prompts our hero to ask if she means the local bandits or the brutal murders. But Sutton casually shrugs off the danger, claiming every town has its fair share of crime, leading the blacksmith to reveal rumors of a dangerous witch lurking in the nearby woods, showing him a grim newspaper headline detailing 9 victims slain in a dark magic ritual, before she warns him to watch his back if he truly plans on settling down here, mentioning that the local mayor already told her about his run-in with the Wolf King's gang, though she notes that a suspicious group of heavily armed adventurers recently arrived in town, leaving our hero to suspect they are actually dangerous ex-soldiers looking for a fight. Jarrett gets back to business, estimating that forging a heavy-duty plow will take about a week, which prompts Sutton to order even more supplies, including woodworking tools and some replacement window glass. But their conversation is suddenly interrupted by an angry shopkeeper shouting insults at the siblings outside, accusing them of bringing blood money into town while throwing red liquid directly at them, leading our hero to quickly rush out and ask what is causing all this commotion, only for the angry little boy to blurt out that the locals think Ellie is a witch. Sutton processes this ridiculous accusation before telling the kids to follow him inside to settle things, stepping through the front door as the entrance bell rings out with a sharp chime, where he confronts the hostile shopkeeper directly to ask what her issue is with his companions, prompting the furious woman to scream that witches are banned and he will be kicked out too. Sutton slams his official military seal onto the counter, declaring that Ellie is under his personal protection, which immediately terrifies the clerk as she recognizes the golden emblem of a legendary royal knight, prompting our hero to demand the manager while the panicked woman scrambles to fix her massive mistake. This nervous shopkeeper rushes out to greet him, assuming a legendary soldier was sent to hunt the witch, but Sutton shuts down the rumors instantly, demanding a full apology and their completed order instead, leaving the sweating merchant to stammer out excuses about the recent local murders and Ellie's dark past. Sutton warns them to think twice before speaking, declaring she is protected by the eternal flame itself as he coldly orders them to stop gossiping and just pack up their supplies without another word. This trio finally leaves the store loaded with heavy sacks, earning our hero some enthusiastic praise from the kid, though Ellie quietly warns him not to defend her again, leaving Sutton to wonder what she is hiding. Ellie suddenly realizes Sutton is a knight of the Eternal Flame, a notorious witch hunter, but our hero quickly corrects her, explaining that he has officially retired from that bloody life, prompting the tense young woman to ask if he was sent to eliminate her, which he immediately denies, admitting he only wants to build a peaceful life instead of destroying things. Ellie silently processes his confession, her guarded expression softening as she realizes he might actually be sincere. Before she asks if he needs anything else since she and her brother can manage alone, leading Sutton to warn them to stay out of trouble while he investigates one last area, though Ellie only offers a playful smirk, refusing to make any promises about staying safe. Our hero sighs and walks toward the local saloon, muttering about how terribly that conversation went, before he decides to check inside the tavern to find a temporary place to rest. Sutton compliments the local tavern, prompting the bartender to credit their safety to Sheriff George, which immediately catches our hero's attention as he asks if there are other sheriffs with that name, hoping to reconnect with his old acquaintance before a loud crash at the entrance interrupts them, revealing a boisterous group of mercenaries calling themselves the Red Coral Adventuring Team. Their overly cheerful leader approaches Sutton to ask for directions, only to get a cold shoulder, prompting the man to nervously back off when our hero bluntly tells him to get lost, leaving the annoyed group to storm out just as a rugged older man enters the tavern, who turns out to be Sheriff George himself, taking a seat right next to Sutton. George praises our hero's quick handling of the pests, though Sutton admits he despises lawless mercenaries, leading the bartender to reveal that the group is searching for a legendary local Mage Tower. Sutton explains his missing cattle situation to Sheriff George, who chugs his beer and recognizes the thief immediately, but our hero has no interest in pressing useless charges and demands to know where the thief hides, prompting the sheriff to reluctantly reveal that the bandit camp is located at the Wolf's Den in the mountains, where a dangerous tamer named Haver rules over a massive pack of vicious beasts. George warns that while the town is usually safe, Sutton's remote farm makes him an incredibly easy target, before the lawman heads out the back to keep a close eye on those suspicious new adventurers, leaving the saloon doors swinging shut as our hero contemplates the dangerous task ahead, only for the bartender to chime in and confirm that Haver commands thousands of deadly wolves. Suddenly, a desperate scream echoes from the street outside, instantly putting Sutton on high alert. As he rushes out to find a hostile mob throwing heavy rocks at Ellie and her terrified little brother, Sutton's eyes glow with pure fury as he realizes the townspeople have crossed a major line, as a hostile mob of local kids and adults ruthlessly hurl heavy stones at the cowering siblings, prompting Ellie to swing her wooden broom with perfect precision, knocking the projectiles right out of the air, which only terrifies the superstitious children further as they scream about her using dark witchcraft. Ellie quickly begs Sutton to stay back, warning him that his interference will only make the situation worse, but a fanatical zealot steps forward, winding up to hurl a massive stone in the name of cleansing magic, leaving our hero to watch in absolute horror as the heavy projectile flies straight toward her, striking Ellie directly in the head with a sickening crack that leaves her bleeding and dazed. Sutton immediately lunges forward to shield the injured young woman and her terrified little brother, only for the aggressive zealot to draw his sword, accusing our hero of defending a murderous witch. Sutton intercepts the zealot's sword arm with blinding speed, shutting down his aggressive stance instantly, before lifting the man's accomplice by the throat to warn them that the war on magic is officially over, sending a massive wooden water barrel flying with a single devastating kick to emphasize his point, which leaves the hostile crowd completely terrified as our hero coldly orders them to run for their lives, prompting the panicked troublemakers to scramble away into the dusty streets while stammering out desperate apologies, while the stunned onlookers whisper in absolute dread, realizing Sutton is a powerful class holder. But our hero ignores the gossip to gently support the bleeding Ellie as she struggles to stand, only for the furious zealot to recover and charge back with his blade raised for a lethal strike, forcing Sutton to quickly push her aside and block the heavy blow with a loud metallic clang, as the fanatical attacker glares at him with pure hatred, claiming his violent crusade is entirely righteous. Ellie stares in absolute shock as her attacker continues his delusional rant about her witchcraft, while the zealot aggressively corners her, promising that her death will finally bring peace to the town, but Sutton suddenly intervenes with a blazing strike, shutting the loudmouth up instantly, leaving the terrified attacker coughing up smoke and assuming he has just been cursed, only for our hero to deliver a brutal follow-up blow that completely shatters his resolve, sending the fanatical swordsman crashing hard onto the dusty street with a heavy thud, where he desperately clutches a stone while whimpering about demons and dark magic before he tries to crawl away while screaming a prayer to the eternal flame, prompting Sutton to effortlessly snatch a flying rock right out of the air as he crushes the stone to dust, warning the coward never to speak that sacred name again. Sutton stares down at the bleeding zealot, warning him to back off before he loses everything as he coldly orders the pathetic troublemaker to get lost while Ellie watches from behind. But our hero suddenly grabs the man's head, reminding him that skulls are far more fragile than stones, leaving the terrified zealot to desperately beg for mercy under Sutton's crushing grip, only for Sutton to casually toss him aside like trash, completely ignoring his pathetic whimpering. before he delivers a heavy stomp to the man's chest to make sure the lesson sticks, standing tall over his defeated opponent while warning the silent onlookers to mind their own business, as he advises the superstitious crowd to think twice before throwing stones from glass houses, until an angry woman suddenly screams from the crowd, demanding he release her husband. Sutton looks up in disbelief as the furious wife charges forward to defend her pathetic spouse. Sutton points out that the husband is actually the one who endangered children by inciting a mob, prompting the furious wife to scream that our hero's brutal retaliation could have easily killed him, but Sutton coldly replies that a real witch would have done far worse as he stands over him, describing horrific curses that melt flesh from bone to make his terrifying point clear, before reminding the trembling woman that she is incredibly lucky Ellie is completely innocent. He warns her to keep her husband in check before walking away with the injured siblings, heading straight toward a nearby hotel to find a safe place to treat her wounds, where he admits that bringing them into this hostile town was probably a massive mistake. Gently cleaning the blood from her forehead, Sutton notes that the local hysteria has gotten much worse, prompting the quiet young woman to look up and ask him what he means by that. Ellie explains that the locals blame her for a girl's death, while Ben angrily defends her honor, prompting his sister to quickly quiet him down as Sutton listens to their tragic history. Before our hero asks if the creepy village leader is actually pursuing her instead, which she sadly confirms, while Sutton gently wraps a clean bandage around her bleeding forehead, dismissing the witch rumors entirely because he can sense she lacks the mana to cast magic. Though he apologizes for only having basic battlefield first aid skills, rather than actual healing spells, leaving Ellie pleasantly surprised that a legendary royal knight knows how to do anything besides destroy, as our hero pulls out a heavy bag, explaining they need weapons to defend themselves while he hunts bandits, handing a sharp dagger to the grateful young woman while offering to teach her how to fight, only to deny her excited little brother a blade because of his clumsy history with weapons. Sutton hands Ben a heavy blacksmith hammer instead of a cool weapon, leaving the kid utterly disappointed, as our hero warns him that he will not be rebuilding anything the clumsy boy manages to break before the scene shifts to the quiet hotel where the trio spends a tense, windy night, leading to the next morning when Sutton wakes up with a massive yawn, ready for action. Ellie offers him a warm breakfast, but he politely declines because it is finally time to hunt those bandits, prompting the worried young woman to warn him about the danger before he promises a swift return, adjusting his hat as he confidently steps out into the dusty morning air alone, leaving Ellie to sigh in disbelief, convinced their savior has absolutely no idea what he is facing, while her little brother jokingly remarks that the legendary knight might not be the brightest guy around. Setting the stage for a brutal confrontation as he heads toward the wolf-infested peaks, Sutton stands by the stable and decides that running on foot will actually be much faster than riding, admitting he is still a terrible farmer but knows exactly how to handle a few pests before he dashes through the forest at breakneck speed, leaving a trail of sparks in his wake, scaling the steep mountain cliffs with effortless leaps to reach the hidden bandit stronghold. Sliding right past their defenses, Sutton casually asks the startled guards if they know a man named Whale, prompting the armed sentries to immediately block his path and demand to know his business, though our hero just smiles, claiming the man is expecting him to discuss some missing cattle, which only annoys the guards, who warn him that he is lucky the Wolf King is currently away, leaving Sutton completely unbothered as he tells them they have very little time to cooperate. Standing alone before the massive wooden fortress, our hero prepares to tear the entire camp apart. Sutton sits quietly as a guard asks if he is an old friend of the thief Whale, prompting our hero to agree, while the guard warns that most visitors end up eaten by wolves until the cowardly thief himself steps outside, grumbling about not expecting any visitors today, only to freeze in absolute terror the moment his eyes land on our formidable hero. Our hero offers a chilling smile beneath his hat, casually asking how his old acquaintance has been, before he firmly grabs the trembling bandit's hand to remind him of their last encounter, whispering that Whale must be incredibly busy since he still has not returned those stolen cows, which prompts the panicked thief to laugh hysterically while trying to play it cool for his men, calling our hero a total idiot for walking straight into a dangerous mountain. But a sickening snap suddenly echoes through the camp as Sutton effortlessly breaks his finger. Whale rallies his fellow bandits, loudly accusing our hero of trying to steal the Wolf King's cattle, but Sutton remains completely unfazed, sarcastically asking if they know anything about the recent murders in Fairford, prompting Whale to laugh off the accusation, while his smug crew denies knowing anything about the crimes. Until a massive, muscular thug steps forward to ask about the identity of this bold intruder. This cowardly thief quickly explains that Sutton is just an arrogant new farmer, prompting the giant to loom over him, offering our hero a choice to crawl down the mountain before they inevitably break his legs, though Sutton coldly ignores the threat, asking if this brute knows where his stolen cows are hidden. Infuriated by the disrespect, the giant bandit winds up a massive fist to crush the arrogant stranger, only for our hero to counter with a devastating gut punch that completely shatters his opponent's ribs, leaving the massive thug writhing in agony on the dirt while Sutton sighs at the pathetic challenge. An arrogant bandit swings a massive battle axe while shouting a terrible pun at our hero, but Sutton instantly intercepts the attack by grabbing the loudmouth's throat with a sickening crunch, snapping his neck in a flash before dryly complimenting the guy's awful sense of humor, which leaves the remaining spear-wielding bandits completely frozen in terror as their buddy hits the dirt, prompting the desperate survivors to thrust their weapons forward, only for Sutton to catch them bare-handed before he effortlessly disarms the duo and cuts them down in one swift, brutal motion. leaving a nearby lookout to scream in absolute horror at the sudden loss of his comrades. This terrified survivor immediately turns tail and runs, desperately begging for mercy that Sutton simply does not have, as our hero easily catches up and grabs him by the collar to offer some assistance, sending the screaming coward hurtling off the steep mountain cliff to meet his inevitable end. Looking down from the ridge, our hero watches a fresh wave of angry bandits charge up, but he effortlessly ducks under their clumsy club swings without even breaking a sweat. Before grabbing both attackers by the wrists and channeling a surge of glowing red mana, which allows him to deliver a crushing double strike that sends them both crashing down, suddenly a massive muscular brute steps forward to catch his falling ally and challenge our hero. Sutton simply smiles under his hat, glad to finally face a worthy class holder in battle, as the giant barbarian roars in fury while activating a massive physical reinforcement skill, prompting the brute to throw a devastating punch backed by his own heavy mana flow, only for our hero to calmly coat his own arm in red energy to match the blow, shattering the giant's confidence with a brutal counterstrike that leaves him screaming in agony. This sheer force of their clash sends a massive shockwave ripping through the dirt, but Sutton quickly maneuvers behind the giant and charges his weapon with red mana, delivering a devastating blow to the brute's neck that shatters his collarbone in an instant, leaving the massive warrior to crash face first into the ground with a heavy thump, as our hero casually strolls over the fallen giant to confront the remaining thief, who can only stare in absolute horror as his entire backup gets completely dismantled, shaking so violently from sheer terror that he literally wets his pants on the spot. While Sutton leans in with a terrifying grin to ask about his missing cattle. Meanwhile, back at the quiet hotel, Ben eagerly eyes their savior's untouched breakfast plate, prompting his worried sister to wonder if they made a massive mistake trusting this guy. Ben looks completely clueless as his sister tries to figure out their next move, wondering if they can actually trust a retired knight who actively picks fights with bandits. But her little brother casually shrugs it off, convinced their savior is already dead anyway, prompting Ellie to sigh in frustration while the boy happily stuffs his face with food. Suddenly, a heavy knock at the door cuts their tense conversation short, alerting them to danger, revealing the creepy village leader standing right outside the threshold with a sinister look as Jonas offers a sickening smile while trying to sweet-talk his way inside. But Ellie immediately shuts him down, refusing to move into his house for the 100th time. This persistent creep forces his way past the door, warning her that Sutton is incredibly dangerous, while Ellie grabs a heavy wooden staff to defend herself from the corrupt politician. Ellie firmly points her broom at Jonas, demanding that the creepy village leader leave them alone, but the persistent politician argues that Sutton is a dangerous stranger who took over her home, which prompts little Ben to hilariously chime in that his sister actually thinks Jonas is ugly. Stunned by the insult, Jonas walks over to the table while claiming Ellie does not understand the danger before he casually sits down and starts eating the breakfast Sutton left behind. He glares through his glasses, warning her that retired knights are usually just bloodthirsty killers, though Ellie coldly fires back that a killer is perfect company for a rumored witch. She snatches the food away, threatening to expose his scummy behavior to the entire village, prompting Jonas to offer a fake apology while wiping his mouth with a smug grin, until the furious young woman grabs him by the collar and forcefully shoves him out. Ellie slams a wooden chair to the ground in a fit of rage, forcing the corrupt politician to back away and quickly make his exit from the hotel, though he cannot resist leaving her with a parting threat about those nasty witch rumors, before he slams the door shut, leaving Ellie to stew in her own dark thoughts. She sits quietly, wondering if their savior actually enjoys the brutal violence of war, as her mind drifts back to a tragic memory from her own painful past, recalling the horrific day her home was burned to the ground by ruthless invaders, when a starving young girl desperately crawled through the smoking ruins in search of food, finding a single fresh apple amidst the ashes and smiling with a brief moment of hope, only for a stray arrow to suddenly pierce the fruit right out of her hands. Young Ellie backs away in terror as a sinister, red-haired hunter approaches her with a wicked laugh, boasting that she only answers to the commands of the mysterious eternal flame, while Ellie desperately begs to know why they are destroying her home and slaughtering innocent people, prompting the cold-blooded assassin to simply raise her heavy crossbow with a murderous grin, ignoring the young girl's desperate cries that they are nothing more than helpless civilians, as the cruel hunter mocks her before Ellie grabs a discarded sword from a fallen victim, pulling the heavy blade free with trembling hands as she prepares to make a final stand, though the sheer terror of the situation quickly paralyses her with overwhelming dread, leaving her frozen in place as the relentless assassin lines up a fatal shot. Before the merciless hunter slowly squeezes the trigger to end the poor girl's life, Ellie stands alone with her broom, deeply troubled by her memories of the ruthless Eternal Flame Knights, believing that anyone serving under such a brutal regime must be a cold-blooded killer, until a sudden noise outside cuts her dark thoughts short and makes her call out for John, only to find our hero already back at the farm, happily praising his retrieved cattle, before he clears his throat to announce his incredibly swift return to the stunned young woman, who can barely believe her eyes as Sutton casually explains that the bandits were highly cooperative, while he gently asks if the corrupt politician Jonas was causing her any trouble earlier, prompting little Ben to run over with a heavy wooden harness to help their savior, which fits the cow perfectly as Sutton asks if they have enough rope for the plow. leading Ellie to suggest using a chain instead as they prepare to finally start farming. Sutton asks Ellie if she can teach him how to milk the cows now that they are back, but she quickly has to correct his terrible technique as they work under the sunset, only to stop when she notices severe, painful-looking burn marks covering his hands, which our hero quickly brushes off with a nervous smile, claiming he is just clumsy. Ellie does not buy the excuse and gently asks him to share his own story, prompting her to recount the horrific day her entire village was burned by the eternal flame, explaining how the ruthless royal knights hunted down any helpless survivors left in the ashes, leaving her and little Ben as the only two orphans to escape that nightmare. This shocking revelation completely stuns Sutton, who cannot believe the knights targeted innocent civilians, while Ellie stares into the distance, quietly harboring a deep desire for ultimate revenge. Ellie suddenly draws a sword with a sharp ring, swearing she will hunt down the eternal flame while her eyes glow with a terrifying green light as she vows to destroy their leader, which triggers a sudden system notification confirming Sutton has completed his retirement quest and delayed the apocalypse. Meditating in his room, our hero looks at his maxed out level 99 stats with absolute boredom, staring at his high doom point count while wondering what happens if that gauge ever fills up before cursing the developer of this bizarre system that none of the locals can even perceive, only to sigh in frustration when a brand new quest forces him to start growing wheat next. His mind drifts back 15 years to his original life in a modern, bustling city, recalling a rare camping trip where his older brother teased him for finally leaving his room. Though the peaceful memory is quickly interrupted by a sudden warning about a creepy crawly bug. Back in his original world, Sutton's friends immediately catch him trying to sneak a handheld game console, which leads to a playful scuffle as they remind him of his promise to avoid technology, prompting our annoyed hero to roll his eyes and retreat back to his yellow camping tent, where he grumbles about family bonding while preparing to pack his console away in his bag, only for a glowing purple summoning circle to suddenly manifest right beneath his feet, instantly dragging him into a chaotic, brutal war zone filled with clashing swords and screaming soldiers, while a nearby warrior is suddenly struck down by a massive, glowing shard of ice, leaving our terrified hero to rush over to the fallen man amidst the ongoing magical onslaught, as the dying soldier weakly explains that Sutton has been summoned to fight a losing war, before revealing that he was also pulled from another world many years ago. This dying soldier hands Sutton a mysterious red scroll, hoping it will help him survive this madness. But when our terrified hero asks for a way home, the man gasps his final warning, only for a creepy, top-hatted killer to suddenly appear and casually claim another life, demanding the valuable spell scroll while explaining that this entire world is just a game. Refusing to back down, Sutton unfurls the glowing red parchment to see what they killed for, instantly triggering a system notification as a basic fireball spell suddenly ignites in his hands, prompting the panicked young man to raise his flaming fists and warn the killer to stay back, though he is completely bewildered by the strange, warm energy crackling at his fingertips. Seeing his potential, the creepy assassin grabs Sutton's shoulder and offers to mentor him as a fellow player, before freezing his arm in solid ice to remind him that survival here requires absolute ruthlessness. Sutton pretends to agree to the deal, shaking the creepy assassin's hand to lower his guard, but our hero secretly channels his newly acquired fireball spell directly into their physical contact, leaving the arrogant killer completely stunned as he realizes he fell right into a trap, before a massive torrent of fire erupts, completely engulfing the screaming mentor in a blazing inferno. This brutal victory instantly triggers multiple level-up notifications, leaving Sutton to realize everyone here is just an NPC. While back in the present, our hero meditates on his bed until a sudden knock interrupts his thoughts, revealing Ellie at the door, politely asking if she can open the windows to let some cool air in, which triggers a painful memory of the day he stood amidst the burning ruins of her home, watching a helpless young girl wander through the ashes of a tragedy he could have prevented until he snaps back to reality, nervously giving her permission while trying to hide his deep guilt. Sutton covers up his guilt by claiming he was just focusing on his mana restoration, which prompts Ellie to invite him to town to help retrieve their new farming plow as they head out on a wooden cart, while Sutton asks about the local valley residents, only for little Ben to suddenly chime in about terrifying monsters called Grim and Specters. Intrigued by the mention of these mythical beasts, Sutton eagerly asks the boy for more details, leading Ben to excitedly describe giant, child-eating rock monsters and ghostly creatures that trap travelers until they finally arrive in town and meet up with their local blacksmith, Jarrett, who proudly presents a sturdy new plow along with the rest of their farming supplies. Sutton politely thanks the blacksmith before excusing himself to handle some mysterious business nearby, leaving the siblings waiting by the cart as he heads off into the bustling town. Sutton grabs some fresh groceries from a local shop while the nervous shopkeepers watch him warily, as Ellie jokes about their terrified expressions while they carry their food back to the cart, which prompts little Ben to eagerly thank our hero before his sister quickly tells him not to get comfortable. Before they head back to the farm where Ellie admits she has never actually grown wheat before. Reading from his farming guide, our hero assures her that the crop will easily survive the winter, until Ben excitedly runs over to present their massive bull to their new resident farmer, leading our amused hero to pat the beast and casually name his new companion Ferdy, though the friendly animal immediately licks his face as Ben runs off to help Ellie unload. Realizing that bribing the cattle with basic food will not keep them cooperative forever, he pulls out a glowing red mana stone to instantly win over his new bovine friend. Sutton feeds the glowing red mana stone directly to the bull, knowing all beasts crave its power, which instantly supercharges the massive animal as our hero straps the heavy wooden plow onto its back, sending the beast charging forward at terrifying speeds, while a stunned Ellie watches the dirt fly. As Ferdy tears through the field like a runaway train, carving a massive, chaotic trench behind him, Ellie can only stare in absolute disbelief at the absolute disaster zone left in their wake, before our proud hero casually announces that he and his new bovine buddy finished the plowing, prompting the young woman to point out the incredibly crooked, messy zigzag patterns covering the entire field, though she quickly sighs and admits this is exactly why he needs her around to farm. Leading Sutton to sheepishly ask if she really found his lightning-fast work to be that bad, only for Ellie to lock eyes with him and deliver a brutally honest, single-word confirmation. Ellie takes the lead with their massive bull, promising to teach Sutton how to plow correctly this time, while our hero quietly admits he has never actually seen a bull plow in his entire life, hoping this quiet, simple farm life can last just a little bit longer before reality catches up. Later that evening, Sutton finally gets the hang of milking their cows under Ellie's watchful eye, but he quickly realizes they have way too much fresh milk with absolutely nowhere to store it, especially since the superstitious townspeople refuse to buy anything from a girl they deem cursed, leaving them with a mountain of dairy that will spoil before they can process it all, prompting Ellie to admit she never expected a guy like him to get so into farming. Which makes our hero pause and curiously ask what kind of man she thinks he is, only for Ellie to claim he seems like a soldier who never wanted to fight in the first place. Sutton sighs and admits to Ellie that trying to live a peaceful retirement is surprisingly difficult, because war was simple and predictable compared to the terrifying uncertainty of everyday life, leaving him constantly anxious about the future until he finally found a chance to build something new. Only for little Ben to suddenly burst into the barn, warning them that the sheriff has arrived. Our hero calmly tells the kids he will handle it, picking up his bucket of milk. Walking out into the dusty yard, he greets Sheriff Wells with a relaxed nod, though the older lawman immediately notices the bucket, pointing out that the stolen cattle are back, prompting him to ask if they can step inside to discuss a serious matter in private, which leads Sutton to politely offer him a fresh drink while they settle into the house, before the stressed sheriff sighs in frustration, complaining that Sutton took things way too far with the bandits. Sutton looks genuinely confused, asking the sheriff what exactly he means by taking things too far, leading Wells to reveal that the two bandits were found stripped and tied up on poles, which our hero casually dismisses by pointing out they should not have stolen his dairy cows, though the lawman demands a reason not to arrest him after finding broken bodies nearby. Pouring a fresh cup of milk, Sutton plays dumb and asks if he'd really lock up a simple farmer, prompting the stressed sheriff to take a long, satisfying gulp of the fresh dairy drink, before conceding that the brutal deaths were likely the work of the notorious Wolf King. Wells warns that this dangerous leader will not let the loss of his men go unpunished, telling our hero to exercise restraint in the future, while secretly thanking him for the help as he departs with a friendly request for cheese next time, leaving Sutton to ponder his warning. Sheriff Wells bids our hero farewell, warning him to stay out of trouble for now, which Sutton casually acknowledges with a playful salute as the lawman heads back into the night, leaving the peaceful farm under the quiet, watchful glow of a crescent moon. Until Ellie approaches to ask about the visit, while they carry their heavy milk buckets, prompting her to explain that they need a proper cellar and a much larger tub to make cheese, leading our hero to ask what material they should use for this new equipment, which makes Ellie suggest stone as a cheaper alternative to expensive, hard-to-source iron, before she mentions an abandoned stone mine located deep within the western mountains. Hearing this, Sutton immediately turns around and prepares to head out into the dark, leaving a bewildered Ellie to watch him march off to fetch their new stone tub. Sutton heads deep into the western mountains, navigating the windy and rugged terrain to find the stone before using his enhanced physical abilities to launch himself up the steep, rocky cliffs, leaping effortlessly from ledge to ledge as he scales the massive mountain face, until he executes one final, powerful dash to reach the very peak of the ridge, where he pauses to admire the breathtaking, expansive view of the valley below. Turning his attention to the dark chasm ahead, Sutton peers down into the windy abyss, as he boldly leaps straight into the darkness without a single shred of hesitation, landing heavily at the bottom of the abandoned mine while igniting a bright fireball, which instantly illuminates a massive, sleeping stone monster blocking the dark cavern path, prompting our hero to smirk as he readies his magic for an easy fight. Sutton unleashes a powerful red energy blade, slicing through the solid rock with absolute ease, shaping the massive stone block into a perfect tub, while rubble rains down around him, leaving a beautifully carved stone basin sitting right in the middle of the dusty cavern. Though our hero immediately realizes he forgot to ask Ellie what size she actually wanted. Before he can dwell on his mistake, a sudden violent tremor shakes the entire cavern floor, prompting a sigh from Sutton as he realizes his noisy mining just woke up the locals, revealing two massive glowing rock monsters that tower over him with menacing purple crystals, which makes our hero wonder if these are the legendary Grimm that little Ben mentioned earlier. Staring at the glowing core, Sutton curiously asks if eating mana has made them smart enough to talk, before casually raising a flaming hand to playfully assure the giant beast he comes in peace. Sutton tries to play nice, offering a glowing mana stone to the massive rock monster to avoid a fight, but the greedy beast simply swallows the offering whole before immediately turning hostile, leaving our hero with no choice but to sigh and prepare for a little bit of violence. As he effortlessly leaps backward to dodge a devastating ground slam that shatters the cavern floor. Landing gracefully, Sutton charges up a blazing fireball, glad he does not have to hide his true power out here, before unleashing a concentrated stream of intense heat directly at the towering stone beast, which explodes against its rocky armor, leaving the creature cracked and smoking from the impact, prompting our hero to smirk as he realizes he can finally cut loose without holding back. This angered monsters rumble and murmur amongst themselves, realizing their opponent is far from ordinary, until one lunges forward with a furious roar, only for Sutton to eagerly welcome the challenge. Sutton charges a blazing sphere of fire, eager to finally unleash his full power out here, and hurls a massive fireball that lights up the dark cavern with blinding intensity, which streaks directly toward the nearest stone beast, threatening to reduce it to rubble. But the creature's glowing purple crystal core pulses with energy to absorb the impact, triggering a massive explosion that shatters the surrounding rock walls into countless fragments. Watching the dust settle, our hero prepares himself for the next wave of attacks, as a giant monster slams the ground to send a shower of heavy boulders flying his way, forcing Sutton to slide backward while charging up another blazing spell in his palm, only to find himself completely cornered by the towering beasts in the dark cavern. Amused by their coordination, he simply smirks and unleashes a devastating wave of flames to finish them. Sutton drops a massive, roaring fireball directly onto the towering stone beast's head, but a sudden memory of the kids makes him hesitate and reconsider his destructive power as the blazing attack connects with the monster's glowing purple crystal core, leading our hero to realize these wild beasts are just defending their home, which is proven when the giant creature happily absorbs the heat instead of shattering, prompting Sutton to realize they actually enjoy eating his high-level fire magic, making him chuckle as he remembers how terrified little Ben was of them. Deciding to try a completely different approach, our hero casually snaps his fingers in the dark, sending a tiny, concentrated spark of pure mana floating gently into the dark air, which immediately drives the massive stone monsters into an absolute feeding frenzy. Sutton snaps his fingers with a confident smirk, deciding to put his plan into action, which instantly gets the massive stone monsters excited as they reach greedily for his glowing energy, leaving the giant beasts completely mesmerized by the flame like they just discovered fire for the first time, as our hero teases them with the promise of even more power if they can make it worth his while. Eager to please, the massive creatures immediately start digging through the rubble to unearth a hidden treasure, revealing an old, heavy wooden chest bound in iron that was buried deep beneath the cavern floor, which makes Sutton raise an eyebrow in curiosity as he wonders what secrets could be locked inside, until the giant stone beast pushes the heavy chest forward as an offering for his fiery mana. Realizing they want to make a trade, our hero chuckles at how easily these monsters can be bribed, before his eyes glow red with excitement, glad he found a peaceful way to handle these giant beasts. Sutton holds out 2 glowing red mana stones, demanding the mysterious chest in exchange, which the giant rock monster greedily accepts, snatching up the precious magical treats, before pushing the heavy wooden chest forward to complete their bizarre little trade. Opening the lid, our hero peers inside to see what kind of treasure they uncovered, only to find a beautifully preserved purple flower that has been artificially grafted with pure mana, proving that powerful mages once lived in these mountains and taught the monsters how to trade. Though Sutton doubts any are still alive, since his massive magic display went completely unnoticed. Thanking his giant new friends, he prepares to head back to the farm with his prize, but not before tossing them a few extra mana stones, accidentally triggering a terrifying apocalypse warning. As the scene shifts back to the quiet farmhouse where a brand new day is just beginning, Ellie steps outside the next morning only to find Sutton sleeping soundly inside his giant new stone tub, which prompts our hero to wake up with a massive yawn, wondering if it is already morning, leaving Ellie to ask if he spent the entire night hauling this massive stone basin back home, before she points out that he completely forgot to measure if it would even fit inside, prompting her to sigh in exasperation, playfully wondering what they are ever going to do with him. As she hands him a warm blanket, noticing his habit of sleeping outside despite his excuses of overworking, warning him not to overwork himself before warmly inviting him inside because breakfast is finally ready. Walking into the cozy kitchen, Sutton reflects on how he has lacked safety, warm food, and peace for 15 years, while Ellie gently wipes little Ben's messy face as they share a quiet, happy moment together, making our hero feel incredibly guilty, believing he does not deserve this peace after his dark past in the war. Sutton's mind spirals as he hallucinates skeletons sitting at the dinner table, terrified his volatile mana could destroy this peace, which gets worse when he sees Ellie's face half-burned and skeletal, inviting him to join them for dinner, making our hero sweat in sheer panic as he wonders if his magic will inevitably trigger another apocalypse, especially when little Ben appears as a flaming skeleton, innocently warning him that his food is getting cold. Snapping out of the horrific vision, Sutton gasps and quickly excuses himself to take care of something outside. He carefully plants the glowing purple mana flower into the dirt, hoping its magic can bring some stability, before sitting back to watch the delicate plant sway under the bright, clear sky of his new home, staring intensely at the fragile petals as he reflects on the thin line between peace and total destruction. Ellie soon joins him outside, warmly admiring the beautiful flower without realizing the heavy burden weighing on his mind. prompting Sutton to look up with a somber smile, quietly noting just how fragile life truly is. Ellie gently smiles, reminding him that it is not just life itself that is incredibly fragile, but even the sturdiest structures often require the absolute most support to keep standing, which strikes a deep chord in Sutton as he quietly processes her unexpectedly profound wisdom, before she leans her head against his shoulder, sharing a rare moment of genuine warmth. While they sit together watching the magical purple flowers sway gently under the open sky. Later at the farm, Ellie pours fresh milk into the newly carved stone tub, prompting our hero to ask if she will finally teach him her cheese-making secrets, only for Sutton to secretly remind himself that he must eventually leave this peaceful life. As Ellie tries to spark a fire, asking if he truly has the patience for farming, leading him to confidently take the flint and instantly ignite the flames with his magic. Sutton's sudden burst of magic ignites a massive flame, startling Ellie as the heat flares up, prompting our hero to quickly check on her to make sure she did not get burned, but she casually brushes it off, telling him to grab a stirrer and get to work, before explaining the slow, delicate process of heating the milk while rejecting his impatient shortcuts. Ellie admits she stays busy with endless chores because her grandmother taught her that idle hands are dangerous, quietly revealing that the brave old woman tragically died when their entire village was burned down, which makes Sutton apologize before she quickly pivots back to explaining how to cut the curds, demonstrating how to drain the mixture while warning him that rushing the process will ruin everything. After salting the freshly separated curds, she prepares them for the final step of the process, placing the cheese into a heavy wooden press where it must sit undisturbed for 2 whole days. Ellie enjoys pressing the cheese while Sutton explains it needs to age for 2 months, prompting our hero to admit that waiting was always the hardest part of being on the battlefield. But when Ellie asks about storage, his paranoid soldier instincts immediately kick in to plan a fortified bunker, which is suddenly interrupted when little Ben runs over screaming that something is terribly wrong with their bull, leaving the kid in tears as he fears the poor animal is already on its deathbed, forcing the trio to rush out to the pasture where the massive beast lies completely motionless, until Sutton tells the worried family to head back inside while he inspects the situation alone, advising Ellie to practice her self-defense moves instead of worrying about the fallen animal, only to discover the lazy bull is perfectly fine and just wants some affectionate attention. As the others walk away, still completely unaware of the beast's dramatic acting, Sutton kneels beside the lazy bull, offering a glowing red mana stone to see if that is what it wants, which instantly makes the beast's eyes sparkle with pure excitement as it lets out a loud moo before it greedily licks his entire hand, slobbering everywhere just to get a taste of the magical treat, leaving our hero completely disgusted while the happy animal munches on the shattered pieces of crystal. Smirking, Sutton holds up a heavy wooden yoke, promising more treats if the lazy beast learns to plow, which immediately motivates the bull to charge forward with fiery eyes, tearing up the soil at breakneck speed, leaving behind a perfectly plowed field that makes our hero nod in absolute approval. True to his word, Sutton tosses another glowing mana stone to the ecstatic animal, only for the hyperactive beast to suddenly dash away, leaving him wondering where it is going as the energized bull sprints wildly up the grassy hill, completely fueled by high-level magic. This bull sniffs around the bushes, searching for something hidden in the grass, and snorts with excitement as its glowing eyes lock onto a specific spot, before it eagerly begins digging into the dirt to uncover its secret prize, prompting Sutton to sneak up behind the beast to see what it found, only for the protective bull to turn around and growl defensively at him, revealing a strange, wiggling green plant with glowing red bulbs hidden in the hole. Sutton examines the bizarre weed, completely shocked to detect a powerful mana signature from it, which immediately flinches away in fear when he reaches out to touch it, making our hero realize that even mindless vegetation can sense his terrifying inner power, before he carefully covers the hole with a heavy rock to protect their strange new discovery. Sutton feeds the bull one last mana stone before heading back to check on the family, walking up to the quiet farmhouse as the sun begins to set over the horizon. But as he cautiously steps inside, he finds Ellie and Ben waiting in ambush with blindfolds, catching him completely off guard before he can even finish explaining his successful day in the field, only for Ellie to suddenly grab his collar with surprising speed and aggression, executing a flawless shoulder throw that sends our powerful hero flying through the air, slamming him hard onto the wooden floor just as little Ben leaps in to join the fray, relentlessly whacking him with a broom while shouting battle cries at the top of his lungs. Ellie proudly explains they were just practicing their self-defense moves like he instructed, prompting Sutton to catch his breath and smirk, warning them they must try harder to defeat him. Sutton smiles as Ellie admits she wanted to test her skills against one of his former knights, while the scene shifts to a bustling town nearby as night falls over the crowded streets, where a cocky swordsman named Tanner celebrates with his buddy after apparently harassing a local woman, leaving the drunk warrior to stumble down a dark alleyway, completely unaware of a lurking shadow. Our hero quietly stalks his target from the darkness, drawing a heavy wooden staff to confront him, which forces the startled drunkard to turn around as our hero casually lights a match, prompting Tanner to nervously demand to know why a stranger is lurking in the shadows. This mysterious traveler crouches low with glowing eyes, calmly stating he just wants to say hello, but the arrogant swordsman quickly reaches for his blade, warning the stranger to back off, only for Sutton to instantly shatter the steel weapon with one swift, effortless strike, This shadowy attacker grins wickedly, mockingly telling the terrified swordsman that no amount of preparation can save him from what is coming as he easily dodges a desperate sword swing before slamming the arrogant bully face first into the dirt with terrifying, effortless strength, leaving the dark alleyway completely silent as the rest of the town sleeps peacefully. This next morning, the local guards find the corrupt swordsman pinned to the ground, prompting a somber funeral service where the townspeople gather to bury their fallen comrade, while a heavy shovel digs deep into the earth to make room for a grave. Except this massive hole is actually being dug by Sutton back at the quiet farmhouse, where Ellie and little Ben watch in utter amazement at his incredible digging speed. As our hero proudly declares he just finished building their brand new, fortified underground cheese cellar, Ellie hands Sutton a refreshing drink, warmly asking if he wants to take a quick break, but our hero jokingly scoffs at the idea of retirement before happily accepting some cold milk. As little Ben eagerly runs up to the pair, asking how he can help with the work, prompting Sutton to playfully warn the kid not to shatter any more windows this time, before instructing him to grab his hammer and help build a sturdy new cheese shelf, though Sutton quickly realizes they're going to need some massive rocks for the foundation, scanning the barren horizon only to find absolutely nothing useful in the immediate area, which leads him to recruit their hyperactive bull, Ferdy, for a quick resource-gathering field trip, while Ellie watches over the quiet barn, trusting that their dramatic beast is in safe hands. As little Ben struggles to carry a heavy stack of wooden planks back at the house, Sutton runs alongside the hyperactive bull, questioning if feeding him so much mana was actually a good idea, before they finally halt in front of a massive boulder that needs to be broken down. While back at the farm, Ellie feeds the livestock and wonders how her helpful guest is doing, as little Ben sits nearby, staring blankly at the wooden planks while trying to plan his next move. Meanwhile, Sutton unleashes a series of explosive fireballs that instantly shatter the giant rock into perfect pieces, leaving the dramatic bull completely wide-eyed as our hero casually brushes off his display of raw power, which allows them to easily load the heavy stone fragments into their wooden cart for transport, though the lazy beast immediately lets out a dramatic groan to complain about the heavy workload. Smirking, Sutton effortlessly hoists an even larger boulder onto his shoulder to show the animal how it is done, before bribing the exhausted bull with another glowing mana crystal to get him moving again. Sutton carries the massive boulder back to the farm, warning the lazy bull not to expect this help often, while Ellie and little Ben focus on their own chores, trying to carefully line up a wooden plank, before our hero suddenly drops the heavy rock onto the ground with a deafening, earth-shaking crash, which completely startles Ellie as the sudden shockwave echoes across the quiet farmyard, causing a distracted Ben to accidentally smash his own thumb with the heavy wooden mallet. This poor kid bursts into tears as Sutton and Ellie quickly rush over to check on his painful injury, prompting Ben to tearfully suck on his swollen thumb while wondering if he needs to drink more milk, leading Ellie to call it a night while Sutton insists on finishing the heavy construction work alone. Night quickly falls over the quiet farmhouse as the crescent moon rises high into the dark sky, leaving our tireless hero deep underground to finish building their fortified stone cheese cellar by himself. Sutton finishes his secret magical work underground, channeling his fiery red mana into the stone foundation, before heading back up to the surface just as a lone rider approaches the quiet ranch, which turns out to be the local sheriff George, who dismounts and marches toward the front porch, prompting our hero to step outside and intercept the lawman before he can even knock on the door, as Sutton calmly asks the tense sheriff to let the exhausted family sleep after their long day of chores. But George is not buying the friendly act, demanding to know what John actually knows about the town's recent troubles, leaving our disguised hero to play dumb, which only infuriates the suspicious lawman even more, who warns him to stop playing games while Sutton casually asks if there is some kind of problem, only for George to glare back with absolute gravity, confirming that a massive issue has indeed arisen, forcing Sutton to cross his arms and dryly ask if they are going to explain what actually happened. George sighs in frustration, realizing Sutton is still playing dumb about the town's situation, but the lawman's expression turns deadly serious as he warns that Sutton and Ellie must run because the arrogant class holder who harassed Ellie was just found murdered in town, which does not surprise our hero at all, though he calmly hides his own involvement. While George reveals that the suspicious locals already blame the two of them for the crime, Sutton casually asks why this dead thug matters so much when Ellie always faces rumors, prompting the sheriff to explain the victim had secret ties to dangerous local bandits, yet our stubborn hero refuses to flee, standing his ground without showing a hint of fear, leaving George to mount his horse and ride off after warning him to watch his back. As Sutton watches him leave, wondering if he will ever get to enjoy a peaceful life, morning light slowly breaks over the quiet farmhouse as the tense night finally comes to an end, waking Ellie up as she hears muffled voices whispering right outside her bedroom window, while Sutton quietly slips back inside the house to greet her after his long night of work, prompting Ellie to immediately ask if he slept at all before he urgently tells her to follow him, as she asks if everything is okay, only for Sutton to admit things have gotten incredibly complicated. He leads her over to the newly dug cellar, which she initially mistakes for a simple storage space. But as they head downstairs, Sutton calmly drops the bombshell that the corrupt class holder was murdered, leaving Ellie completely panicked, until our hero reassures her that he actually built a fortified bomb shelter, which features a fully stocked latrine and a secret escape tunnel designed to collapse at a moment's notice, though he casually admits he built this extreme defense system before even hearing the sheriff's warning. Ellie is genuinely impressed by the underground shelter, but Sutton insists you can never be too prepared, explaining that he never wants her to suffer like she did when the eternal flame took her home, promising that the dangerous class holder who caused her so much pain can never harm her here, which brings a soft, relieved smile to Ellie's face as she realizes she is finally safe. Suddenly remembering a gift of her own, she eagerly reaches into her bag to pull something out, presenting our powerful hero with a ridiculous cow-patterned sleeping cap to help him finally get some rest, leaving Sutton to hold up the goofy hat with a smirk, amused by her subtle hint. Though he happily accepts the gift, admitting that it actually is the perfect present for him. Later that afternoon, the warm sun shines down on the peaceful, quiet pastures of the ranch, where our exhausted hero finally takes a nap, wearing his new cap while leaning against their lazy bull. Sutton stares down at the empty soil, realizing a mysterious mana-infused flower has been stolen, which convinces him that he needs to pay the dangerous Grimm family another visit. But his thoughts are interrupted when Ellie rushes out to find him preparing to leave, as she offers him a warm plate of dinner, begging him to stay and eat, only to look deeply hurt when our hero insists he has urgent business elsewhere. Sutton gently reassures her of his appreciation, promising to return safely before the next morning's breakfast, before he immediately dashes off into the dark woods, channeling his fiery mana, leaping high into the night sky as he speeds toward his dangerous destination, navigating the treacherous forest branches with the effortless grace of a seasoned warrior, before diving headfirst into a dark ravine to hunt down those who crossed him. Sutton lands inside the dark ravine, immediately spotting a glowing stone statue of himself holding a blue flame, while noticing a nearby stone slab decorated with glowing blue flowers, a small shovel, and a bottle. Wondering if his reputation really makes him look that terrifying to others, as he gently touches the stone sculpture, completely amazed by the incredible level of detail, before his eyes drift down to a heavily reinforced stone chest sitting right beside the monument, realizing a powerful warrior has already tried to smash it open, likely from the Grimm family, prompting Sutton to channel his own fiery red mana to carefully bypass the chest's security, which successfully pops the lid open to reveal some folded mage robes and a locked spellbook, leaving him to carefully lift the rare tome, remembering how people used to slaughter each other for them, since forcing a magical lock usually triggers an explosion that completely obliterates the valuable contents inside. Sutton holds the locked spellbook, hoping the Grimm family can provide some much-needed clues about its secrets. But he quickly reminds himself that this dangerous world is no longer just a game, especially if this tome contains a forbidden spell capable of wiping out entire civilizations. So he decides to leave the destructive magic behind, focusing instead on the glowing blue flowers, which lead him to examine a mysterious glowing arrow drawn on the stone slab nearby, hoping these unique mana signatures can help him breed a new type of famine-resistant wheat. Shifting his focus back to his chores, Sutton grabs a heavy stone block for the cellar before heading straight back into the tense, quiet town under the cover of darkness, where the paranoid locals immediately begin whispering in fear as he walks past them, leaving our hero to sigh at their dramatic reactions, wondering why everyone is suddenly so terrified of him. Sutton steps into the local blacksmith shop, the doorbell chiming as he enters, only to be immediately confronted by a terrified young apprentice brandishing a small knife. But our hero remains completely unfazed, calmly presenting his shopping list for some standard business, while quietly warning the trembling kid that trying to fight him is a terrible idea. Fortunately, the shop owner, Jarrett, rushes out to scold her apprentice for threatening her best customer, taking the knife away and sending the panicked boy back to work at the forge, which allows Sutton to explain he needs some heavy-duty metal parts to finish his new cheese cellar, though he cannot help but notice the apprentice is still staring at him with pure terror. Handing over the payment, Sutton receives a grim warning about the dead thug's ties to the Wolf King, leaving the nervous apprentice to whisper in fear as our mysterious hero quietly slips back into the night. Sutton walks away as the terrified apprentice whispers that he must be a dangerous killer witch. But Jarrett quickly shuts the kid up, defending John as a good man unrelated to the town's recent murders. While back at the quiet farmhouse, Ellie wanders down the hallway wondering if their guest ever returned, unaware that Sutton is currently climbing through his bedroom window, desperately wishing he could get some peaceful sleep. Ellie gently knocks on his bedroom door with a plate of hot food, asking if he is awake, prompting our exhausted hero to quickly lie down and pretend he was merely meditating this whole time before he playfully sniffs the air, asking if she brought him some delicious fresh pancakes. She smiles warmly at his goofy antics, confirming that breakfast is indeed fresh and hot. As they all sit down at the table, Ellie asks what kept him so busy last night, leading Sutton to reveal one of the glowing blue flowers, teasing that some magic might be hidden inside. Sutton reveals the glowing blue flower, sending sparks of mana into the air that leave Ellie and Ben completely amazed. But their peaceful breakfast is cut short when they realize the stolen plant will not survive in the harsh sunlight, before a sudden, aggressive knock at the front door echoes through the house and puts everyone on high alert, prompting our hero to calmly open the door and face the mysterious visitors waiting outside in the shadows, only to find a group of heavily armed thugs flanked by two massive, snarling wolves bearing their fangs, as Sutton remains completely unfazed, coolly asking if the arrogant leader standing before him is the infamous Wolf King, who bursts into a loud, mocking laugh while asking if the giant beasts gave his secret identity away, while commending our disguised hero for managing to stay so incredibly calm in his terrifying presence, even as one of the drooling wolves snarls directly in his face to test his nerves, leaving Sutton to stare back with cold, dead eyes as he bluntly asks why they are here. This smug bandit leader grins, claiming that Sutton already knows exactly why they have paid him a visit, while his massive, red-eyed wolves bark aggressively to intimidate our hero right on his own front porch, prompting Sutton to step in front of Ellie and Ben, calmly telling the villain to enlighten him. As the Wolf King looks around the property, mockingly praising how nice the ranch looks under the circumstances, which only makes our hero narrow his eyes and dryly ask what those circumstances are supposed to be, leading the villain to mockingly point out that a helpless woman and child could never rebuild this quickly. But Sutton remains completely unfazed, calmly repeating that he has absolutely no idea what they are talking about, only for the Wolf King to ask how he found time to fix the ranch, commit murder, and steal his cows, before the arrogant bandit spits on the ground right in front of our hero to show his utter disrespect, menacingly declaring that those stolen beasts came from the wolf den, meaning they belong entirely to him. This Wolf King leans in close, mockingly adding that he is also missing a woman and a boy, asking our hero with a menacing glare if he knows where to find them, which prompts Sutton to instantly shove the arrogant bandit leader back to protect his family. But the villain just laughs off the physical threat, tossing raw meat to his snarling beasts, as Ellie desperately rushes forward to stop the confrontation before things get completely out of hand, bravely stepping in front of Sutton to demand that these dangerous intruders leave them alone. Though the Wolf King remains entirely unfazed, casually feeding his massive pets while mocking their courage, pointing out that these supposed cold-blooded killers do not seem very intimidating in person before he and his thugs burst into mocking laughter over the weak class holder's pathetic demise, only for Sutton to lose his temper, furiously reminding them of the last time they crossed him. One of the thugs quickly apologizes to his boss, realizing they might have pushed Sutton too far, but Ellie suddenly steps forward and shoves the Wolf King to prove they are not, prompting the smug bandit leader to hold his men back before they can retaliate, as he mockingly gives them exactly 3 days to return his cows and leave town, only for Sutton to step in front of her and coldly ask what happens otherwise, which prompts the arrogant villain to snap his fingers with a dark grin, summoning his massive, drooling wolves to remind our hero how hungry they are for a fight, though Sutton just smirks back, dryly noting that he might be a pretty tough meal to digest, leaving the Wolf King to pat his shoulder, warning that this valley belongs to him regardless, before he flashes one last sinister grin, confident that his terrifying threat has hit its mark. This Wolf King calls out to his men as they finally retreat back into the valley, leaving Ellie to ask Sutton what got into him during that tense confrontation, which convinces our hero to stick around a little longer until these bandits are dealt with, before they all gather back inside the quiet farmhouse to plan their next move. Sutton breaks the heavy silence by reminding Ellie of the arrogant villain's 3-day deadline, prompting her to ask if he actually plans on giving up the cows, only for our smug hero to explain that some people fear what they cannot control, proving that the Wolf King's desperate threats are completely meaningless to a powerful warrior like him, reassuring Ellie as she stares at him in silent awe of his absolute confidence as the sun slowly sets over the peaceful valley, signaling the calm before the storm. Sutton is working in the fields when he notices some visitors arriving at the farmhouse, prompting him to head over and see what Jonas and Ellie are up to, only to be introduced to a cheerful merchant named Gottfried Folk who is visiting the ranch, as Jonas proudly explains that our hero is the brand new owner of the Sutton farm, leaving Sutton to wonder why this eccentric merchant is suddenly staring at him with sparkling eyes before Gottfried suddenly gasps in pure shock, recognizing our hero's legendary name from his past, which sends the merchant into an absolute frenzy while Sutton desperately tries to change the subject, quickly asking Ellie to show Jonas their new cheese selection to distract them from his identity, begging her, with a nervous smile, to help him out just this once to save him, until Ellie finally agrees to the favor, though she warns him that he owes her big time. Jonas and Ellie walk away to check the cheese, leaving the merchant alone with our mysterious hero, who suddenly glares down at the trembling man with an incredibly cold, menacing look, forcing the terrified merchant to instantly drop to his knees and beg for mercy, as he prostrates himself on the dirt road, desperately hailing a legendary title, calling Sutton the Eternal Flame while imagining him surrounded by a sea of blazing fire and skulls. Sutton summons a small spark of red mana, coldly demanding to know who sent him here, which sends Gottfried into a deeper panic as he desperately explains that he arrived completely by accident, revealing that he recognized our hero's face from the chaotic battle of Hyreth Hills. Our hero tells him to shut up, warning that Gottfried will pay if his secret gets out, before coldly asking the terrified merchant why he thinks he is still allowed to draw breath. Sutton decides to use the merchant's knowledge to his advantage, recruiting him to run errands outside the valley, but Gottfried immediately gets stars in his eyes, eagerly asking if this is some kind of holy mission, prompting our exhausted hero to pinch his nose and just play along to keep him quiet, which only makes the eccentric merchant cheer loudly, completely unaware that Ellie is walking up behind them, leaving Ellie to curiously ask about this legendary Eternal Flame title she just overheard, as Gottfried laughs nervously while Sutton stands there wishing the ground would just swallow him whole before the merchant quickly tries to explain that the legendary warrior is his personal savior, only for Ellie to coldly interrupt, bluntly pointing out that this supposed hero killed millions of people, forcing Gottfried to defend his idol before realizing he should probably change the subject, until Ellie quietly reveals that she lost her entire family to the Eternal Flame's devastating war. Sutton breaks the heavy tension by offering some of their fresh cheese to the group, which Gottfried eagerly samples, finding the rich flavor to be absolutely incredible. before the eccentric merchant pressures a hesitant Jonas to take a bite as well, prompting the older man to nervously munch on a piece under Ellie's watchful gaze, as Gottfried leans in to ask if he can taste the sheer perfection of it, leaving Jonas completely starstruck by the remarkable texture and rich flavor of the dairy treat, though our hero quickly tells him to stop overreacting since it is literally just cheese. Reminding the old man that Ellie is the real genius behind these delicious dairy products, Jonas continues to babble about the legendary taste while Sutton just sweats at his dramatic reaction, making Ellie wonder if city folks have simply never tasted decent cheddar before. Sutton grips Jonas's shoulder, quietly warning the old man to keep his mouth shut and behave, which prompts Jonas to quickly pivot, asking Ellie if she has considered selling her delicious cheese, though she explains that the next batch will not be ready for another month, leading the eccentric merchant to immediately jump in and offer to buy the entire stock himself, as he proudly claims to be a cheese connoisseur with a refined taste for dairy, passionately explaining how her unique recipe could easily dominate the high-end market if aged properly before suggesting they market the rare treat as an exclusive luxury item for wealthy buyers. Until Sutton cuts the pitch short, handing the merchant a shopping list for their farm, prompting Gottfried to accept it with absolute reverence, promising to retrieve every single item from town, immediately leaving Ellie to watch his dramatic display, quietly muttering about what a bizarre fanboy he is. Jonas asks Ellie if they can speak in private before they head out, leading her to step aside with him while Gottfried remains distracted by the delicious cheese. As Jonas drops his friendly act to warn her that another mysterious murder has just occurred, revealing that the victim was the very same shopkeeper who had previously caused trouble for her, before adding the chilling news that the angry townsfolk currently suspect Ellie of committing the crime. Ellie stands frozen in absolute shock, struggling to process how she could possibly be blamed, only for Jonas to lean in close and suggest that John Sutton is the actual killer, prompting her to furiously defend our hero while Jonas mockingly questions her blind trust in him, until the older man creepily grabs her shoulder, offering his protection in exchange for her compliance, which immediately pushes Ellie too far, forcing her to slap his hand away and demand his departure. Jonas backs off with his hands raised, mockingly accepting Ellie's rejection with a sinister smile. But he quickly warns her that he is personally hunting down the witch behind the shopkeeper's murder, promising to show absolutely no mercy and drag the culprit to a brutal public execution, before chillingly pointing out that he will not hesitate to execute her if she is guilty. Meanwhile, Gottfried approaches Sutton nearby and curiously asks what is going on with Ellie's intense attitude, prompting our quiet hero to narrow his eyes and ask the merchant what he means, which leads Gottfried to point out that she clearly harbors a deep hatred for the eternal flame, asking Sutton if he really blames her for feeling that way after the war's devastation, boldly reminding our hero of the horrific atrocities he personally committed in his past life, only for Sutton to violently grab his collar and furiously order him to shut his mouth. Sutton holds the trembling merchant by his collar as Gottfried desperately begs for another chance. But our hero coldly dismisses his frantic pleading as nothing but empty words, asking the terrified man if he truly understands the pain of losing everything in a single instant, before describing the hollow, consuming fire of a warrior who has nothing left but destruction, which forces the terrified merchant to quickly agree, admitting he only knows how to buy and sell, prompting Sutton to finally release him, warning him to stick strictly to business from now on. Just as Ellie and Jonas walk back over to announce they are ready to head out, Sutton immediately notices Ellie's tense expression, gently placing a hand on her shoulder to ask what happened, leaving her to quickly brush off his concern by claiming they were only discussing cheese logistics, before firmly declaring that she wants to handle the distribution of her own products from now on. Ellie firmly tells Gottfried that any future business deals must be done strictly on her terms, explaining that his greedy strategy of selling high to a select few goes against her core values, which leaves both Sutton and Jonas completely stunned by the young woman's sudden burst of fiery confidence, prompting Jonas to nudge our hero, teasingly noting that he can definitely see why Sutton likes her before the old man shakes her hand, mockingly addressing her as Mrs. Sutton to seal the deal, sending both of them into a blushing panic as they desperately try to correct his massive misunderstanding. Jonas cheerfully waves goodbye as he and the merchant finally depart, leaving the chaotic duo behind on the ranch, though Sutton can only watch them walk away while quietly muttering that he should just eliminate the annoying merchant, leaving Ellie to ask what he is whispering, which forces our embarrassed hero to quickly cover his tracks, claiming he was simply admiring the beautiful sunset as they stand together outside the quiet farmhouse. Ellie stands alone in the quiet kitchen, washing dishes while lost deep in her own thoughts, remembering how Jonas mockingly called her Mrs. Sutton and wondering where her heart truly lies, because she knows she can never accept him if he remains loyal to his devastating past. Until our hero suddenly walks into the room, cheerfully greeting her to break the heavy silence. Sutton proudly explains that he just finished planting all 25 acres of their new crops, prompting Ellie to ask about their expected harvest yield while pointing toward his handy farming guide, which leads our hero to flip through the pages to find the average bushel count, before he suddenly notices a small smudge on her cheek and reaches out to help, leaving Ellie to blush furiously as she nervously insists she can clean it herself, only for their eyes to lock in a quiet, breathless moment of unexpected romantic tension. Sutton pulls back in a blushing panic, realizing he cannot let himself get close while hiding his dark past, so he quickly changes the subject by awkwardly asking her how they even measure a bushel, prompting Ellie to patiently explain the difference between measuring various crops while they share a quiet moment, while our hero happily munches on a delicious homemade cookie to ease the lingering tension. Suddenly, a young boy bursts through the door to warn them about finding fresh wolf tracks nearby, only to freeze in his tracks when he notices the delicious snacks they are eating, sending both Sutton and Ellie into a frantic panic as they desperately stuff the remaining treats into their mouths, until they both put on their best innocent faces and claim there are absolutely no cookies left. This young boy glares at them with absolute betrayal, completely unconvinced by their terrible cover-up. As he points directly to a single stray cookie sitting right in front of them on the table, Ellie's hand quickly snatches the final cookie right off the wooden table before the kid can grab it, shoving it straight into Sutton's mouth while claiming he earned it through his hard work on the farm, which only makes the young boy pout in frustration, arguing that his daily chores should count for something too. But our hero just smiles, trying to steer the conversation back to the dangerous wolf tracks nearby, prompting the stubborn kid to hold his ground and refuse to share any details without a sweet reward until Sutton playfully dangles a pouch of candy to instantly break the boy's stubborn resolve, sending the excited child into a frantic frenzy as he eagerly confirms the wolf sightings, before Sutton hands over the treats and tells him to get cleaned up so they can investigate. Once the boy leaves, our hero's playful demeanor vanishes as he brings up the mysterious town murders, suggesting they do some detective work to clear their names before the angry mob comes for them. Ellie agrees to draft a list of suspects, immediately naming the arrogant Haver as her prime target, while Sutton tells her to keep brainstorming while he heads out to inspect those fresh wolf tracks, leading our hero deep into the woods with young Ben, who eagerly explains his latest trap findings. Until the nervous kid suddenly stops walking to ask a highly personal and awkward question, hesitantly wondering if Sutton and his older sister Ellie are secretly dating or something, which only earns him a completely blank, deadpan stare from our utterly confused hero, prompting the embarrassed boy to quickly change the subject and point toward his nearby deadfall traps, leaving Sutton quite impressed by the massive rock trap that Ellie apparently helped him design. Before promising to teach the excited kid how to make his hunting traps even deadlier. With their bond growing stronger, the duo ventures deeper into the foggy forest to find the beast. Sutton asks young Ben if he is scared of Haver as they trek through the woods, prompting the nervous kid to immediately stammer out a defensive denial to save his pride, until a sudden loud snap echoes through the quiet forest right beneath their feet, sending the terrified boy diving behind our hero while screaming about a wolf attack, only for Sutton to dryly point out that he merely stepped on a dry branch, leaving the embarrassed kid to quickly claim he totally knew that all along, while nervously joking that he was just keeping our quiet hero on his toes, though the playful mood vanishes when they suddenly spot massive paw prints near a boulder, which leads Sutton to toss the kid his last pouch of candy as a reward. Before kneeling down to inspect the deep tracks, confirming they belong to Haver's dangerous beasts, Ben excitedly asks if they can build a massive deadfall trap to stop Haver, but Sutton dryly points out that their target is unfortunately a bit too smart for that as they continue trekking through the dense, misty forest of the peaceful valley, prompting our hero to explain how trap making from an old hunter saved his life during the war, which he demonstrates by effortlessly propping up a massive boulder with a heavy wooden log while quietly reflecting on how incredibly peaceful this untouched valley feels compared to the war-torn outside world, until a sudden chilling howl echoes through the trees, sending a flock of birds scattering in panic. Sutton just smirks at the sound, realizing this place might not be so peaceful after all, as he smoothly draws his razor-sharp hunting knife with a dangerous gleam. Before telling a nervous Ben to head home while he goes to hunt down some wolves, Sutton announces that it is time to survey the perimeter, dropping a heavy bag onto the table, revealing a massive stash of deadly weapons that he has been keeping hidden away, which leaves both Ellie and young Ben completely speechless as they stare in absolute disbelief. Ben eagerly asks if he can hold the massive sword, ignoring Sutton's warning about its weight, only to immediately struggle under the heavy blade while our hero explains its military history. Sutton then pulls out a pair of sharp daggers, noting their superior utility in close combat, prompting the excited young boy to quickly guess that dual-wielding them is the ultimate strategy before our hero checks in on Ellie, asking if she has been practicing with her knife, while playfully teasing a complaining Ben that his trusty hammer is already dangerous enough. With his preparations complete, Sutton heads out into the foggy woods to secure the perimeter. Sutton looks up at the glowing full moon, finding it fitting for the hunt ahead, while a sudden rustle of birds scattering through the night sky signals approaching danger as Haver leads his ruthless gang of mercenaries and trained wolves deep into the woods, prompting the smug Rosalie to mockingly question why they need an entire army for one farmer. But Haver quickly snaps back that their target is actually a highly dangerous class holder, which only makes the arrogant woman laugh at the idea of being afraid of a single knight, until Haver warns her that this supposedly weak farmer single-handedly wiped out Whale's entire gang, causing the big bearded warrior to take offense, before Haver quickly shuts down their bickering, leaving the playful woman to quickly tease her giant companion to keep the peace. Though Sutton quietly watches them from the shadows, hearing Haver warn his crew not to underestimate him, Sutton realizes Haver genuinely believes he committed the murders, which actually clears him as a suspect, so our hero decides to retreat and find a better battlefield with less cover for the wolves, wishing he could just burn the forest down without revealing his secret identity as the Eternal Flame. Meanwhile, one of Haver's trained wolves suddenly barks after catching a strange scent in the woods, though the giant mercenary dismisses the noise as nothing more than a stray squirrel. Bored with the slow pace, the arrogant Rosalie suddenly dashes ahead to scout the area on her own, leaving her frustrated companion to curse her reckless behavior under his breath, before coldly muttering that he will gladly finish her off himself if the enemy fails to do so. While Sutton waits quietly in a windy clearing to prepare for the inevitable clash, suddenly our hero senses a powerful mana signature nearby, realizing another class holder is rapidly approaching. Sutton stands ready in the foggy woods, bracing himself for the incoming threat, when a playful voice suddenly calls out to him from high up in the trees, revealing the arrogant Rosalie as she introduces herself and mockingly calls him by his alias, prompting our hero to calmly ask if she is the infamous Wolf King, which only makes her laugh while she casually boasts about brutally eliminating another man before she suddenly leaps down from her perch, completely butchering his name in the process, and immediately launches a ferocious attack with her dual blades without even listening to him, sending a flurry of spinning energy slashes directly toward our hero's face, leaving a small cut on his cheek that only makes him smirk with excitement as the deadly assassin prepares her next strike, eager to see if he can actually survive. Rosalie mockingly asks why he is hesitating to draw his weapon after she showed him hers, but our hero calmly stands his ground, claiming that revealing his blade will not even be necessary, prompting the deadly assassin to pout, calling him incredibly rude for not returning the favor. So Sutton slowly grips his hilt, deciding to oblige if she is really that eager to die, as he draws his massive sword while she boasts about refusing to share this kill with Haver, prompting her to mock him for wasting his life over a few stolen cows. But our hero just glares before launching himself forward with a devastating overhead strike, which the agile assassin barely manages to block as their weapons collide with a deafening clang, leaving her grinning like a maniac as she eagerly absorbs the sheer force of his blow, until Sutton swiftly leaps back, channeling his fiery mana to heat up his blade for the real fight. Sutton is caught off guard as the assassin suddenly vanishes right before his eyes, forcing him to quickly dodge a blindingly fast slash that tears through his clothes as Rosalie unleashes a relentless flurry of strikes from every single angle imaginable. But our boy keeps his cool, tracking her movements as she prepares another dash, before he unleashes a massive counterslash with his blazing hot sword to back her off, only for the agile assassin to effortlessly deflect the blow with a loud clang, until she suddenly slips past his guard and appears right behind him, mockingly asking him to dance while casually resting her hand on his shoulder, prompting Sutton to swing his fiery blade down with a cold warning about losing her hand, though he only strikes the empty ground, dryly muttering that he must be getting rusty. Sutton quickly reacts as two sharp daggers come flying straight toward him from the shadows, vaulting into a handstand right on his sword's hilt to effortlessly dodge the incoming blades, which only prompts the agile assassin to unleash a flurry of blindingly fast strikes from all sides, leaving our hero to realize her speed is insane, meaning he must rely on sensing her. So he calmly shuts his eyes to block out the visual distractions and focus his senses, prompting the arrogant assassin to scream in absolute fury at his blatant disrespect, sending her diving forward with multiple afterimages to strike him down from every angle at once. But Sutton smoothly spins his heated blade in a perfect circle to deflect her coordinated onslaught, realizing he could easily end her life right now, but choosing to hold back for information, before delivering a heavy blunt strike that sends the shocked assassin crashing backward into the dirt. Sutton decides to spare the defeated assassin to avoid drawing any unwanted attention from the local sheriff, but his quiet moment is cut short when he spots several dark silhouettes approaching through the trees, prompting our hero to dryly mock the panting woman by pointing out that her boss has already arrived, as the arrogant Haver steps out of the shadows alongside his giant mercenary and trained wolves, demanding to know the whereabouts of his stolen cattle and aggressively claiming ownership over young Ellie, while his massive companion stands by, ready to back up his master's delusional claims with sheer force, which leads Sutton to calmly suggest that a smart bandit should focus on saving their heavily injured, only for Haver to laughingly dismiss the fallen assassin as nothing more than a tamed dog, ignoring her desperate attempts to warn him about our hero's terrifying strength before barking at her to shut up, leaving the terrified woman to realize she will be brutally punished the moment this fight is over. Haver glares with pure malice, asking Sutton if he knows how he earned his terrifying title, before letting out a deafening howl that echoes through the foggy woods to rally his pack, though our hero just tips his hat with a smug grin, admitting he could not care less, as he casually taps the hilt of his weapon to activate a hidden mechanism, unleashing a brilliant burst of fiery mana that manifests into a legendary Magitech shield, leaving the injured Rosalie completely dumbfounded that he was hiding such insane power this whole time, while Haver and his giant mercenary immediately recognize the ultra-rare relic from the last war, prompting Sutton to just stare them down with a cold, glowing gaze of absolute confidence, which only makes the greedy bandit leader drool over the prize before ordering a full-on assault, sending his vicious wolves charging straight ahead as our hero prepares to paint the forest red. Sutton effortlessly fends off the pack, admitting he hates hurting animals but has no choice before sending one of the vicious beasts flying backward with a devastating kick, though another wolf immediately lunges at his blind spot with its jaws wide open, prompting our hero to slam his blazing Magitech shield directly into the creature's face, while the heavily injured Rosalie clutches her burning ribs and desperately tries to escape, only for the giant mercenary to suddenly loom behind her with a menacing glare, grabbing her face roughly and coldly ordering her to get back into the fight. Meanwhile, Sutton is forced to dodge a sudden barrage of throwing knives from the shadows, allowing the injured assassin to sneak attack him with a dagger while he slashes a wolf, yet the minor wound barely registers to our hero as Haver mockingly praises her dedication. This giant mercenary uses the injured Rosalie as a human shield, mockingly calling Sutton a coward, but our hero remains completely unfazed as the brute prepares to use her to his advantage, prompting Sutton to immediately charge forward to draw the giant's attention away from the helpless woman, who collapses onto the cold ground in absolute agony after being tossed aside like trash. Sutton instantly clashes blades with the massive warrior, their weapons colliding with an explosive burst of sparks, though the giant easily deflects the blow and mockingly demands a much more challenging fight. While the recovering Rosalie desperately tries to warn her reckless companion about our hero's true strength, only for the two warriors to ignore her and continue their high-speed exchange of devastating blows, before the ungrateful assassin suddenly lunges at Sutton's back to seek revenge for her broken ribs, leaving our hero to effortlessly block her strike, while dryly pointing out he actually saved her life. Sutton deflects a massive shockwave, shielding the ungrateful assassin from the collateral damage of the blast, and reminds her that he has now saved her pathetic life twice tonight, prompting the enraged giant mercenary to drop to all fours like a wild beast before he lunges forward with terrifying speed alongside his pack of spectral wolves. But our hero just sighs, mockingly advising him not to act like a literal animal, which only makes the brute bite down directly on Sutton's blazing Magitech shield, allowing our boy to easily deflect the savage attack with a swift counterswing, sending the giant crashing back into the dirt as Sutton calmly warns him against biting. Watching the chaotic clash from a safe distance, Rosalie and Haver stand completely stunned, realizing their giant companion is just as unhinged as the beastly wolves he tames. Haver tries to drag his giant mercenary away, but Gemmel refuses to abandon his allies like a coward, prompting the brute to launch his heavy chained flail directly at our hero's head, only for Sutton to effortlessly catch the flying weapon with his bare hands without flinching, while the giant stands completely stunned by the sheer difference in their physical strength, before Sutton easily shatters a massive tree trunk to dismiss the attack as a cheap party trick, sending the brute crashing hard into the dirt with a devastating downward strike, leaving the giant sliding across the forest floor while desperately trying to catch his breath, until our hero stands tall and mockingly praises him like a well-trained pet. Sutton then kicks the dropped weapon back to the brute, coldly telling him to fetch, forcing the humiliated mercenary to glare up with a mixture of pure rage and terror. Gemmel is impressed by Sutton's strength and boasts about showing him his ultimate trick, before he begins channeling a dark purple aura to empower his loyal beasts, causing the wolves' eyes to glow with a terrifying, bloodthirsty rage as the mana takes hold, which leads our hero to realize he is dealing with a highly skilled beast tamer, as the mercenary commands his newly buffed pack to tear their target to shreds, sending the vicious beasts lunging forward in a coordinated, high-speed assault that forces Sutton on the defensive, though one of the creatures manages to sink its teeth right into his boot, while another lunges from the side to clamp its jaws firmly onto his arm, leaving our hero completely swarmed by the relentless pack as they try to drag him down until Sutton coldly reminds them of his warning before preparing to unleash his blazing shield. Gemmel smugly warns Sutton that even if he manages to free his leg, the beast will explode, prompting our hero to look down in disbelief at the absurd claim of exploding wolves. As the beast tamer explains, he overloaded his pets with more mana than they can handle, meaning they must keep gnawing on Sutton's flesh just to cope with the agonizing pain before the sadistic mercenary mockingly asks our hero how he would prefer to die. Sutton remains completely unfazed, dryly noting that living bombs are the most ridiculous thing he has ever heard of, while secretly realizing that incinerating these beasts would instantly expose his secret identity as the Eternal Flame. So he calmly asks the mercenary if transferring all his mana has left him completely defenseless, only for Gemmel to burst into hysterical laughter at the sheer audacity of his dying opponent, until a sudden, heavy thud interrupts his gloating as one of the overloaded beasts collapses. Haver smugly turns his back on the struggle, muttering that all of this could have been easily avoided, before calling out to his giant mercenary to wrap things up while he makes his exit, prompting the massive brute to readily agree to clean up the messy aftermath of the battle, leaving Gemmel alone in the foggy woods to watch his ruthless boss walk away. This giant mercenary slowly approaches, admitting even he is terrified of Haver's absolute cruelty toward his own beasts, as he raises his massive axe to deliver a swift, merciful end to our pinned hero. But Sutton realizes he can no longer hide his powers if he wants to survive this onslaught, so he unleashes a searing heat from his bare hand to directly absorb the beast's mana, causing the overloaded wolf to shriek in agony as its stolen energy is violently drained away, until the creature collapses onto the dirt as a completely hollowed-out shell. Gemmel stares in absolute shock, realizing this supposed old farmer is hiding a terrifying secret, as our hero effortlessly drains the remaining beasts and reveals his true identity as a mage, prompting Sutton to step forward with a cold glare to ensure his secret remains safe. But the giant mercenary refuses to back down, claiming he no longer fears any monsters, before channeling his dark purple aura to prepare for a final, desperate stand against our hero, which sends the brute charging forward to strike down the man he calls an infernal devil, only for Sutton to easily block the massive overhead swing with a shower of bright sparks, while the mercenary desperately screams that young Ellie must be a witch for associating with him, leaving our hero completely unfazed as he smoothly prepares to end this tedious struggle. until he delivers a devastating low kick that shatters the giant's leg and ends the fight. Gemmel crashes heavily to the ground, his shattered leg giving out under our hero's brutal strike, but Sun's expression turns deadly cold as he warns the brute never to mention Ellie again while pointing his blade directly at the mercenary's throat and demanding he stand up to face him, though the giant only glares back with glowing purple eyes fueled by pure, unadulterated rage. Tightly gripping his massive weapon as his dark aura flares up for one last desperate gamble, sending the brute lunging forward with a savage roar to bring his giant axe crashing down, only for Sutton to effortlessly catch the devastating blow with a brilliant shower of sparks, as he casually grabs the massive blade with his bare, glowing hand to stop it cold, prompting the mercenary to mock him as a bandit, while our hero proudly defends his own morals. Before his blazing mana begins to melt the giant's weapon into nothing but useless slag, Gemmel watches in absolute horror as his massive weapon melts away from the intense heat, prompting our hero to calmly ask if he is finally done playing around before delivering a swift, fiery slash that completely cuts through the giant's defenses, leaving the defeated mercenary to collapse onto the dirt with a look of pure shock. As Sutton coldly turns his back on the brute to declare their fight officially over, looking around the quiet forest, our hero realizes Haver's aura has completely vanished from the area, until a sudden, terrifying realization hits him that the cowards are heading straight for his farm, which triggers a massive explosion of fiery mana as he fears for Ellie and Ben's safety, fueling his rage to vow absolute destruction while his doom points tick dangerously upward. Instantly launching himself into the night sky to fly back to his beloved family. Slamming down in the forest, our hero's boots spark with residual heat from his high-speed flight and skids to a halt on the dirt path as he rushes back to his homestead, only to find the quiet farm seemingly untouched by the mercenaries who fled earlier, though a massive bull immediately spots his arrival and stands guard from the fence line, flaring its horns with intense, blazing energy as it prepares to defend its territory, which catches our hero off guard as he stares at his pet's sudden aggressive display. Sutton quickly raises his hands and speaks softly to soothe the fiery beast, instantly turning the terrifying monster back into a cute, docile farm animal with big sparkly eyes that happily nuzzles against his chest while our boy asks if any intruders have arrived, prompting the unique two-headed bull to shake both of its heads in a reassuring denial. Sutton gently pats his loyal two-headed bull, thanking the beast for keeping the farm safe, but he is left completely speechless when the clever animal casually unlocks the gate itself, prompting our hero to seriously question what kind of magical feed he has been giving it, before he rushes over to the farmhouse door to check if Ellie is safe inside. Ellie cautiously opens the door after hearing his voice, relieved to see him back, and quickly reassures him that both she and little Ben are completely unharmed. While she asks if he is all right, our exhausted hero suddenly begins to stumble, instantly collapsing heavily onto the wooden deck as his injuries finally catch up to him, causing his eyes to glow with a dangerous red light as he desperately warns her to stay back. Though he still stubbornly insists he is fine while urging her to go back inside, Sutton explains to a worried Ellie that his overflowing mana is burning him from the inside out and steps outside to let the cool night air soothe his aching body, until little Ben suddenly bursts through the door, thrilled to see our hero back safe and sound eagerly asking if he fought the legendary Wolf King, while Sutton gently tells him to go to sleep. But when the excited kid keeps rambling, our exhausted hero firmly orders him straight to bed, sending the startled boy scurrying back inside with a quiet, apologetic goodnight. Ellie then steps out onto the porch, hearing the pain in his voice and offering some warm tea, which our weary hero gladly accepts as he tries to relax under the starry night sky, prompting her to playfully tease him about leaving out his usual massive bucket of honey, leaving Sutton to quietly request just a single spoonful before she heads back inside to brew it. Sutton stares at his trembling hands, realizing his reckless fight only brought the impending apocalypse closer, and decides he must leave this peaceful farm before his destructive power ruins everything again. But he hesitates when he wonders how Ellie and Ben would ever survive another attack, fearing that his mere presence only brings disaster to everyone he tries to protect. Ellie suddenly interrupts his dark thoughts by offering a warm cup of sweet honey tea, suggesting that stargazing might help him relax while pointing out the legendary Great Hunter constellation, which her grandmother used to say teaches people to relentlessly chase after what they want, prompting our weary hero to ask what made this mythical hunter so incredibly special, as she explains how he never missed his prey while the great bear only fought to survive. Sutton quietly agrees with her wisdom, finding a brief moment of peace under the starry night sky. Sutton casually asks Ellie if her grandmother forgot to teach her how to properly listen, but she quickly flicks his forehead to prove that she was actually taught very well, listing off all her lessons about plants, runes, and especially staying away from strange men, before her expression suddenly darkens as she remembers the tragic day her village burned down. A horrific flashback reveals her childhood home engulfed in flames with her grandmother pinned underneath, gasping for air as the smoke fills her lungs during the sudden, unprovoked attack, which prompts the dying woman to desperately plead with young Ellie to run and save herself, only for a heavy, burning beam to crash down and violently separate them. Ellie screams in absolute despair as the raging inferno completely consumes her beloved guardian, leaving nothing but a pile of burning ash and a lifetime of deep, unyielding trauma. Flashback of Ellie screaming for her grandmother while a younger Sutton stands amidst the raging flames, leaving him to carry the heavy guilt of being one of the few who made it out alive, as Ellie suddenly brings him back to the present by asking what the eternal flame is truly like, prompting our hero to quietly describe the legendary warrior as strong and incredibly fearsome. before staring into his drink to admit that the legendary Mage is also completely broken inside, which makes Ellie playfully tease him about sounding exactly like the mysterious, tragic hero himself, until Sutton bluntly confesses that he has taken lives, forcing her to rationalize the horrors of war, though she gently asks if he ever enjoyed the violence before returning to her stargazing while our weary hero quietly listens as she explains the deeper meaning behind the constellations. And she softly asks about his own family, prompting him to reveal he has a distant brother. Ellie suggests sending a letter to his brother, but Sutton sadly admits that is just not possible, prompting her to wonder if he lives too far away as our hero quietly agrees with her before she politely bids him goodnight and leaves him alone on the porch with his heavy thoughts, which makes Sutton reflect on how his entire life has been nothing but endless, bloody conflict, hoping he can finally find a way to protect his loved ones without resorting to senseless slaughter, though he still struggles to understand what his true purpose in this world actually is. This next morning, the sharp sound of clashing steel echoes across the windy plains, as Sutton begins a rigorous training session with Ellie to sharpen her combat skills, pushing her to strike with everything she has while he effortlessly dodges her desperate swings, while he counters with a swift, blinding flurry of his own blades to test her reflexes. Ellie gets disarmed during training, her dagger flying away as she groans in frustration, but Sutton quickly crouches to retrieve her weapon while offering some gentle encouragement, prompting her to reject his praise as she demands to know how to defeat her enemy, because she desperately needs to avenge her fallen village to find any peace of mind, hoping that inflicting pain on the eternal flame will stop him from hurting anyone else, which makes our hero quietly ask what she would do if the tyrant already understood his sins. Scoffing at the idea, she reminds him that he should know how heartless the monster is, leaving Sutton to explain how people often tell themselves lies just to survive horrible tragedies, before he urges her to face the harsh truth so she can finally be free. Watching her walk away, our guilt-ridden hero realizes that revealing his identity would destroy everything. Ellie stands at the doorway and playfully demands Sutton wash up before he can eat any breakfast, prompting our hero to quickly scramble back to the house to clean off the dirt, while he yells out the window to stop little Ben from digging up giant worms. Inside the kitchen, Ellie asks if he has any plans to travel off the farm soon, explaining that they desperately need some chickens from a local lady named Widow Brown, which convinces Sutton to agree to a quick trip today while Ben happily plays outside. Setting off on their wagon, our hero orders his loyal bull Ferdy to guard the homestead, leaving Ellie completely bewildered when the bizarre beast starts flexing like a literal bodybuilder. Soon, the duo arrives at a massive, heavily fortified outpost surrounded by sharp wooden spikes, as Sutton quietly warns her that this paranoid widow definitely does not like uninvited guests. Ellie knocks loudly on the cabin door, calling out a secret password about out-of-season strawberries, which prompts a series of heavy clicks and rattles from the locked door inside before a stern, gray-haired old woman opens it to finish the secret phrase, though her warm greeting to Ellie quickly sours when she notices Sutton standing nearby. Instantly on guard, the fierce elder thrusts a sharp spear right at our hero's throat, forcing Sutton to nervously question Ellie's definition of a sweet, gentle old lady, while Ellie quickly steps in to assure her friend that this man is completely safe. Sutton even shows off a golden medallion to prove he has retired from his dangerous past, prompting Ellie to diffuse the tension by bringing up their need for some farm chickens, which immediately delights the old woman since she wants to sell them before her caravan departs. Widow Brown explains she is fleeing to the capital because another gruesome murder has left everyone terrified, and she urges Ellie to come along since the countryside is no longer safe for anyone, but Ellie politely declines, focusing instead on buying the chickens they desperately need for their farm. This old woman demands 5 gold for the flock, prompting Ellie to immediately start haggling her down, until the widow rants about high travel taxes and blames the eternal flame for all their misery, fiercely warning Ellie not to defend the tyrant after the terrible things he did to his knights. Sutton quickly steps in to pay the full price before the conversation gets any more dangerous, only for the greedy widow to snatch the gold and tell them to catch the birds themselves, leaving our weary hero to ask for a ladder when she reveals the chickens are scattered everywhere. Widow Brown then happily drags Ellie inside for tea, leaving Sutton all alone to chase the runaway poultry. Sutton is greeted by a ridiculous system quest to round up 12 runaway chickens, and he quickly snatches the first noisy bird while desperately trying to keep it still, realizing he has to do this the hard way since the widow is watching him like a hawk, before he slams the coop door shut and prepares himself for a long, exhausting afternoon, slowly stalking his next target as the system counter ticks up to 2, while Ellie and the old woman comfortably watch him run around like a madman from the window, until a wild hen flies directly into his face when he opens a wooden crate. Covered in feathers and holding 11 birds, our weary hero desperately searches for the very last target, only to look up and spot the final runaway perched high on the farmhouse roof, staring down at him with an incredibly smug, menacing glare that promises a difficult climb. Sutton reluctantly climbs up a rickety wooden ladder, wishing he could just use his mana to leap up, and tries to coax the stubborn bird down with his most gentle, non-threatening voice, only for the feathered menace to launch a vicious aerial assault directly at his face, sending our legendary hero crashing down to the dirt with an incredibly embarrassing thud, while the victorious chicken lands safely and begins to mockingly strut away from him. Refusing to lose, our hero immediately gives chase as the speedy bird dashes down the path, pursuing his elusive target deep into the woods until he is completely out of breath where the surprisingly fierce chicken turns around to defiantly stand its ground, prompting our exhausted hero to finally activate his mana to end this ridiculous game, leaving the smug bird frozen in absolute terror as it senses his overwhelming power. This stubborn chicken finally pecks at his hand, allowing him to grab it at last, and he sighs in relief as the system confirms he has successfully captured all 12 birds, but as he looks around, he realizes he has wandered near a strange stone monument, only to discover it is a grave for a fallen royal knight he cannot even remember, before the widow suddenly startles him by appearing right behind him in the quiet woods, explaining that the grave belongs to her beloved Jenny, who died fighting in the tyrant's war, which prompts our guilt-ridden hero to offer his deepest condolences for her tragic loss, silently wishing he had never played such a destructive role in that horrific conflict. Until Ellie catches up to interrupt their conversation, hoping the old woman is not bothering him, though the widow warmly reassures her before suggesting they buy some cheap livestock from a departing neighbor. Sutton shakes hands with the fierce widow, who sternly warns him to keep Ellie safe as they head back with their chickens, while our hero wonders if he reminds her of someone. Later that night, Sutton sits alone by candlelight to carefully study a detailed blueprint of the farm, until Ellie walks in to playfully tease him about working so hard after a long day, reminding him to wake up early to buy cows from Keller before anyone else beats them to it. She gently tells him not to stay up too late before heading off to her room, leaving our weary hero to snuff out the candle and rest his heavy eyes only to quickly drift off to sleep right there at the wooden table. Suddenly, a horrific nightmare of a burning victim screaming about his bloody past plagues his mind, forcing him to snap awake in absolute terror as cold sweat drips down his face. Sutton sits alone in the quiet cabin, deeply troubled by the lingering ghosts of his past, realizing that he must find a way to honor those who fell during his destructive wars, which drives him to sprint deep into the dark forest with a shovel in hand, leaping down a steep rocky cliffside while using small bursts of fire magic to guide his descent, before he blasts away a massive pile of rubble to uncover a hidden stone tomb, using a tiny, controlled flame on his fingertip to carefully carve a name into the lid, hoping that giving Gemel a proper burial will help preserve what little humanity he has left, until a massive stone golem quietly approaches from the shadows, holding a delicate glowing flower. This gentle, rocky creature holds out the beautiful blue blossom as a sign of peace, prompting our weary hero to reach out and accept the unexpected gift in the quiet cavern. Sutton carries the heavy stone coffin out of the cavern, thanking the gentle golem for its parting gift, before he begins digging a deep grave in the quiet forest to lay his fallen comrade to rest, carefully excavating the earth right next to the stone tomb while the scattered bones wait nearby, as our guilt-ridden hero gently lifts the skull of his former knight with absolute reverence, placing the remains inside the stone coffin before sliding the heavy lid shut with a solid click. He then uses his shovel to pack down the fresh soil over the newly buried tomb, leaving him to kneel in silent tribute before the headstone carved with the name of Gemel, where he remains for hours under the starry night sky to process his overwhelming grief, until the warm morning breeze finally breaks the silence and brings him back to reality. Adjusting his hat, our hero prepares to head out to buy those cows from Old Man Keller. Ellie walks out to the wooden fence where Ferdy the bull is quietly standing, hoping to find a quiet listener to share the heavy doubts weighing on her mind, as she softly admits to the beast that she is seriously considering leaving the farm behind, because she cannot shake the feeling that Sutton is hiding a dark connection to the eternal flame, leaving her deeply conflicted since he has been nothing but kind to her family. While the bull happily munches on the fresh grass she brought, she recalls the widow's warning, wondering if a former knight can truly abandon their bloody past when she cannot escape her own, though she quickly tries to defend him by listing all the good things he has done, only for Ferdy to greedily snatch another mouthful of food to interrupt her thoughts, leaving her to contemplate joining the widow's caravan to the capital to escape this lingering uncertainty. Ellie continues her quiet chat with Ferdy, realizing Sutton would never let her tag along on his dangerous path, so she watches him from afar and contemplates leaving the farm behind on her own, while Sutton heads out to a nearby ranch marked by a rustic wooden sign for Keller's place, where the eccentric owner offers him a bunch of free cows in exchange for a quick favor, explaining that his flooded mine is packed with valuable ore if our hero can just clear it out. When Sutton asks for some proper mining gear, the old man hilariously hands him a single metal bucket, warning him that he better know how to hold his breath under all that deep water before he unboards the dark entrance, while grumbling about his property value dropping if Sutton dies inside, prompting our hero to ask how much ore he needs to buy the entire property outright. This triggers a brand new system quest to gather 25 golden ore, leaving Sutton completely exhausted by these endless chores. Old Man Keller watches Sutton head into the flooded mine, confidently whispering that our hero is a goner, but Sutton just laughs at the ridiculous bucket while lighting up the dark cave with his fire magic, unleashing a massive wave of heat that instantly boils and evaporates the entire flooded cavern, leaving him standing in a dry, steaming tunnel with his empty bucket completely ready for action, as he scans the rocky walls until he spots the glowing veins of valuable gold ore, shattering the solid stone with a single powerful punch to easily harvest the precious metal, which he quickly tosses into his bucket until he has gathered more than enough to pay, before he casually strolls back out into the sunlight to shock the waiting old rancher. who greedily accepts the gold and happily hands over the entire herd of cows as promised, allowing our hero to ride off with his new livestock while quietly thanking his handy mana crystals. Ellie looks out the cabin window and spots Sutton returning on horseback with a massive dust cloud. Running outside in absolute disbelief at the massive herd of cows he managed to bring back, which prompts our hero to casually explain his grand plans to expand the barn and hire help, leaving her to marvel at how incredibly dedicated he is to building a peaceful life here. Inside the barn, Sutton feeds the livestock while planning to secure their future so they never starve, though he secretly intends to leave once they are safe to protect them from his dangerous past. Meanwhile, a fierce warrior with a red headband wanders into the charred ruins of the forest, searching for any sign of his missing comrade while growing increasingly suspicious of the destruction. He suddenly stops in his tracks upon discovering the freshly marked grave of his fallen ally, Gemel, gripping his massive weapon in pure rage as he wonders if John is responsible for this tragedy. Ben bursts through the cabin door in a complete panic, shouting for Sutton and Ellie, which immediately ruins their peaceful breakfast as they look up to see what is wrong, only for the boy to frantically explain that their aggressive rooster is trying to fight the bull, prompting a chaotic showdown outside as the massive beast charges headfirst into the flying menace, while the feathered terror swoops down from the sky with surprisingly vicious intent, meeting the charging bull head-on in a clash of pure unadulterated farmyard rage, until the tiny bird delivers a swift, embarrassing strike right to the beast's nose, landing squarely on top of the bull's head to assert his absolute dominance, before unleashing a relentless barrage of pecks that leaves the poor animal completely dazed, forcing our exhausted hero to sprint outside and finally put an end to this madness. Sutton grabs both the rowdy rooster and the terrified bull by their heads to establish his absolute authority, slamming them into the dirt while threatening to turn them into dinner if they ever fight again, leaving both of the humbled beasts trembling in fear as he demands to know if they understand, which immediately forces the stubborn animals to turn away from each other in complete silent defeat. Walking back to the cabin, our hero casually tells a curious Ben that the animals will behave now, admitting he threatened to eat them, which makes the relieved boy incredibly glad he stayed out of it before Sutton prepares his horse to head into town to sell cheese and buy building supplies, only for Ellie to suddenly stop him with the shocking news that she is leaving tonight. He stares back at her in silence, processing her sudden decision to join the departing caravan, quietly realizing it is probably for the best since his dark past only brings danger to those nearby. Sutton insists that if anyone should abandon the farm, it should be him since he has other options, but Ellie immediately backtracks, urging him to stay after all the hard work he put in, leaving our hero to prepare his horse while quietly accepting her decision to join the caravan. Before he tips his hat to offer a sincere, final farewell to the girl who saved him, Ellie watches him ride off into the distance, realizing this might be the last time they meet. Arriving in a dusty town, Sutton pulls up his horse outside the local saloon to do some business, and he steps inside the quiet establishment where a few locals are drowning their worries, prompting a familiar face to warmly greet him as John while asking how he has been, only for the bartender to cynically note that business only spikes around here after a brutal murder. Hoping to lift their spirits, Sutton slams down a wheel of Ellie's special cheese to sell. This bartender happily munches on the delicious cheese while the local sheriff strikes up a conversation with Sutton, apologizing for previously suspecting our hero of being involved in the recent string of violent attacks, before admitting that the constant dread of losing more townsfolk is starting to wear him down, confessing that the grim reality of his job is slowly eating away at his sanity, prompting Sutton to order another round while the lawman laments the horrific state of the recovered victims, which reminds our hero of the brutal battlefields he survived before finally choosing to walk away, explaining that he only retired from the military when the mental toll became too much to bear. Though he warns the sheriff that a quiet life is never as simple as it seems, leaving the lawman to take a heavy drink while offering some comforting words about finding peace. As Sutton stares ahead in grim silence, knowing his dark past will never truly let him escape, Ellie stands in her bedroom surrounded by packed bags, preparing to abandon the farm forever, when young Ben suddenly walks in holding a strange rolled-up sheet of paper, demanding to know why she has packed up all of their belongings in secret, which prompts her to explain that staying with John is far too dangerous for them. Ben fiercely defends their protector by revealing a secret blueprint for a massive house expansion, immediately gasping in shock as he realizes he just ruined John's big surprise, leaving Ellie to gently take the paper as she recognizes his late-night sketches, while the excited boy points out the custom rooms designed for each of them. This heartwarming revelation leaves her completely speechless, realizing how deeply he cares about their future, as Keller packs his wagon and officially hands the entire property over to our hero. Sutton asks Keller how he can so easily walk away from the only home he has ever known, but the greedy old rancher just laughs, boasting that 25 gold coins make saying goodbye incredibly easy, prompting our hero to hand over a valuable dagger for self-defense, but only on one strict condition, demanding that the old man protect Ellie and Ben if they end up joining his caravan. Later that night, Sutton hauls a cart of heavy lumber to begin building the new barn alone, only to hear a familiar voice calling out his name from the dark construction site, leaving him completely stunned to see that Ellie has not actually left with the departing travelers, as young Ben happily hammers away at the wooden beams to help build their new home. Ellie teasingly explains that she could not let him do all the heavy lifting without her supervision, while a smiling Sutton gently takes the hammer from the exhausted boy and sends them off to bed, Sutton watches Ellie and Ben head back to the cabin, quietly admitting he is glad they stayed even if repairing this creaky, rundown barn is going to be an absolute nightmare. But by the next morning, the massive wooden structure stands fully restored under the rising sun, prompting our exhausted hero to collapse onto the dirt just as a grim system notification pops up warning him that the apocalypse is drawing closer, while he laments how nothing is ever easy. Before young Ben starts frantically pounding on the bathroom door to demand his turn to wash up, complaining that Sutton has been soaking for hours, while our hero tries to enjoy his hard-earned peace. This impatient boy anxiously paces back and forth outside the locked door while waiting, threatening to wash up in the bowl's drinking water before finally stomping away in a huff, leaving a yawning, towel-clad Sutton to step out, hoping he never has to endure another freezing bath. Sutton steps out of the bath and mentions heading back to Keller's mine to find shower pipes, which leaves a very confused Ellie wondering what a shower is and why he bought a whole mine, before she stops him from starting another massive project to ask if he can deliver her cheese, prompting our hero to readily agree to one final side quest before he can finally relax as he rides back into the dusty town under the bright afternoon sun to complete the errand, entering the local tavern to let the bartender, Sven, know that the delivery has finally arrived. Sven happily accepts the cargo while offering his condolences about Ellie leaving with the departing caravan, but Sutton reveals she actually stayed behind to help build the barn before asking about George, only for the bartender to explain that George checked in because he felt watched at home, leaving our hero highly suspicious as they begin unloading the heavy cart of cheese in silence. Sutton asks if there is anything he can do for George, and Sven points him toward room 121, leaving the bartender to enjoy his free snack while our hero heads upstairs to check on his friends, strolling down the quiet, dimly lit hallway of the inn with an increasingly uneasy feeling, until he stops right outside the designated room and notices the door is already slightly ajar, prompting him to knock gently on the wooden frame while calling out for George. Receiving no answer, Sutton slowly pushes the door open to announce he brought some fresh cheese, only to step inside and immediately spot a circle of eerie green-flamed candles burning on the floor, which instantly triggers his survival instincts as his eyes widen in absolute horror at the sight, revealing poor George's lifeless body suspended in the air and possessed by a sinister green magic, forcing our hero to draw his weapon and demand that the hidden killers show themselves. Sutton analyzes the floating corpse, immediately realizing a dark mage or necromancer is behind this magic before he rushes back downstairs to warn Sven about the grim discovery in the room, grabbing the startled bartender by the arm to drag him up to the crime scene. Sven stares at his friend's levitating body in absolute horror as tears well up in his eyes, sobbing uncontrollably as he desperately wonders who could have committed such a heinous act, while the sheer brutality of the scene makes him feel physically sick to his stomach, prompting our hero to demand a list of recent guests while suggesting a total lockdown. This terrified bartender completely panics, arguing that locking the doors means trapping themselves inside with a killer. But as Sutton tries to steady him, Sven drops a massive, chilling revelation, pointing directly at the floating corpse to reveal that George was actually the town's sheriff. Sven warns Sutton that the townsfolk will blame him and begs him to flee immediately, but their quiet escape is interrupted by another guest asking about the sudden commotion, forcing Sven to deliver the grim news that Sheriff George has been killed. Panic quickly spreads throughout the entire establishment as the horrifying rumor reaches the patrons downstairs, prompting the angry mob to immediately point their fingers at Sutton as the prime suspect, who suddenly finds himself dodging a barrage of flying plates and shattered glass sliding across the wooden floor to avoid getting hit by the heavy wooden furniture, before he quickly flips a nearby table to shield himself from the relentless onslaught. Armed with knives and clubs, the furious townsfolk charge forward to drive our hero out, only for Sutton to effortlessly catch the lead attacker's wrist and stop the blade cold. Our hero warns the angry mob that he does not want to cause any unnecessary bloodshed, but he immediately unleashes a brutal kick to keep the rest of the attackers at bay, prompting a crazed thug to lunge forward with a sharp blade aimed straight for his chest, only for our boy to slam the attacker face first into the floor with bone-shattering force. Sutton quickly dashes out of the tavern before the rest of the mob can corner him, drawing the attention of some heavily armed mercenaries who wonder if they should join the fight until their burly leader recognizes our hero as the newcomer who recently rubbed him the wrong way, lying to a suspicious elder that they were simply trying to exterminate a pesky rat upstairs. This explanation fails to convince the old man, who senses there is a much darker truth hidden as a mysterious shadow silently slips away into the cold darkness of the alleyway. This angry mob bursts outside only to find that Sutton has already vanished into thin air, prompting them to chase after a trail of dust as he speeds away on horseback, while our hero curses his terrible luck for getting framed for a murder he did not commit, as the furious posse hot on his heels screams for blood and refuses to let him escape. Knowing he cannot lead this angry mob back to the farm, Sutton desperately searches for a distraction, quickly leaping off his horse next to a massive wooden water barrel outside the local bathhouse, where he channels a burst of intense fire magic directly into his bare hands, before plunging his blazing fists into the cold water to trigger a violent thermal reaction. A massive explosion of blinding steam erupts into the street, completely engulfing the oncoming riders, leaving the disoriented pursuers to choke on the thick mist while our hero slips away unnoticed. Sutton arrives back at the farm under the cover of night, leaving his horse outside before he bursts through the cabin door looking completely exhausted and on edge, which immediately startles Ellie and Ben as they quietly enjoy their dinner together, prompting our hero to urgently warn them that they need to get ready to leave, as he quickly gathers his weapons while explaining that another murder has just occurred, revealing that the mysterious killer managed to infiltrate the inn and take out Sheriff George. This terrifying news leaving young Ben completely shaken, realizing no one in town is safe anymore. But Sutton warns that the angry mob blames him and orders them into the bomb shelter. Though Ellie fiercely refuses to run, declaring she will stand and protect their home alongside him, only for our stubborn hero to insist she stay hidden to keep the boy safe. Ben stubbornly plops down on the floor, insisting he is strong enough to stand and fight alongside them. But our hero immediately grabs the protesting boy to force him into the safety of the shelter, carrying the squirming kid down the wooden steps while he desperately demands to be let go. Before Sutton gently sets him down and explains that real combat is far too dangerous for a child. Ordering the boy to stay put, our hero heads back up to face the oncoming storm alone, which leaves a furious Ben to kick a nearby shovel in frustration over being left behind, only to realize the tool is his ticket out since the ceiling is not very deep. While outside, the angry mob arrives at the cabin with torches, screaming for blood. Sutton and Ellie stand side by side with weapons drawn, ready to defend their home to the death, as our hero demands to know if they really intend to act as judge, jury, and executioner. This furious mob screams accusations, calling Sutton a monster and blaming him and Ellie for the town's troubles, but our hero stands his ground, warning them that he only came here to retire in peace, making it clear that if they choose to force his hand, the consequences are entirely on them. Though the arrogant townsfolk refuse to back down, waving their makeshift weapons and shouting empty threats, Sutton gently tells Ellie to wait inside, but she fiercely refuses to let him fight this battle alone, prompting the smug mob leader to mock their loyalty while preparing to take them both down together, seeing this as the perfect chance to test Ellie's newly acquired self-defense skills in a real fight. Before the bearded thug suddenly lunges forward, swinging a heavy leather whip directly at our hero's head, only for Sutton to effortlessly catch the weapon midair with a sharp, echoing crack, yanking the leather cord to send the screaming attacker flying backward onto the hard dirt. Sutton wastes no time delivering a brutal strike to the first attacker, knocking him out cold, which sends the rest of the mob scrambling as they realize they are hopelessly outmatched. But a stubborn thug tries to catch Ellie off guard by lunging at her with a whip, only for her to instantly block the strike and grab the weapon with perfect precision before she unleashes a devastating kick that sends the arrogant attacker folding in half. Meanwhile, a sneaky sniper tries to take Sutton out from a distance by throwing a spear, though our hero casually catches the flying weapon midair without even looking, turning the projectile right back on his attacker with a swift and decisive counterstrike, instantly following it up with a powerful kick to send the defeated mercenary flying backward, leaving the terrified survivors to scream in panic as they quickly realize they should have stayed home. One of the zealots lunges forward with a flaming torch, but Sutton easily blocks the strike, allowing Ellie to quickly slip past and slash another attacker with her sharp blade. As the chaotic skirmish intensifies under the dark night sky with enemies surrounding them, though Ellie remains completely focused, deflecting a heavy whip with her sword in one swift motion. Another thug tries to corner her near the campfire, but she gracefully dodges his clumsy strike, slicing him down while silently thanking Sutton for advising her to carry a second dagger, but a sneaky zealot suddenly blindsides her from behind with a blazing torch, leaving her completely wide open as she gasps in sudden horror at the impending strike. Fortunately, Sutton rushes in and catches the burning wood with his bare hand to shield her, immediately unleashing a brutal counterpunch that sends the cowardly attacker crashing into the dirt. Ellie breathes a sigh of relief and thanks her savior, who casually smiles and tells her it was nothing, but the angry mob just keeps coming, chanting for blood as Sutton realizes they are dangerously outnumbered, prompting another wave of furious villagers to charge forward with pitchforks and clubs raised high, only for the ground beneath their feet to suddenly give way with a loud, splintering crack. Several attackers plunge headfirst into deep pitfall traps, completely halting their aggressive advance in an instant. Sutton stares in absolute bewilderment, knowing for a fact these massive holes were not here when he arrived, while the remaining survivors halt in terror, accusing our hero of using dark magic to curse them, until a loud, thunderous moo echoes across the farm as a massive beast charges onto the battlefield, revealing young Ben riding their angry bull Ferdy to absolutely wreck the startled invaders with pure animal power, closely followed by a savage chicken that swoops down to peck the remaining zealots into a total panic. This savage chicken relentlessly pecks a terrified thug's head, driving the mob into absolute chaos, while Ben and Ferdy charge through the crowd to completely scatter the remaining attackers, leaving our hero to finish off the last standing thug while Ellie smiles in relief, before Sutton lets out a sharp, commanding whistle to halt the entire chaotic battlefield. Calling for an immediate ceasefire, he warns the bruised mob that fighting until dawn is completely pointless, arguing that Sheriff George would never want his beloved town to descend into lawless violence, which means they need to go home and protect their families from the real killer. Although a skeptical villager doubts his words, Sutton points out that Sven can easily vouch for him, insisting that he only wants to help the community and find justice for the fallen sheriff, as he warns them that their simple farm tools stand absolutely no chance against a dark mage. Sutton advises the bruised mob to head back home and hunker down for their own safety, prompting one of the villagers to drop his weapon and admit that staying outside is too dangerous, while another reminds the crowd that the late sheriff always respected the law. Realizing they were wrong, the villagers slowly disperse into the quiet night to protect their families, unaware that the mercenary leader is watching from the shadows, calling our hero a sly dog. By the next morning, Sut reflects on the chaotic night while sitting high above the farm, deciding it is finally time to examine a dangerous mage book he has been avoiding, hoping to find a powerful spell that can protect Ellie and Ben in his absence. As he carefully channels a spark of fire magic to bypass the book's security measures, praying the previous owner did not rig the ancient tome to explode in his face, Sutton successfully unlocks the book's clasp with a spark of fire magic, only to realize it is actually a personal journal detailing a past adventure starting with a description of a grand tower that has since been completely ruined. As the writer recalls their time studying alongside other mages at the academy, suddenly, their peaceful research was cancelled in favor of developing a highly dangerous forbidden spell, leaving the writer to question why anyone would seek such devastating, world-ending power. Until their master successfully unlocked the spell, unleashing a terrifying vortex of blue energy, which prompted a group of greedy mages to demand the secret for themselves. When the master refused, the attackers slaughtered everyone in the tower, though the writer barely escaped, prompting Sutton to realize this tragedy sparked the devastating Third Mage War over pure greed. This journal explains how Tower Master Kelvis unleashed a forbidden spell to destroy the entire academy, forcing the surviving writer to fake their death and continue their research deep inside mountain caves where they waited in isolation for a year, hoping their master would eventually return. But as bloody battles raged over the ruins, food supplies dwindled and forced them to farm. Lacking sunlight inside the dark cavern, the desperate researcher tried using glowing mana stones instead, only to shatter dozens of precious gems in a series of failed, exhausting experiments, until they successfully engineered a unique flower that directly absorbs mana to thrive in pitch blackness. Sutton suddenly pauses, realizing these strange plants sound identical to the ones Grimm gifted him, though his excitement fades when he flips the page only to find the rest completely unreadable, leaving him to wonder if the writer was attacked while connecting the tower to local rumors. Sutton wonders if the ruthless mercenary group is actually hunting for that ancient, forbidden spell, knowing all too well that greedy killers would not hesitate to slaughter innocents for that kind of power, which means he must keep a close eye on them to ensure the magic remains buried. Before a sudden, tense rattling at the cabin door puts everyone inside on high alert. Ellie immediately grabs her blade to protect young Ben, her heart pounding as she prepares for another attack, only for Sutton to casually swing the door open with a cheerful morning greeting. But her blade instantly flies past his face, thunking deep into the wooden doorframe, leaving a horrified Ellie to gasp in shock as she realizes she almost skewered her protector. Our hero quickly calms her down, explaining that being paranoid is completely justified after last night's chaos, as he gently takes her weapon and promises that no one will ever threaten their family again. Ben tearfully questions how the sheriff could die, but Sutton gently reminds him that nobody is truly invincible before a sudden, loud knocking at the front door instantly cuts their emotional conversation short, prompting our hero to cautiously open the door while Ellie and Ben watch from a safe distance only to find Gottfried the merchant standing outside, looking incredibly relieved to see Sutton alive and well. This cheerful merchant reveals he brought all the requested supplies, along with a mysterious new traveling companion, introducing the tall stranger as Thomas Little, who apparently traveled all this way just to taste their famous cheese, though Sutton remains slightly guarded as he sizes up this unexpected visitor under the bright morning sun, before the two men lock eyes and share a firm, testing handshake that hints at hidden strength. Meanwhile, Gottfried tries to present some fine capital silk to Ellie, mistakenly calling her Sutton's wife, which prompts Thomas to tease our hero about his missus, while Sutton quickly shuts down the assumption. Ellie steps outside to ask if everything is all right, noticing the heavy tension in the air, but Sutton quickly reassures her while Thomas playfully compares our hero to a growling guard dog, prompting the smooth-talking traveler to step forward and politely introduce himself to the young lady, before he boldly kisses her hand, praising her famous cheese while Sutton watches with pure annoyance, explaining that he traveled from far away specifically to look for some honest farm work, only for Sutton to instantly shut down the job offer before Ellie can even finish speaking, though Thomas persists by asking if they need help with renovations like Ellie's new room, which causes young Ben to gasp in terror, realizing he accidentally leaked their private plans as our hero gently calms the boy down while keeping his sharp gaze locked on Thomas, finally offering to show their suspicious guest around the barn to defuse the situation. Gottfried distracts Ellie by asking to see her new cheeses, allowing the two men to slip away as they head inside the quiet barn to finally have their tense, private conversation, where Thomas immediately confronts our hero about hiding out on a simple farm, prompting Sutton to ignite a threatening flame as he warns that anyone leaking his location will pay, but Thomas quickly defends himself, pointing out that selling holy heavenly cheese was a dead giveaway, explaining that the entire ecclesia has been searching for him since he vanished into the night, especially since he left nothing but a lazy retirement note on his grand imperial throne. Though Sutton coldly warns him that he cannot run from his past as the eternal flame before Thomas asks if Ellie and the boy actually know the truth about his dark identity, leaving our hero to extinguish his fire and admit that his past self was nothing but a monster. Thomas questions why John, who is worshipped by half the world, would ever run from his legendary status, but Sutton quietly admits that he simply could not bear to be that ruthless monster any longer. warning Thomas that any unwanted visitors from the ecclesia will be met with absolute fiery destruction, before casually pointing his guest toward a pile of hay as his designated bed for the night. Sutton then shifts the conversation to ask about the state of his companion's prosthetic arm, which Thomas proudly reveals was built to our hero's exact, highly advanced design specifications, prompting Sutton to inspect the metal limb and warn him not to accidentally explode any farm animals. Since he expects his new guest to master the art of milking cows to earn his keep, Thomas can only sigh in disbelief as he stares down a very unimpressed-looking cow, grudgingly picking up a broom to start his chores while Sutton continues studying his mysterious book. Thomas struggles miserably with milking a cow while Sutton effortlessly demonstrates how it is done, and soon finds himself sweating over tedious field chores under our hero's watchful eye, prompting Ellie to approach the fence and ask how the two men actually know each other, which leads Sutton to admit that Thomas is a trusted brother-in-arms who saved his life repeatedly, even if the former soldier has absolutely no idea how to handle basic farm work. Wiping sweat from his brow, the exhausted traveler asks if they plan on helping anytime soon, only for Ellie to tease him while Sutton reminds him that he is not paid to chat, eliciting a playful salute from the lieutenant that quickly gets shut down by his former commander, before Ellie asks if he was a knight, learning instead that Thomas is a highly skilled duelist. This prompt causes the hardworking guest to complain about Sutton giving away his secret class for free. Ellie asks Thomas if he retired from his past life just like Sutton did, and the traveler jokingly agrees while admitting he almost misses the legendary eternal flame, before his eyes suddenly lock onto the faint, painful scars lining Ellie's arms, prompting Sutton to quickly step in and warn his guest against asking dangerous questions, which causes a sudden heavy silence to fall over the young woman as she looks down. As she quietly admits she has absolutely no reason to miss his old unit, Thomas is completely stunned by this revelation, demanding to know if Sutton's old squad caused her trauma, leaving our guilty hero to suggest they take their tense conversation elsewhere. Heading deep into the woods, Thomas confronts his former commander about keeping such massive secrets, pointing out that Sutton is no longer fighting for survival, but choosing to live a lie. Thomas suddenly lunges forward with a flaming fist, shouting that his commander knows absolutely nothing about Ellie's painful past. But Sutton easily blocks the fiery strike with his prosthetic arm, while calmly agreeing with the accusation before throwing the traveler back with a swift counter, reminding Thomas that he still knows him perfectly, which only makes the frustrated duelist recover his footing against a nearby tree to catch his breath, using a sudden burst of fire magic from his hands to launch himself high into the air. As he lands gracefully on the forest floor while our hero warily prepares for the next strike, suddenly drawing his blade, Thomas clashes directly with Sutton in a high-speed test of pure swordsmanship, only for the traveler to immediately ignite his fist again for a devastating, close-range magical blow, prompting Sutton to quickly activate the hidden mechanisms inside his highly advanced prosthetic arm, unleashing a blinding flash of blue energy that leaves the shocked duelist completely wide-eyed in disbelief. Thomas taunts Sutton for slipping, claiming he could never even touch his former commander in the past, but the fiery duelist boasts that he has changed as he unleashes a massive wave of flames, questioning if Sutton ever comprehends the immense responsibility and political chaos left behind by his sudden retirement, warning that endless wars will inevitably break out once the world realizes the legendary hero is truly gone. As he laments the absolute trail of destruction their past campaigns left in their wake, wondering if the countless innocent lives lost in the name of peace were actually worth the sacrifice, while Sutton silently recalls how he once viewed this entire world as nothing more than a game, treating everyone around him as mere disposable NPCs because of his unique player system, until the crushing realization hits him that his own ruthless actions directly caused the destruction of Ellie's village, leaving him to carry the guilt of her grandmother's death as Thomas fiercely demands he confess the truth. This duelist argues that Ellie has every right to kill the eternal flame, though Sutton remains completely unfazed, dodging backward as the former commander claims his opponent still does not understand the gravity of the situation, because building a peaceful life on a foundation of lies is only hurting the girl further, especially since a ruthless killer like him could never actually be considered a normal person. Enraged by the harsh truth, Sutton's eyes flare with demonic red light as he screams in fury, unleashing a violent shockwave of fire while confessing to the countless lives he took without hesitation, recalling how his initial horror quickly faded until slaughtering innocents felt as mundane as eating breakfast, leaving him to wonder how he could ever explain such monstrous, blood-soaked sins to anyone else. This traveler warns that Ellie will inevitably discover his identity, making the betrayal worse if he stays silent, before lunging forward to demand that his commander finally prove he views people as actual human beings. Thomas presses his blade forward, demanding that Sutton finally treat Ellie like a real person with her own choices, pointing out that she deserves to know the truth, regardless of how much it might hurt him. Sutton desperately argues that revealing his past will only break her heart, insisting he only wants to protect her. But Thomas firmly counters that some dark secrets simply cannot remain buried forever. Relenting at last, our hero extinguishes his blazing aura as the heavy tension begins to fade, allowing his old comrade to place a reassuring hand on his shoulder and urge him to stand tall. though Sutton quietly admits he needs just a little more time before confessing his sins, which only prompts the traveler to warn him that delaying the truth will make the fallout worse. Our hero explains his plan to secure their safety first, intending to leave the farm once they're cared for, leaving Thomas to reluctantly agree while warning him not to make any more tragic mistakes. Thomas decides it is time to head back to the farm, calling Sutton by his real name. While back at the barn, young Ben struggles to carry a massive sack of chicken feed, only for the bottom of the bag to suddenly rip open and spill its contents before a strong, gloved hand quickly grabs the sack to keep it from falling, revealing Thomas, who happily offers to carry the heavy load to help out around the farm, prompting the excited boy to promise his new hero a fresh glass of milk in return. As Sutton and Ellie watch the heartwarming interaction from the safety of the barn doorway, leading Ellie to ask if something is bothering him as he stares at their guest, though our hero simply admits that he has never been a big fan of sudden surprises. Soon, Thomas proudly announces that all the chores are finished in record time as they gather inside. Sutton wastes no time putting his old comrade to work, calling Thomas over for a brand new task, which turns out to be helping our hero build a brand new indoor bathroom for the family, prompting the skeptical duelist to follow him outside while questioning if this renovation is actually necessary, only for Sutton to lay out a massive plan involving heavy digging, piping, and cellar renovations, leaving Thomas to laugh off his former commander's stubborn, project-obsessed perfectionism as Ellie watches them, though the young woman cannot help but smile at how easily the two men banter together, before young Ben runs up with a chicken to enthusiastically declare his approval of their new guest. Soon, the peaceful atmosphere is shattered by the sound of heavy stone cracking open in the cellar, where Thomas is forced to use his explosive fire magic to blast through solid rock while cursing himself before angrily screaming about his former commander's stupid face with every exhausting strike. Thomas continues to fume in the cellar, unleashing his fiery magic while cursing his former commander's audacity, complaining that Sutton has absolutely no right to judge him after everything they did in the past, before he begrudgingly uses his intense heat to start shaping the heavy metal pipes for the plumbing, only to realize just how tedious and exhausting this massive renovation project is actually going to be, leaving the frustrated duelist to manually bend the burning metal while dreading the miles of piping left to go, as he spends hours hammering and welding the materials together deep inside the dark, dusty cavern, before tossing another finished piece onto the growing pile with an exhausted, echoing clang. Meanwhile, Ellie brings a refreshing drink to Sutton as he works inside a massive, hand-dug trench, prompting Thomas to arrive carrying a heavy load of completed pipes, only to find them relaxing together, revealing the incredibly complex wooden scaffolding and irrigation system they have managed to construct for the farm. Thomas waves from the deep trench as Sutton walks off to continue his obsessive digging, leaving Ellie completely baffled by their guest's sudden, intense work ethic as Thomas climbs out, admitting that he also has absolutely no idea what crazy project his former commander is planning, though the traveler notes that Sutton has always loved digging himself into inescapable metaphorical holes, before gently reminding her that Sutton is a good man whose secrets are his own to share. Ellie then offers the hardworking guest some breakfast and refreshments to help him get through the day, which transitions the scene back to the quiet farmhouse as the hot sun beats down outside, where Ellie sits lost in deep thought, clearly worried about the heavy secrets Sutton is keeping, while young Ben greedily gulps down a drink at the table, completely exhausted from his chores, complaining that Sutton has been missing for 2 whole days and leaving them with all the work. Sutton finally finishes stacking the heavy wooden pipes for his massive irrigation project, carefully tweaking the seams to ensure everything is perfectly aligned before heading back. As night falls over the quiet farmhouse under a clear crescent moon, stepping quietly inside, our hero spots young Ben fast asleep at the dinner table, realizing with a warm smile that Ellie left a fresh plate of food out for him, before he gently drapes a blanket over the boy to keep him comfortable. Trying to sneak away with his dinner to let the kid rest, his heavy boot suddenly presses down on a loud, creaking floorboard, which instantly wakes the startled boy, who excitedly demands to know where he has been, leaving our hero completely stunned as he realizes just how long he was actually gone. Ben continues to complain about the 2-day absence while Ellie watches the tense reunion unfold, before Thomas suddenly bursts through the door to announce he finished prepping the plumbing holes, leaving our embarrassed hero to sheepishly apologize for losing track of time during his obsessive work. As he quickly heads back outside to finish setting up the brand new bathroom system, Thomas reassures a worried Ellie that her quiet guardian just needs some space to sort things out, while Sutton focuses all his remaining energy on tightening the heavy metal valves outside, waiting anxiously as the newly installed showerhead begins to sputter with the first drops of water, until a steady, refreshing stream of clean water finally bursts forth in a massive success. Thrilled by his achievement, our hero happily calls out for Ellie to witness his completed masterpiece, only to pause as he spots her talking quietly with Thomas down on the ground below. Sutton stands under the running water, quietly admitting to himself that he is only stalling his inevitable departure, when a loud voice suddenly echoes across the yard as an energetic stranger approaches the farmhouse, prompting our hero to step outside and greet the overly enthusiastic traveler waiting on the porch, though Sutton immediately demands to know if this uninvited guest is here to cause trouble regarding the recent murders. Terrified by the cold reception, the visitor quickly explains that his adventuring guild wants to hire him, explaining that they need a powerful fighter to help them safely navigate a newly discovered route, which turns out to be an ancient mage tower holding a valuable heirloom for a wealthy noble. While Ellie and her companion watch the tense negotiation unfold with deep concern from the fence, this recruiter warns that the ruins are incredibly dangerous and filled with deadly, unpredictable traps, but Sutton instantly accepts the job, eager for any excuse to finally leave the peaceful farm behind. As Sutton immediately packs his bags, Ellie urges him to take a much-needed break. But our hero refuses, explaining that he is joining the Red Coral adventuring team for a while because he secretly suspects these shady vagabonds are directly connected to the recent brutal murders, leaving the terrified girl to beg him to stay, fearing he will only end up dead, though Sutton casually brushes off her concerns by reminding her that he is incredibly difficult to kill. Ellie desperately tries to hold him back, pointing out the constant danger still lurking around their village. Yet the stubborn warrior simply walks away, assuring her that Thomas is more than capable of protecting her, prompting her to angrily yell that he is just doing what he does best by running away, which instantly stops our hero in his tracks as a flash of genuine anger crosses his face. Standing her ground, Ellie looks him dead in the eye and coldly repeats her harsh accusation. Ellie confronts Sutton, demanding to know why he feels obligated to solve everyone's problems alone. While our hero weakly argues that leaving the farm is the only way to keep them safe, prompting Ellie to gently adjust his collar, while reminding him that running a business requires his presence, warning him that he cannot simply run off to play the vigilante whenever he feels like it, though her frustration quickly softens into a desperate plea for him to return home safely. Turning toward the door, Sutton coldly mutters that the kids will be fine with Thomas around, which only hurts Ellie further as she desperately insists that their guest cannot replace him. Sutton offers a sad, cynical smile, quietly suggesting they might actually be better off that way, leaving the tearful girl completely heartbroken as he finally steps out into the bright morning light, only for our hero to suddenly freeze on the porch as something unexpected catches his attention. Ellie confronts Sutton, demanding to know why he is suddenly abandoning the farm and everyone on it, tears streaming down her face as she reminds him of his promise to help her, clenching her scarred arm while recalling how he vowed to teach her how to fight, only to realize that he still views her and her family as complete strangers, which breaks her heart after finally feeling like she had a real partner in her life, leaving her to desperately beg him to be selfish and stay at the farm just for her. But our hero can only offer a silent, pained look as he hears her desperate plea. Stealing his resolve, Sutton pulls down his hat and steps out the door without looking back, ignoring her final warning to think about his choices as he prepares his horse to leave, quietly admitting to himself that while this departure hurts, it is the only way to protect them. Sutton rides away from the farm while young Ben calls out to ask when he will return, promising the boy that he will bring back a satchel full of money for them, before he meets up with the Red Coral adventuring team and immediately cuts off their introductions, urging the group to stop wasting daylight and head straight toward the dangerous ruins, which prompts a skeptical writer named Sandra to question if hiring this cold stranger was a mistake, though Reese eagerly promises they will all be swimming in coin once they retrieve the heirloom, leaving another quiet companion to apologize for their leader's annoying, non-stop chatter. As the others whisper about the rumors of this mysterious farmer's terrifying, village-slaying strength, while their eccentric healer instantly swoons over the brooding warrior, hoping he is still single, until Sutton finally snaps and coldly reminds the entire crew that they are not friends. Catherine continues to swoon openly, completely enamored by Sutton's cold and intimidating demeanor, while the party gallops through the whipping winds as they ride toward their dangerous destination, prompting our hero to sharply warn them that this is strictly a one-time job, which instantly terrifies their nervous leader into promising they will never bother his farm again, leaving the rest of the crew to watch in absolute disbelief at the sudden submission, though a bitter mercenary named Grimes merely scoffs at their new companion's arrogant attitude. Later that night, the group gathers around a campfire to discuss their proximity to the ruins, where Catherine tries to offer Sutton some of her cooking only to get coldly rejected, before she eagerly watches him pull out a simple homemade meal of his own only to mistake his sandwich for a witch and fall even deeper in love with him. As they halt near the ruins, Reese explains that beasts have taken over the area, which prompts our skeptical hero to question why he was specifically chosen for this dangerous job, leaving Sutton completely caught off guard as he stares silently into the crackling campfire, before he sternly demands to know exactly who else is joining this shady expedition. This nervous recruiter stammers under the intense pressure, completely unable to give a straight answer, until heavy, deliberate footsteps suddenly echo through the dark woods toward their campsite, revealing a massive, blindfolded warrior and a hooded companion flanked by two snarling wolves, prompting our hero to immediately recognize the newcomers as his old acquaintances, Haver and Rosalie. Haver smugly greets the warrior, claiming they knew he would be a perfect asset for this hunt, which only makes Sutton bitterly regret ignoring Ellie's warnings about trusting these dangerous hooligans. Grimes smugly taunts Sutton about his legendary shield, daring him to show it off right now, but our hero coldly warns the arrogant mercenary that it would be the last thing he ever sees, prompting their nervous leader to quickly step in and pull his aggressive companion back before things escalate, until Haver towers over Sutton with a dark threat, bringing up what he did to their mutual acquaintance before casually brushing the tension aside to focus on the dangerous gnolls waiting for them in the ruins. Reese quickly breaks the ice by enthusiastically listing their highly balanced party composition to boost group morale, though Sutton remains completely unimpressed and immediately demands to know how the loot will be divided, which prompts the leader to explain that everything besides the client's heirloom will be split 8 ways, leaving Haver to loudly complain about sharing the spoils when he could easily clear the ruins alone, only for Sutton to quietly offer to make it a six-way split by eliminating the dead weight. Reese quickly jumps between the two men, desperately pleading for everyone to cooperate as a team, but Haver merely laughs it off as a joke before heading toward the campfire for food, which prompts an angry Rosalie to confront Sutton about a past incident involving stolen livestock, screaming that they were starving while accusing him of being just another greedy royal knight. Haver sharply cuts her off with a single word, instantly silencing her furious outburst. Reminding his companion that they cannot afford to provoke a sleeping giant right now, forcing the bitter woman to back down while her leader feeds his loyal wolves, leaving our hero highly suspicious of why his old enemies are acting so incredibly peaceful. Their energetic leader happily breaks the tension by announcing a long 4-hour hike tomorrow, though Catherine's immediate attempt to invite Sutton to her tent is met with a cold rejection. Haver casually offers Sutton some food, but our hero demands to know their true motives as the smug warrior claims he only joined this hunt for some quick, easy coin, before mockingly pointing out that Sutton is doing a pretty terrible job at playing a simple farmer, which is a massive step down from his legendary past as a feared royal knight. Sutton glares from beneath his hat, coldly suggesting they take this conversation away from the camp, leaving Haver to eagerly accept the invitation to have a private chat in the woods. Once they are alone under the dark canopy, Sutton demands to know if they want his shield, only for Haver to laughingly ask his companion if they should settle for such a small prize. While Rosalie reveals they can get a much bigger bounty for a mage who escaped the eternal flame, instantly freezing our hero in shock as he realizes they are actually hunting down young Ellie. Sutton defends his past by stating he fought for the Emperor of Lepera as a loyal knight, but Haver tells him to drop the axe since they both despise the eternal flame, explaining that his own father was a mage who suffered when the Empire destroyed their homeland, which left him wandering the scorched wilderness as a starving orphan forced to scrounge for scraps, until Rosalie joined his desperate struggle and they both became branded as outlaws for stealing food. Although his companion still hates mages, Haver believes Sutton's legendary strength is exactly what they need, especially since royal knights are notoriously difficult to put down for good, prompting the smug mercenary to extend his hand and offer our hero a temporary truce, though Sutton merely stares at the offering and coldly asks why he should not just kill him. Haver simply laughs, warning that a runner is already prepared to bring imperial wrath down on Fairford if he dies. Extending his hand, Haver smugly urges Sutton to shake on their temporary alliance, while our hero secretly contemplates killing him on the spot to protect his identity, but doing so would mean running away again, proving Ellie's harsh words completely right. So he decides to play along until he can track down their runner and eliminate everyone, finally shaking Haver's hand while coldly reminding him that this does not make them allies. Haver casually brushes off their past beef before leading the group toward the ancient ruins. This next morning, the party finally arrives at the massive, crumbling stone structure, only to find a pack of vicious gnolls blocking the entrance to the underground chambers, prompting Reese to warn everyone about potential traps and deadly thorn bears lurking inside, which instantly panics Rosalie until Haver smugly reminds her they have a legendary knight with them. Reese confidently rallies the group, claiming a dozen gnolls will be easy work for their party, but Haver suddenly halts the group, pointing out something highly unusual happening up ahead. As they watch the nocturnal beasts dragging meat, suggesting a powerful matriarch is leading them, prompting Sutton to mock their incompetent ranger, which only irritates the nervous mercenaries even more. Before they can even formulate a plan, their reckless leader idiotically charges forward with a loud shout, instantly drawing a deadly arrow that narrowly grazes his face as he rushes in, alerting the entire pack of vicious gnolls who immediately prepare to rain down fire, leaving the panicked party to scramble for cover as a massive volley of arrows flies toward them, while the others desperately duck behind the crumbling stone walls to save their own skins. Our hero leaps forward to effortlessly deflect the incoming projectiles with his blade. This battle begins as a gnoll is struck down, howling in agony from the sudden counterattack, while their injured leader panics when Catherine prepares to treat his fresh arrow wound, screaming in absolute agony as she ruthlessly rips the projectile straight out of his chest, before the terrified man desperately tries to direct his chaotic party toward the tower entrance, only for the arrogant Grimes to ignore his orders and charge headfirst into the fray, prompting our cold hero to dismissively tell the others to let the reckless mercenary die, which instantly infuriates Rosalie as she demands that Sutton actually do his job, though Sutton merely shrugs her off while the rest of the party watches in disbelief, as Grimes leaps into the horde alongside Haver's wolves to brutally crush the beasts. Unleashing a savage assault to prove he does not need a legendary knight's help, arrows rain down as the vicious gnolls launch a coordinated assault against the invading party, but Grimes instantly retaliates by unleashing a fiery slash that tears right through a beast, prompting the cocky mercenary to mockingly warn Haver to keep his guard up during the chaos, only for the giant warrior to laughingly dismiss the threat while brutally overpowering another monster. While Sutton silently watches the display, unimpressed by Haver's flashy beast-taming skills as he looks around searching for the rest of their companions who are currently surrounded by the howling horde. Though our hero quickly realizes that the mercenaries are actually holding their own quite well, executing perfectly synchronized maneuvers to easily deflect arrows and strike down their monstrous targets. which triggers a massive, earth-shattering explosion of dust and debris that completely clears the battlefield, leaving aboard Sutton to question why they even bothered hiring him as another beast lunges. Rosalie steps in to save a companion, while Sutton coldly refuses to protect a bunch of murderers, prompting Grimes to brutally slash his attackers while declaring they will never be even with our hero. Before the party spots a hidden entrance and quickly retreats deeper into the crumbling stone ruins, leaving the howling beast behind as their nervous leader desperately tries to keep everyone moving, which only makes Rosalie sigh in frustration while Sutton silently observes their highly dysfunctional group. Reese enthusiastically praises their teamwork, pointing out the massive iron doors that lead to the tower entrance. Though Sutton remains highly skeptical and questions why their ranger is not scouting the dangerous path ahead, only to watch in disgust as Catherine happily harvests creepy monster parts for her bizarre recipes. Ordering the vanguard to lead the way, the leader pushes the group forward into the dark corridor as our hero suddenly realizes they are being used as bait for the deadly thorn bears inside. Reese confidently claims they can handle anything, while Sutton notes that even Haver sees through their reckless plan, prompting the nervous leader to mockingly tell our hero to stay back and let him lead only for the massive iron doors to creak open, revealing a dark, silent hall with no immediate threats, which leads Reese to foolishly declare the area completely safe as the rest of the party cautiously enters. Searching the ruined chamber for a hidden tunnel while Sutton remains highly skeptical of their surroundings until Catherine begins digging through some loose rubble, only to trigger a sudden collapse of heavy stones, revealing a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at them from the pitch-black darkness, before a massive, snarling gnoll matriarch bursts out and sends the terrified mercenaries into an absolute panic, unleashing a devastating shockwave that instantly scatters the disorganized group across the stone floor, though the arrogant Grimes merely smiles at the monstrous threat, eagerly claiming the beast as his next target. Reese frantically barks orders for the party to cover Catherine while the rest charge the massive beast, but the giant gnoll matriarch immediately swats a mercenary away with a single devastating swing, sending him flying as Haver eagerly unleashes his loyal wolves to join the chaotic fray, though the nervous mercenaries still struggle to trust the giant warrior's reckless combat tactics, leaving Haver to laughingly remind them of his track record while leaping back into battle. Sutton silently watches the madness unfold, deciding to focus solely on clearing a path to escape, yet he still steps in to block a crushing blow from the monster's massive claws, creating a perfect opening for Rosalie to leap forward and strike the distracted beast, as she delivers a swift, blinding slash right across the howling monster's face, which prompts Haver to mockingly praise our hero's incredible strength while the others watch in disbelief. An older mercenary lands a powerful spear strike, delivering a heavy blow to the giant beast, sending the massive monster crashing onto the stone floor with a loud thud. Haver laughs maniacally as his wolves and the other mercenaries ruthlessly pile onto the fallen creature, but Rosalie suddenly freezes in sheer panic as a strange, echoing sound fills the chamber, prompting Sutton to realize that the howling matriarch is actually calling for immediate backup, before a fresh wave of vicious gnolls violently shatters the stained glass windows above them. Their terrified leader screams for their mages to hurry up and unlock the escape route. Although the glowing rune key fails to activate the massive, stubborn iron doors, leaving Grimes and the rest of the vanguard to desperately hold off the invading horde, while the panicked mages put all their strength into forcing the heavy mechanism open. This heavy iron doors finally creak open, allowing the panicked party to quickly scramble inside, while the vicious gnolls desperately try to squeeze through the narrowing gap behind them, prompting Reese to fire a well-aimed explosive shot directly at the stone archway, which triggers a massive collapse of heavy rubble that completely seals the entrance. Catching their breath in the dark chamber, the exhausted mercenaries realize they are completely trapped, but Catherine quickly reassures them that they never intended to leave through the front door anyway, instantly triggering a wave of panic as Grimes realizes they are locked inside a mage's tower, leading the furious mercenary to aggressively demand if this was a deliberate trap all along. Catherine desperately explains that the Academy only studied harmless things like food, not dangerous magic, though Sutton remains highly skeptical, wondering if they are hiding the truth about a forbidden spell. Catherine reassures Haver they have a tower access token and an emergency escape portal stone to get out. But Rosalie quickly reminds them that they still have to survive the deadly thorn bears and traps, which only prompts Haver to laughingly dismiss her warnings as they prepare to face the unknown, while the rest of the greedy mercenaries eagerly fantasize about the legendary loot and magical artifacts ahead, leading our cynical hero to dryly suggest they go first if they are so eager to die, before Haver asks if he is truly prepared to walk straight into an obvious death trap, prompting Rosalie to quietly admit that she is only here to find a way out of this miserable life, as the giant warrior smugly smiles under his hat while dreaming of a peaceful, wealthy retirement, though Rosalie still wonders why Sutton is risking everything instead of staying safe back at his quiet farm, leaving our broken hero to coldly reply that he has absolutely nothing left to protect anymore. Rosalie calls out Sutton's fear of losing what little he has left, while their clueless leader suddenly halts the group as they enter a massive, breathtaking chamber revealing an incredibly vast, multi-tiered library that stretches deep into the dark abyss below, where Catherine points out their true destination, a hidden laboratory located just one level down, though the greedy mercenaries quickly dismiss looting the library due to rumors of ancient traps, until Reese suddenly freezes in his tracks, hearing an ominous sound echoing through the dusty air. which Haver's growling wolf immediately senses as well, putting the entire party on high alert, prompting the terrified ranger to scream at everyone to run for their lives. But his desperate warning comes far too late as a massive shadow looms over them, before a monstrous white-furred thorn bear crashes down to block their only path of escape. This group freezes in absolute terror as Haver grimly identifies the massive, white-furred beast blocking their path, while Grimes furiously points toward the portal stone, realizing they have no choice but to fight through, prompting their cowardly leader to suggest a slow retreat as the monster sniffs the air, only for the massive beast to suddenly launch a deadly barrage of razor-sharp stone spikes, forcing Reese to quickly summon a glowing magic shield to deflect the incoming projectiles, though the chaotic volley still manages to strike several mercenaries who fail to dodge in time, piercing through their armor and leaving the disorganized vanguard screaming in sudden agony. Before one of Haver's loyal wolves is struck down, sending the giant warrior into a panic, Catherine frantically warns the injured men that the spikes are coated in a deadly toxin, as Sutton calmly steps forward to effortlessly slice a flying projectile right out of the air. This deflected spikes bounce harmlessly off the massive thorn bear's thick, armored hide, as an overconfident mercenary leaps from above to deliver a taste of its own medicine, only for his dual blades to clank uselessly against the beast's impenetrable fur, before the furious monster unleashes a deafening roar and flings him away like a ragdoll, sending the screaming warrior crashing violently into the towering wooden bookshelves behind them, which only prompts a sighing Sutton to mock their sheer stupidity as the others struggle. While Grimes aggressively demands that their magic user hurry up and cast a spell, prompting the arrogant mercenary to charge headfirst into the fray to do the heavy lifting himself, just to be instantly swatted aside alongside his companions by a single devastating swipe, leaving a desperate Reese to draw his bow and prepare a crucial cover shot. Reese's glowing arrows rain down on the massive thorn bear, piercing its thick hide, prompting the ranger to warn Rosalie that they must protect Hopper's devastating charge-up attack, though she remains highly skeptical as the rest of the vanguard scrambles to pin the beast down, allowing Grimes to deliver a fiery slash directly to the monster's leg to keep it anchored, while Rosalie leaps onto its massive back to drive her blade deep into its neck, which only makes the roaring beast thrash violently in a desperate bid to shake them off, sending the agile warrior crashing hard onto the stone floor as she loses her grip. But this sacrifice buys Hopper just enough time to fully charge his devastating fire magic, before the veteran warrior unleashes a massive, explosive slash that completely engulfs the howling monster. Hopper quickly warns the party that the beast is only stunned, urging them to run while he finishes it. Haver pulls a hesitant Rosalie away, reassuring her that their royal knight companion has everything under control, while Hopper stands confidently atop the stunned, massive beast to prepare his final, devastating blow, muttering that finishing off this monster is far easier when there are no witnesses around, before he channels a massive surge of fiery magic directly into the creature's thick hide, unleashing a blinding explosion of flames that completely incinerates the howling beast in an instant. Smelling the burnt remains, Haver makes a dark joke while Rosalie remains deeply shaken by the encounter, prompting her to angrily declare that no amount of treasure is worth risking their lives for, which immediately draws a furious glare from their desperate leader who refuses to back down, leading Rosalie to toss her weapon aside and threaten to blast her own way out of this nightmare. Reese coldly blocks her escape while Catherine desperately uses rare angel flowers to treat their poisoned companions. Grimes tries to act tough, but Rosalie suddenly collapses to the ground in agonizing pain, prompting Sutton to watch silently as the desperate mercenary frantically calls out for help, only for Catherine to smugly announce that they are completely out of the life-saving potion, which immediately sends Grimes into a blind rage as he threatens her with his wolves. Though the arrogant mage merely smiles and dares him to make a move, Haver suddenly interrupts the tense standoff to warn them that more monsters are heading their way, leaving the terrified mercenaries to curse whoever claimed these beasts would be easy to defeat, prompting Haver to dryly remind them that their clueless leader was the one who promised safety, before the giant warrior urges the bickering group to keep moving before they get cornered. Yet a furious Grimes refuses to take another step until Catherine hands over the hidden medicine. Rosalie stands her ground and furiously reiterates that she is completely done with this suicide mission, while Grimes tries to rally Haver to stop Catherine from wasting any more precious time, but an impatient older mercenary ignores the bickering and steps directly onto a hidden pressure plate, instantly triggering a deadly mechanism that catches Rosalie completely off guard as she turns around, as a sudden, pitch-black blade of shadow violently slices her head clean off her shoulders, sending Haver into a state of absolute shock as he watches his companion die instantly, while her lifeless body crashes heavily onto the cold stone floor before the horrified group. Catherine frantically realizes they have triggered a lethal trap and desperately asks if anyone else is hurt, leaving a devastated Haver to drop to his knees in utter despair over Rosalie's sudden demise, while the careless mercenary who triggered the trap can only offer a pathetic, awkward apology. This cowardly leader shrugs off the tragic death with a fake sigh of disappointment, but Sutton quickly halts their progress to demand a thorough sweep for hidden traps, prompting a grieving Haver to furiously blame our hero for not using his power to save her, which only earns him a cold, sharp warning from Sutton to watch his tone, before their useless leader tries to intervene, only for Haver to completely abandon the quest, leaving Catherine to smugly remind the broken warrior that there is no turning back now. as the remaining mercenaries nervously scan the massive library for any more hidden magical threats, forcing Reese to channel his magic to search for danger, only to detect absolutely nothing, only to fuel Haver's rage as he openly insults the Rangers' pathetic tracking skills. Until the giant warrior catches Catherine looting their dead companion under the guise of standard protocol. A bitter Grimes mutters to Haver about how disgusting it is that the others do not care, but the giant warrior quickly points out that Grimes tried to kill her himself not long ago, prompting the defensive mercenary to argue that they are all just disposable fodder for the Academy's elite, before he questions why Haver is acting so cold when he seemed so close to her, leaving the secret mage to silently admit that he never wanted her to die like this as he reflects on how a complete disregard for human life eventually drives a person mad. While Sutton watches them from the shadows, sensing a far greater threat lurking within the ancient library. Desperate for revenge, Grimes tries to push Haver into action, but the warrior refuses to strike without proof, since slaughtering their employers based on a mere hunch would only make them mindless beasts themselves, until the furious mercenary aggressively reminds him of their deal and the leverage he still holds over him. Their clueless leader orders the group to pick up the pace as they approach the portal stone, prompting Grimes to suggest that he and Haver should lead the vanguard together to speed things up, only for their smug employer to insist on keeping Haver at the rear for protection, which immediately warns Grimes that they are trying to split them up to eliminate them one by one, forcing the tense group to continue their cautious march through the eerie, silent library, until Catherine mockingly asks Haver if he has any hard feelings about Rosalie's sudden death, leading the disgusted warrior to quietly ask a veteran mercenary if she is always this insufferable, before Haver tries to dig for information about how long this shady crew has worked together. But the grumpy veteran quickly dismisses him right before a terrifying click echoes beneath his boot, as a sudden beam of magical energy pierces his skull before he can even finish his apology. Hopper's lifeless body crashes heavily to the floor after the sudden trap takes him out, leaving the remaining mercenaries sweating in sheer panic as they realize how close they are to death, while a furious Grimes rushes to his fallen comrade, accusing their employers of setting them up. But their cold-hearted leader simply shrugs it off, ordering the group to keep moving forward. Catherine merely sneers at their grief, taking sick pleasure in watching the mercenaries suffer, until Reese suddenly cuts in to warn Grimes that more monsters are rapidly closing in, estimating they have less than 2 minutes before a pack of deadly thorn bears arrives. Though Reese quickly corrects himself, realizing there are actually 8 beasts hunting them down. This terrifying revelation forces the panicked group to sprint ahead, leaving Haver at the rear, prompting a suspicious Sutton to realize their employers must know a safe path through the traps. This group finally reaches a massive, red-carpeted hall containing the ancient treasure they have been searching for, prompting their greedy leader and Catherine to immediately start searching the surrounding rooms for valuable loot, only for a pack of ferocious, white-furred thorn bears to suddenly ambush them from the shadows, as the panic leader spots their target and frantically orders his inner circle to grab it, leaving a cynical Sutton to realize that they are being set up as disposable bait, which is confirmed when Catherine snatches the artifact and immediately sprints toward the exit, while their cowardly employer screams for her to open the portal while ordering the vanguard to fight, allowing Sutton to watch in silent disgust as their selfish bosses make a run for it. One furious mercenary refuses to be left behind as distraction fodder and dashes after the fleeing elites, only for a sudden barrage of stone spikes to block his path and trap him with the beasts. Grimes decides to betray everyone, preparing a massive fire spell to wipe out the beasts and take the portal stone, but his magic suddenly fizzles out in his palm, leaving the mercenary completely stunned, while Catherine inserts the keystone into the pedestal to activate their escape route, opening a glowing portal as she frantically urges her inner circle to step through, leaving a horrified Grimes to realize that his magical power has been completely sealed, as even Reese's glowing arrows bounce harmlessly off the thick hides of the approaching monsters, forcing the panicked ranger to watch helplessly as their employers abandon them to die, only for the trapped vanguard to realize the Academy elites have locked down all external mana, prompting a desperate mercenary to leap forward and rely on raw physical strength alone, drawing his twin blades in a final suicidal bid to carve a path through the beasts. Grimes crashes to the ground as the ferocious thorn bears close in on the helpless vanguard, while their treacherous employers mock their impending demise before stepping toward the escape portal, announcing that their next destination is Sutton Farm to pay a visit to John's girlfriend, which immediately sends a jolt of pure panic and rage through our hidden hero as the smug leader reveals their ultimate plan to eliminate the young witch living there. Reese desperately hurls a dagger at the fleeing cowards in a final attempt to stop them, but the arrogant boss effortlessly deflects the blade with a mocking laugh, before the elites vanish through the glowing gateway, leaving the mercenaries to their fate, forcing a desperate Sutton to realize he must somehow survive this onslaught to save Ellie. Meanwhile, a peaceful day unfolds back at the farm as Thomas quietly tends to the animals. Thomas compares a stubborn bull to John, noting how both always chase what they want, while a chaotic rooster relentlessly chases young Ben across the farmyard for a sack of feed, leaving Ellie to stare into the distance as she quietly fears her lover might never return, prompting Thomas to gently reassure her that John simply needed to stretch his legs, though the seasoned farmhand quickly notices that she is actually worried sick about him, leading him to kindly insist that she take the rest of the day off to rest, knowing exactly how to handle her anxious nature thanks to a few tips from John, before a friendly cow slobbers all over his face to break the heavy tension. Thomas soon heads off to town with a wagon full of cheese for their deliveries, leaving a deeply troubled Ellie alone with her thoughts as the looming threat draws closer. A sudden knock on the front door breaks the tense silence of the farmhouse, sending a surge of hope through Ellie as she eagerly calls out for her lover only to brace herself against the table as she prepares for whatever news awaits her. Before she swings the door open, only to find several unfamiliar silhouettes looming on the porch, revealing the surviving mercenaries who have somehow made it back from the deadly library, prompting a guarded Ellie to immediately demand the whereabouts of both John and Thomas, which the yellow scarf mercenary quickly brushes off with a fake smile as he steps forward, claiming that John promised they would all celebrate the end of their quest together. While they spin a ridiculous story about John taking a shortcut home because he missed her, leading Ellie to point out their missing companion, only to receive a chillingly casual excuse about his death. Ellie demands to know how they can be so sure that nothing bad happened to John, but the shady mercenaries quickly deflect by asking to wait inside so he can get his cut, prompting a deeply suspicious Ellie to reluctantly invite them in while planning to keep young Ben safe. Before she awkwardly apologizes for the lack of seating as the uninvited guests make themselves comfortable. Glancing out the window at the playing child, she desperately tries to buy time by offering some tea, while offering to slice some of her popular homemade cheese to keep the tense atmosphere calm, only for the yellow scarf mercenary to chillingly remind her that they are still waiting on one more. This ominous warning leaves Ellie praying for Thomas to return quickly from his trip to town, as she nervously prepares the refreshments and asks what they were actually searching for out there, until the cautious leader quickly silences a loose-lipped Grimes before he can reveal their true intentions. Catherine casually slides a locked wooden chest across the table, calling it a mere trinket, but a bewildered Ellie quickly shakes her head, claiming she has never seen it before, prompting the smug mercenary to reveal that the box contains everything needed to become a mage, though Ellie immediately rejects the bait, stating she wants absolutely nothing to do with magic. Undeterred, Catherine leans in closer to pry for information about other forbidden spells in the area, until a sudden heavy knock at the front door abruptly cuts their tense conversation short, revealing their ruthless boss standing on the threshold with a chilling grin on his face, which sends a cold shiver down Ellie's spine as she recognizes the dangerous man instantly. This remaining mercenaries celebrate his arrival, completely ignoring the young woman's growing terror, before Catherine proudly hands over the stolen magical artifact to secure their final payout. Ellie realizes this entire visit was a setup by Jonas, dropping her cup as she demands to know where John is, but the arrogant boss merely mocks her devotion before reaching out to grab her, prompting the furious young woman to deliver a sharp slap right across his face, before she quickly grabs a kitchen knife to defend herself against the encroaching intruders. Jonas remains completely unfazed by her weapon, warning her to think twice before making a move, as he unleashes a sinister spell while reminding her that young Ben is still in danger, which immediately manifests as a burst of dark magic that drags the terrified boy away, forcing a panicked Ellie to rush forward in a desperate attempt to save him. Catherine suddenly steps in and delivers a brutal punch to the gut to stop her cold, leaving the helpless young woman to collapse onto the floor in absolute agony. Ellie trembles on the floor, demanding to know what this terrifying intruder wants from her, but Jonas merely grabs her chin and coldly demands her hidden magical power, prompting the defiant young woman to spit directly in his face to show her disgust, which only makes the villain smile as his dark magic begins to flare up, though Ellie quickly slaps his hand away and desperately tries to reach her brother, unleashing a sudden burst of her own green magic while screaming for them to let Ben go, just as Thomas finally returns to the cabin and demands to know what is happening, leading a terrified Ben to scream that these intruders are trying to kidnap his sister, before the brave farmhand draws his sword, declaring they must go through him and his bull, while their chaotic farm rooster also steps up to join the fight against the intruders. Thomas stands defiantly at the cabin door, ready to defend Ellie against the intruders, but the arrogant mercenaries only burst into mocking laughter at his brave standoff, while Jonas cracks his knuckles with a sinister grin, eager to crush the stubborn farmhand. Meanwhile, back in the ancient ruins, Sutton desperately fights for his life against the ferocious beast, slicing through the monsters with his twin blades in a frantic bid to survive, before delivering a heavy physical blow that temporarily knocks one of the creatures back. Grimes watches the struggle from the floor, reminding him that 6 more beasts are still closing in, prompting Sutton to yell back that magic is sealed while desperately trying to reach Ellie, though the fallen mercenary warns him to find the source of the seal before they are overwhelmed, forcing the determined hero to leap back into the fray while demanding his ally get up and help. Sutton slashes desperately at the ferocious thorn bears, his twin blades sparking against their stone-hard hides, but the sheer size of the beasts makes this a painfully slow and dangerous struggle as a burning rage consumes him at the thought of those cowards reaching Ellie first, prompting the desperate hero to swear he will slaughter anyone who dares to touch her, only for a massive shockwave to blast him backward while a hopeless Grimes watches in despair. Suddenly, the furious monsters unleash a deadly barrage of sharp stone spikes across the chamber, forcing the helpless mercenary to duck for cover while cursing his terrible luck, until Sutton miraculously catches one of the flying projectiles right out of the air, before launching himself back into the fray to drive the stone spike deep into his target. Just then, a glowing golden tile clicks beneath the monster's heavy foot, revealing a hidden puzzle piece. Sutton notices more glowing tiles appearing on the floor while Grimes watches from the sidelines, prompting the injured mercenary to yell out that they must activate 3 of these golden stones, which forces our hero to desperately hold back a roaring beast with his twin blades. Before Grimes whistles to send his loyal wolf companion dashing straight into the chaotic fray, allowing Sutton to leap high into the air to bypass the remaining monsters, landing a devastating downward strike that crushes the skull of his target, only to realize another tile has clicked into place with just one final stone remaining. But a massive beast suddenly ambushes him from behind and traps him in a deadly grip, leaving a grumbling Grimes to stumble toward the last golden tile to finish the job himself. As a ferocious monster lunges directly at him to cut his desperate run short, Grimes barely dodges a lethal swipe from the massive beast as it lunges at him, but his loyal wolf quickly drags him across the floor toward the final glowing tile, allowing the injured mercenary to slam his hand down and activate the final mechanism, which triggers a massive rumbling throughout the ancient chamber as the seal begins to shift, sending a colossal stone monolith crashing down from the ceiling on heavy iron chains. Sutton looks up with a confident smirk, realizing exactly what needs to be done next before he leaps high into the air to unleash a powerful flaming slash at the target, unleashing a massive explosion that shatters the giant stone block into a million pieces. As debris rains down while our hero lands gracefully amidst the chaotic destruction, just as a blinding beam of light erupts to signal that the magic seal is finally broken, Sutton's eyes glow with a fierce light as his sealed magical powers finally surge back, unleashing a massive pillar of roaring fire that wraps around him in a blinding display, leaving the ferocious thorn bears to growl in sudden hesitation at this terrifying new threat. Before our hero coldly promises to slaughter every single monster standing in his way, as he swings his blazing blades to easily slice through their stone-hard hides, with one strike triggering an ominous system notification that warns the apocalypse is now drawing one step closer, while a completely stunned Grimes watches the legendary Mage stand amidst the raging inferno. Trembling in disbelief, the injured mercenary finally recognizes Sutton as the mythical Eternal Flame, prompting the unstoppable hero to charge straight toward the screeching beast with a concentrated fireball, which unleashes a massive explosion that completely vaporizes the remaining monsters in a blinding flash. Sutton stands atop a defeated monster, unleashing a fiery blast to ensure none of them escape, before he charges up a massive fireball to wipe out the remaining beasts once and for all, unleashing a devastating explosion that triggers yet another ominous warning about the impending apocalypse. As our hero slowly approaches the fallen mercenary while reassuring his protective wolf companion, who gently licks his dying master's face as Sutton looks down in grim contemplation, realizing that Grimes is barely breathing and has absolutely no chance of surviving his wounds, which prompts the cold mage to briefly consider putting the traitor out of his misery, only to turn away and let the loyal beast spend its final moments with its master. Desperate to escape, Sutton blasts the blocked exit only to find the path completely caved in, leaving the grieving wolf to whimper over Grimes as their time quickly runs out. Sutton senses a sudden surge of energy, wondering if another explosive trap is about to detonate, only to watch in horror as the loyal wolf begins to dissolve into a cloud of dark smoke, sending a massive shockwave that knocks the injured mercenary flat on his back, as the fading spirit of his beloved companion vanishes into the cold air forever. Devastated by the loss, Grimes looks up to find the legendary Mage standing completely unharmed, prompting the terrified traitor to beg for mercy since all the monsters are already dead, but Sutton merely steps forward, threatening to scatter his ashes if he cannot justify his life, which forces a desperate Grimes to ramble about his childhood dream of becoming a noble knight, as the cold mage listens silently while the surrounding flames continue to crackle, triggering a sudden memory of the day his father left him behind to serve the kingdom. Grimes recalls how he watched brave men lose everything and slowly turn into heartless monsters, while Sutton threatens to incinerate him on the spot if anyone ever learns his true identity, prompting the terrified mercenary to raise his hand and swear that his lips are sealed before the legendary Mage unleashes a massive fiery blast to obliterate the collapsed stone wall. As they step through the smoking ruins, Grimes vows to make those treacherous adventurers pay, with Sutton quietly preparing to make his move, determined to rescue Ellie before it is too late. Suddenly, the powerful Mage grabs his injured companion and dives straight down a massive vertical shaft, leaving Grimes to wonder how the wolf's sacrifice managed to completely heal his fatal wounds, which the mercenary explains was a spiritual sacrifice, a rare bond where a beast saves its master, though his expression quickly darkens as he realizes his beloved companion is gone forever. Grimes worries about the massive horde of gnolls blocking their only way out of the ruins, but Sutton merely scoffs at the threat before charging up another devastating blast of fire magic, which completely vaporizes the blocking monsters in a spectacular explosion of heat and light, allowing the duo to finally escape while Grimes mocks his savior's terrible attempt at acting normal. Sutton carries the injured mercenary through the dark forest until Grimes suddenly catches a scent, pointing out that Ellie is nearby but completely separated from the rest of the group, prompting our hero to split up and rescue her while sending his ally to clear the farm. As Grimes unleashes a deafening howl to summon his massive pack of loyal wolves, sending a chilling echo through the trees that startles the birds into the night sky, which leaves even the legendary Mage thoroughly impressed by the sheer scale of his companion's power. Sutton heads off into the dark forest alone, leaving the rest of the cleanup to his ally, while the female mercenary sits beneath a tree, desperately trying to pry open a locked chest. hoping to uncover its secrets before her boss realizes she handed him a useless decoy, unaware that our hero is watching her from the shadows to see if she knows their plans before he suddenly ambushes her from behind, pressing a cold blade directly against her throat, leaving the terrified mercenary completely speechless as she realizes the legendary mage is still alive, though Sutton merely leans in close, coldly explaining that he is on a very tight schedule, which prompts her to desperately beg for mercy, offering him absolutely anything to spare her life. But he only demands to know who hired them and what they want with Ellie, forcing the trembling captive to confess that their mysterious client is just as powerful as him. Sutton coldly presses his blade closer, reminding the trembling mercenary that she still has not answered his question, but she desperately begs him to spare her, offering the locked chest as a key to ultimate magical power, which only makes our hero narrow his eyes in disgust at the mention of her treacherous leader, prompting him to demand Ellie's exact location while she frantically claims she fled the battle early. Though his terrifying, glowing gaze instantly cuts off her excuses before she can even finish her sentence as he coldly points out that lying is completely pointless since her entire squad is already doomed, warning Rosalie that his ally is currently on his way to tear the rest of them to pieces. Until the desperate woman suddenly reaches behind her back to activate a hidden, glowing blue magic stone, screaming in pure frustration about his obsession with Ellie as she unleashes a sudden burst of energy, only for our hero to instantly shut down her desperate ambush with one incredibly swift, blinding slash. A masked mercenary in a cowboy hat appears, recognizing the sound of wind blades as he calls out Rosalie's name. But he quickly dismisses her death, casually spinning a dagger while reflecting on her poor choices before he channels a swirling vortex of fire, warning his cornered target that they should have made a better choice. As he mockingly belittles her weak wind magic while preparing a massive, glowing fireball in his hand, flashing a sinister, confident grin as he boasts about the absolute supremacy of real mages. This arrogant villain looms over the helpless girl, claiming that true mages are far more dangerous than any monster, only to summon multiple blazing fireballs to declare that he has personally slaughtered every mage in his path, leaving the terrified captive to scream in pure horror as the overwhelming heat closes in, until a colossal, blinding explosion erupts to consume the entire forest clearing in a raging inferno, completely incinerating everything in its path as the devastating blast waves ripple through the night. This arrogant mercenary stands over the ashes of his blast, unaware of the massive wolves lurking nearby, but he quickly orders his own pack of ravenous beasts to devour whatever remains of his victims, sending a terrifying wave of predators charging directly toward the quiet farmhouses in the distance, while Grimes leads his massive wolf pack into the fray to hunt down the treacherous survivors, only to stop dead in his tracks at the sight of a giant, bloodthirsty rooster. As a chaotic battle erupts across the fields with flaming beasts and clashing steel, forcing a deadly sword fighter to engage in a brutal duel against a swift, shadowy opponent who unleashes a barrage of dark energy blades to completely overwhelm his defenses, leaving the exhausted warrior to collapse onto the cold dirt as her strength finally fades. Panting heavily, the victorious swordsman turns around only to find Grimes waiting to finish him off. This exhausted defender lies on the ground, desperately asking his opponent for a brief moment to recover, but Grimes merely stares at the bizarre farm animals, completely baffled by the flaming bull and giant rooster, which prompts the defeated swordsman to look up in sheer terror, recognizing the mercenary as Haver, who coldly looms over his trembling target, mockingly questioning if the villain will even survive the night, while the injured farm owner sighs in relief, complaining about how incredibly persistent this enemy was only for Grimes to demand his hard-earned loot, reminding them that the mission is officially complete. But the stubborn swordsman merely sneers through his pain, swearing he will never hand over the payment, before his body suddenly gives out, saving the mercenary the trouble of delivering a final blow as the weary farm owner approaches to ask if the legendary Wolf King has come to kill him, only to receive a shocking warning that the local town leader is actually a powerful necromancer. Realizing he is in over his head, Grimes' sweat drops and nervously makes an excuse to leave, as Sutton suddenly crashes down like a blazing meteor, unleashing a massive pillar of roaring fire, which immediately prompts our hero to demand Ellie's location from the battered defender, who reveals that the necromancer and his archer ally dragged her deep into the woods, leaving the legendary mage to demand why he did not try to stop them, only for the exhausted warrior to point out his severe wounds make movement impossible, prompting our hero to sprint off into the dark forest without wasting another second, while Grimes casually dismisses the danger and prepares to make his own quick exit, forcing the exasperated farmer to groan in disbelief as the mercenaries abandon him. Meanwhile, the arrogant cowboy hat mercenary strolls through the trees, completely unaware that his doom is coming. Sutton ambushes the arrogant mercenary with a sudden, blazing strike that cuts through the dark forest, immediately grabbing the villain by his collar to unleash a relentless barrage of heavy blows, demanding to know where Ellie is before the dazed mercenary can even process the attack, as our hero delivers another devastating punch to shut down any attempt at resistance, leaving the terrified villain gasping for air as the brutal interrogation continues, repeatedly demanding answers while refusing to give his target even a single second to breathe, which prompts the desperate mercenary to frantically beg for a brief moment to speak, only for Sutton to ruthlessly slam him into the dirt with overwhelming force before tossing his battered body high into the air to prepare a final fiery strike, sending the defeated villain crashing back down to the forest floor, completely broken and defeated. This battered mercenary desperately gasps that someone has already taken both Ellie and the young boy. As the cowboy-hatted villain channels a blazing spell to demand their exact locations in the forest, prompting his terrified victim to scream and beg for mercy as the intense heat draws closer. While the ruthless mage merely sneers, telling the traitor that he has brought this upon himself before unleashing a devastating wave of fire that completely incinerates his target in a massive explosion. Meanwhile, the sinister necromancer holds a young boy suspended in a swirling vortex of dark purple magic, only for the captive kid to blow a loud raspberry right in his captor's face, which barely registers to the creepy villain as he opens his spellbook to prepare a new curse. Though the talkative boy continues to mock him, suggesting his sister would hate his ugly face and terrible books. Furious at the relentless insults, the annoyed spellcaster spins his prisoner upside down to finally shut him up. This kid continues to mock his captor, yelling that reading is a total waste of time, which completely baffles the necromancer as the boy proudly boasts about drinking his milk to stay strong before suddenly leaning forward to sink his teeth directly into the villain's outstretched finger, sending the furious spellcaster stumbling back in pain while cursing the stubborn little hostage. But the villain immediately retaliates by unleashing a painful surge of dark magic to shock the helpless kid, leaving Ellie to watch from the shadows, her heart sinking as she hears her brother's agonizing screams, prompting her to abandon all caution and sprint directly into the clearing to save him. Though the sinister necromancer merely smiles at her desperate approach, completely unfazed by her presence as she draws a small dagger and lunges forward with everything she has left, easily catching her wrist as he mockingly reminds her that it is impolite to interrupt his work. This smug necromancer easily catches Ellie's wrist, mockingly pointing out that a single dagger will not save her, but she only smiles back, pulling out a second blade to show him she came prepared, before plunging both weapons directly into his chest to send him screaming in agony, leaving the wounded villain to stumble backward and collapse heavily onto the forest floor. Instead of dying, the creepy spellcaster slowly looks up with a terrifying, blood-curdling grin, casually pulling the daggers from his flesh as dark magic begins to mend his wounds, which prompts him to stand back up, coldly declaring that he will gladly end her life. Only for Ellie to swiftly dodge his desperate, heavy swing as he lunges forward, cleverly sticking her foot out to trip the arrogant villain as he overextends his attack, sending him crashing face-first into the dirt while she mockingly reminds him of his pathetic nature. This creepy necromancer merely sneers, revealing that her little trick did not actually bother him at all as he summons a barrage of dark purple tentacles that instantly wrap around her ankles, hoisting the helpless girl upside down while mockingly asking how it feels to be the prey before he brutally grabs her by the face to channel a surge of dark magic, forcing her to scream in absolute agony as the corrupting energy floods her mind, triggering a sudden, painful memory of a desperate woman begging a cruel mage for food, who coldly threatened to take her meager scraps of bread by force in a burning village, only to suddenly toss the food back down to her with a mocking, sinister laugh, leaving the starving woman to collapse onto her knees in front of her tormentor, clutching the single loaf of bread as tears stream down her face amidst the flames. This cruel mage suddenly slashes at the starving woman, revealing his mercy was just a sick joke as he mockingly dangles the stolen bread over her head while the village burns around them, before the memory abruptly shatters as the tormentor screams in agony from a sudden, lethal blow, returning Ellie to the brutal reality of the necromancer hoisting her upside down with dark magic, while Sutton sprints wildly through the burning forest, reflecting on the lives he just took, swearing that he would gladly slaughter a million more enemies just to bring her back safely, until her distant, agonizing scream echoes through the trees to guide him directly to her location, prompting our furious hero to leap from the shadows with his blazing blade drawn, which completely blindsides the shocked necromancer as a fiery slash severs the dark magic tentacles, leaving Sutton to catch the falling girl while delivering a chilling promise of absolute death. Shielding Ellie from danger, our hero mockingly asks the necromancer if he is ready to die, but the creepy villain merely slams his hand into the ground to summon dark purple energy, unleashing a horde of glowing skeletons that burst from the dirt to surround our hero. While the arrogant spellcaster boasts about how a mere royal knight could never defeat his undead army, Sutton silently curses his luck, realizing he absolutely despises dealing with these slimy, overpowered necromancers, though he hesitates to use his own magic because it might reveal his true identity to Ellie, prompting the smug villain to mockingly challenge him to try cutting through solid bone, as a glowing skeleton lunges forward with a lightning-fast slash of its sharp claw. Reacting instantly, our hero raises his dagger to block the lethal strike with a loud clang, before leaping backward to create some distance as the relentless undead army continues to swarm him. Sutton easily shatters the incoming skeletons with a massive, blazing slash, boasting about his past victories. But the cunning necromancer immediately shifts his focus, trapping the helpless young boy in a magical ribcage which begins to constrict violently, forcing the terrified kid to scream out in absolute agony, prompting our panicked hero to yell in fury as he desperately tries to save the hostage, swiftly lunging forward to deliver a blinding slash directly across the smug villain's face, only for dark, corrupting magic to instantly ooze from the deep wound instead of blood, as the creepy spellcaster completely regenerates, mockingly asking if that weak strike was his absolute best. Hearing the young boy's bones crack under the pressure, Sutton completely loses his cool, unleashing a frantic flurry of rapid, desperate sword strikes to overwhelm the immortal monster who merely smiles through the onslaught, effortlessly preparing a counterattack while calling our hero utterly pathetic. This creepy necromancer blasts the young boy backward with a violent shockwave of dark magic, sending the poor kid crashing heavily against a nearby tree trunk as Ellie watches in horror, which prompts the cowardly villain to immediately turn and flee deeper into the dark forest, forcing the desperate girl to sprint after him while brandishing her small dagger in absolute fury. Sutton desperately yells for her to stop, knowing she is running straight into a deadly trap. As a barrage of sharp, dark magical spikes suddenly erupts from the ground to pin her, leaving her completely paralyzed, while the smug spellcaster mockingly warns her not to make a single move, only for our hero to suddenly ambush the villain from behind with a blazing, high-speed strike. Caught completely off guard, the creepy necromancer turns around to find a glowing fireball aimed at his face, while Sutton coldly promises to incinerate him if he dares to take another step. Ellie stares in absolute shock as she finally realizes our hero's true identity, while the creepy necromancer smugly finishes her sentence by calling him a powerful mage, boasting that he has been waiting forever for John Sutton to finally reveal himself, only for our hero to instantly blast him with a blazing fireball to shut him up, though the sinister villain merely laughs off the intense heat with a creepy, confident, revealing that he is already undead as a glowing skeleton bursts directly from his chest, which immediately lunges forward to strike down our hero while the necromancer watches from behind, prompting Sutton to effortlessly shatter the incoming monster with a single brutal kick, before he hurls the glowing skull right back at his smug opponent with lethal force, sending the shocked villain flying backward as the explosive projectile detonates directly in his face. This necromancer quickly summons another skeleton to his side, trying to buy himself some time, while channeling a surge of dark purple energy to fully restore his damaged body, letting out a satisfied sigh as he smugly prepares to face our hero once again, which only infuriates Sutton, prompting him to lunge forward with a massive blazing sword strike, engulfing the creepy villain in a violent explosion of fire that lights up the entire forest. Though the burning monster merely laughs, shouting to Ellie that this brutal mage is her true savior, leaving the terrified girl to stare in absolute disbelief as she finally learns John's dark secret. Holding a glowing purple crystal, the smug necromancer boasts that they are actually two of a kind, but our hero coldly tells him to shut up while charging another devastating spell in his hand, only for the villain to mockingly warn him that his magic is completely useless against this new trap. A massive purple magic circle suddenly erupts beneath our hero, completely binding his movements, leaving Ellie to scream out in horror as she watches him get trapped in the barrier, while the smug necromancer boasts about successfully sealing his mana to render him completely powerless. Sutton realizes he could carefully disarm the trap, but a single mistake might trigger a massive explosion, so he decides to bypass the lock entirely by forcing his way out with raw, blazing power, which prompts the desperate villain to lunge forward with a sharp, magical claw strike to finish him. Suddenly, a terrifying system notification flashes to warn Sutton that the apocalypse is drawing closer, as multiple doom points rapidly stack up to push the dangerous counter to 81%, forcing our burning hero to ignore the warning and unleash his full destructive power anyway, even as Ellie desperately begs him to stop before his raging flames consume her little brother. This crazy necromancer laughs hysterically, mockingly mimicking Ellie's desperate pleas to spare her brother, while another doom point stacks up as Sutton's raging flames threaten to consume everything, forcing our exhausted hero to his knees as the villain gloats about defeating the legendary Eternal Flame, but Sutton ignores his own pain to quickly pull Ellie back from the danger, leaving the shocked girl to realize the terrifying truth behind her savior's real identity, prompting her to violently shove him away in a sudden wave of fear and betrayal, which only amuses the smug necromancer as he mocks Sutton's pathetic attempt at playing farmer. Suddenly, the creepy spellcaster pulls out a glowing red crystal to channel his next attack, taunting John for relying on a single fireball spell to survive all his battles, before unleashing a brutal magical strike that leaves our hero gasping in sudden pain. This smug necromancer gloats to Ellie that the curse will eventually stop Sutton's heart, while our weakened hero realizes he cannot access his full mana without destroying everything around them, leaving a heartbroken Ellie to demand the truth about his identity as he desperately reaches out, only for the cackling villain to confirm her worst fears about the monster in her home, as her little brother screams in absolute agony from the constricting dark magic, before the poor kid collapses heavily onto the dirt while the cruel spellcaster mockingly looks down, unleashing another violent wave of purple energy that easily pushes our weakened heroes back, which allows the arrogant necromancer to casually summon a massive throne made of solid bone sitting smugly upon his skulls while claiming he is not the real monster destroying lives here, forcing a desperate Ellie to weep over her unconscious brother while the villain watches from the shadows. This creepy necromancer sneers with glowing purple eyes, boasting that he is far superior to anyone else, prompting Sutton to stomp forward with his dagger drawn, refusing to let the villain speak another word, as our furious hero lunges forward with a desperate strike to end this nightmare once and for all, only for his blade to clash violently against the villain's bare arm with a loud metallic clang. Sutton stares in absolute disbelief, wondering if this monster's body is somehow made of solid steel, while the smug spellcaster boasts about reinforcing his bones with the stolen mana of his helpless victims before unleashing a massive shockwave of purple energy that violently blasts our weakened hero backward, leaving Sutton to crash heavily against a tree while the villain gloats about the power of necromancy. Swiftly tossing his bag aside to prepare another devastating spell from his master's book, instantly summoning a horde of skeletal hands to drag another corpse down into the dark dirt. This necromancer's dark magic fuses the corpses of Sutton's old friends into a horrific, towering abomination, which quickly solidifies into a massive bone giant that completely dwarfs our shocked hero in the forest, as the smug villain mockingly asks the monster if it agrees with his cruel plan, prompting the fused head of Rosalie to stutter out a chilling greeting to her former friend. Sutton stares in absolute horror as the necromancer gleefully offers to let them catch up, before the massive undead giant swings its colossal arm down to crush our paralyzed hero, unleashing a devastating shockwave that violently blasts Sutton straight through the thick forest trees, leaving him to crash heavily onto the hard dirt while wooden debris rains down around him. This terrifying monster looms over him, with Rosalie's weeping head demanding to know why he let her die, forcing our devastated hero to scream in denial as another brutal strike explodes directly in his face. This massive bone giant swings its colossal arm, sending Sutton flying backward with a devastating blow, as our hero crashes violently through the trees while Ellie screams out his name in absolute terror. But the creepy necromancer quickly corners her, whispering poison about how John lied to her for years, leaving the overwhelmed girl completely speechless as she struggles to process the villain's manipulative words, while the smug spellcaster tries to seduce her into joining him to restore magic to the world, leaning in close to touch her face while calling her a goddess instead of a mere witch, prompting tears to stream down Ellie's face as she seemingly surrenders to his creepy advances, only for her eyes to suddenly flash with a dangerous, glowing green light as she asks a chilling question, unleashing a massive wave of emerald energy to reveal that she actually curses anyone who crosses her, which instantly binds the terrified necromancer in a deadly curse for foolishly eating food from her home. Jonas gasps in absolute horror as the green curse violently surges through his veins, struggling to maintain his grip on power while claiming the entire town belongs to him, as his body begins to crack apart despite his desperate boasts of defeating the eternal flame, prompting Ellie to coldly explain that a witch can easily turn an enemy's mana into deadly poison, leaving the pathetic villain to beg for mercy by falsely confessing his love for her only for the furious girl to stomp her foot and bid him a final, hateful goodbye. Meanwhile, Sutton desperately tries to defend himself against the colossal bone giant representing his fallen friend, when a sudden wave of emerald energy erupts to disrupt the entire battlefield, causing the terrifying abomination to instantly dissolve into dust as the necromancer's spell completely shatters, allowing our hero to finally reclaim his blazing mana before rushing off to find Ellie. Sutton sprints through the dark forest, screaming in absolute fury at the dissolving villain, only to watch the necromancer burn as another doom point pushes the world closer to destruction, forcing our hero to quickly rush over to Ellie's side as green magic swirls around her, cradling her limp body in his arms while desperately wondering what kind of curse she unleashed, just as her little brother slowly begins to stir on the cold dirt nearby, weakly calling out for his sister as he sits up to find Sutton holding her, prompting the terrified boy to scramble over and desperately shake her unresponsive shoulders, crying out in absolute panic as he begs his beloved sister to open her eyes. Our hero watches the heartbreaking scene in silence, realizing he has no idea how to reverse this magic, before he gently comforts the boy and tells him to run back to the farm for help. Sniffling back his tears, the terrified boy nods and promises to run for help, before sprinting off into the dark woods while Sutton stays behind with the unconscious girl, as our frustrated hero stomps his foot in absolute despair, shattering the stone beneath him, realizing his hands are only meant for destruction rather than saving the people he loves. To make matters worse, he just killed the only actual healer for miles around, leaving him to desperately cradle her limp body while wondering why death constantly follows him, even though he would gladly trade his own soul in a heartbeat to save her life. Sutton forces himself to calm down and focus, desperately racking his brain for any solution until he notices a corrosive green mana leaking from her body and slowly poisoning her, which is incredibly bizarre since she does not even hold a class to harness magic. Sutton realizes he might be able to draw the poison out of Ellie's body, but a single mistake during this delicate process could easily end up killing them both, prompting our desperate hero to gently channel his warm flames while praying for a miracle, while Ellie's terrified little brother sprints through the dark fields toward their family farmhouse. Inside the cabin, a heavily bandaged Thomas sits alone at the table to rest, only for the front door to suddenly slam open as Ben bursts inside screaming, leaving the startled man to quickly stand up and ask the boy what happened, before the sobbing child throws himself into Thomas's arms for a desperate hug. Thomas immediately grips the boy's shoulders, frantically demanding to know where Ellie is, which only leaves the traumatized kid staring back in absolute silence as tears fill his eyes. Ben desperately tugs on Thomas's arm, sobbing that Ellie looked completely lifeless back in the woods, but the heavily bandaged man suddenly collapses to the floor as his severe injuries flare up, forcing Thomas to admit that dragging his broken body along will only slow the boy down, though he finds it incredibly strange that the legendary hero actually asked them for help, prompting him to flash a reassuring smile to calm the terrified child's racing heart as he sits back down and explains that John always works best alone anyway. Thomas suggests they wait patiently in the cabin, though Ben still looks incredibly worried, promising the boy that his beloved sister will walk through that front door any minute now. Meanwhile, Sutton unleashes a massive vortex of blazing fire to purge the toxic green curse, focusing his raw, burning mana into his hands to desperately save the dying girl. Sutton's intense flames wrap around Ellie's body, burning away the toxic green curse threatening her life, shattering the residual dark magic into harmless fragments as his precise control saves her from the brink, leaving the exhausted girl to lie peacefully in the dirt as the dangerous magical energy finally dissipates, until her eyes slowly flutter open, revealing her natural green gaze as she weakly tries to speak. Our weary hero immediately leans in to check on her, prompting her to whisper his real name in utter confusion, though the massive strain of the healing process suddenly forces our exhausted hero to groan in pain, before he gently pulls her clothes and promises to get her back to the safety of their home, carrying her limp body through the dark, quiet woods while the long, terrifying night finally comes to an end. This next morning, sunlight washes over the peaceful farmhouse as the nightmare of the previous night fades away, revealing Sutton quietly cooking breakfast in the kitchen, trying to find some normalcy after surviving such absolute chaos. Sutton slides some freshly cooked eggs onto a plate, trying to bring some peace back to the kitchen, while Thomas digs in and jokingly asks if he finally learned his lesson about taking random missions, only for our hero to remain completely serious, pointing out that Ellie and her brother almost died before placing a heavy hand on his friend's shoulder to remind him that he almost died too. Thomas shrugs it off, claiming he knew exactly what he was getting into as a simple farmhand, explaining that while a soldier can easily choose to retire from the physical battlefield, this true war is something that always remains locked deep inside their scarred souls, prompting him to sincerely thank our weary hero for keeping everyone safe during the chaos. He even adds a dry joke about not burying dead bodies right next to the vegetable garden, asking if Sutton will finally return to the capital, only for our hero to reject it forever. Sutton coldly declares that the legendary Eternal Flame is dead, instructing his friend to spread the word, prompting Thomas to ask what he plans on telling Ellie once she finally wakes up, which only makes our hero turn back with a heavy heart to promise her the absolute truth. Suddenly, a dark memory flashes back to a young girl holding a sword amidst a burning village as a ruthless hunter pulls the trigger of his crossbow to end her life, sending a deadly bolt flying past her face to narrowly slice through her hair, while the smug assassin smiles from the shadows and promises that his next shot will not miss, mockingly pointing out that she can barely even lift that heavy sword in her hands, before he slowly steps forward while the terrified girl collapses onto the burning dirt, leaving the cruel killer to sneer that putting her down is like slaughtering a helpless animal. This cruel hunter tosses a loaf of bread onto the dirt, mockingly offering her a final meal, which prompts the starving girl to desperately crawl forward through the ash and burning debris, clutching the small piece of food as if it were her absolute last lifeline, only for the sadistic killer to instantly swipe it away with his sharp blade. He smugly laughs that hunting her kind has worked up quite an appetite, leaving the terrified child to clasp her hands together and beg for mercy, before the arrogant hunter mockingly tells her to get up and start running. She desperately scrambles away on her hands and knees as he promises a head start, but a sudden surge of glowing green energy violently erupts around his body, revealing that the young witch has already unleashed a deadly curse to seal his fate. This arrogant hunter screams in agony as the green curse takes hold of him, tearing his body apart in a violent explosion of emerald magical energy, until Ellie suddenly snaps awake from the terrifying memory of her childhood trauma, gasping for air as she sits up to find Thomas standing right beside her bed, who quickly rushes over to comfort her while she clutches her aching head in pain, but the traumatized girl immediately recoils, glaring at him with pure suspicion and anger, demanding to know why he is lurking in her room after everything that happened. As Thomas nervously stammers, trying to explain his presence while struggling to find the right words, prompting Ellie's eyes to flash with deadly green mana as she threatens to end his life, only for the guilt-ridden man to close his eyes and quietly accept his grim fate. Ellie's eyes glow with a dangerous green light as she reacts in absolute shock to Sutton's words, while the guilt-ridden hero admits he deserves death but warns that her current state will kill her too, pointing out that her unstable mana is actively poisoning her body, though the stubborn girl refuses to back down, forcing Sutton to desperately plead with her to stop before she completely destroys herself. Exhausted, Ellie gasps as the glowing green energy finally fades from her eyes, allowing our hero to let out a heavy sigh of relief that she did not push herself over the edge, only for the furious girl to point an accusing finger and demand to know why he hid his identity, which prompts Sutton to counter that she never mentioned being a witch either, though she claims she is only half leaving the confused man to ask how that is possible as she explains her grandmother's intended inheritance, revealing that the ceremony was violently cut short when the Eternal Flame's devastating attack destroyed her peaceful childhood village. A flashback shows Ellie's grandmother asking how she feels on this monumental day, prompting the young girl to admit she is nervous despite waiting her whole life for this, which only makes the old woman chuckle warmly at her granddaughter's dramatic sense of time, before taking a slow sip from her cup to ease the girl's growing anxiety. Ellie credits her grandmother for her wisdom, though the humble elder insists she had nothing to do with it, leading her toward the barn to finally begin the highly anticipated inheritance ritual, where swirling green magic begins to manifest around the kneeling girl as her grandmother holds a sacred urn, causing Ellie to gasp in pain as the raw power of the curse first touches her soul. Her grandmother gently checks on her while channeling the intense emerald energy from the ancient vessel, leaving the terrified girl to desperately wonder if she even has what it takes to be a witch. Her grandmother gently strokes her hair, warmly reassuring the nervous girl that she will make an incredible witch, before raising the glowing urn to channel the ancient green magic and telling her to close her eyes, which prompts Ellie to smile happily, feeling incredibly proud to be related to the greatest witch around, only for a sudden, devastating explosion of fire to violently tear through the barn and shatter their peaceful ritual. Ellie desperately screams for her grandmother, who lies motionless on the burning floor as flames consume the wooden structure, while the entire building is rapidly engulfed in a roaring inferno caused by the legendary hero's ruthless attack, causing the massive wooden beams overhead to crack and collapse directly toward the trapped, terrified child, until her grandmother uses the very last of her strength to violently shove Ellie out of harm's way, leaving the horrified girl to watch in absolute despair as a heavy wooden pillar crashes onto the old woman, trapping her beneath the burning wreckage, while Ellie desperately tries to pull her free from the blazing ruins. Sutton realizes Ellie's ritual did not actually fail, but was just cut off halfway through, which means she is still technically in the middle of her class ceremony, leaving the stunned girl completely speechless as he offers a highly dangerous fix, using a simple teacup analogy to explain how forcing too much mana destroys a normal body, since a proper ceremony requires a master to temporarily expand the vessel's capacity, allowing the recipient to build their own permanent container to hold that power, whereas a failed ritual usually shatters the vessel and ruins their potential forever. But her grandmother's temporary magic is somehow still keeping her stable inside, meaning if she can find her focus, she can finally complete the class transition, and then she will finally be strong enough to kill him without destroying herself. Ellie looks furious, snapping that she has always had the power to end his life right now, but Sutton casually leans against the window and admits he knew her cheese was poisoned from day one, leaving the stunned girl completely baffled as to why he would willingly eat it anyway, which prompts our smug hero to flick a tiny flame onto his finger with a knowing smile, before telling her that the choice of what to do with her deadly curse is entirely up to her.